Welcome to my channel. If you're looking for an amazing novel, visit my Patreon page. Your support will help turn this story into an exciting audiobook. Join me on this journey. R18 Chapter Notice. I skip all R18 content to follow YouTube's guidelines and avoid getting a strike. Saiyan in Warhammer. Chapter 1. The Call. Beep beep. The alarm bell rings inside the attack capsule, causing the proud warrior inside to wake up, his onyx eyes fluttering open as they adjusted to light after so long. It took a few moments until he was finally able to take the panorama in front of him. The black canvas around the bright planet he calls home, planet Vegeta, with various stars tingling around it while shooting stars seem to approach it. Still somewhat confused by the lethargy of sleep, he slowly remembers the reason why he and his team are returning again. Emperor Frieza has called back the entirety of Saiyan's on mission. The reason for this was beyond his understandings, however he decided that the punishment for not following orders was not worth it. Pita, do you really think it was important to call us all? The mission reward would have been good for me, I hope it's worth it. The voice of his teammate, Reese, reaches his ear. Still keeping his eyes on the planet, observing the faint sparks around it, Pita responds, well, that would have been the last mission you would have taken in a long time if you hadn't answered it. A laugh can be heard over the intercom which Pita recognizes as his other teammate, Latissa. Well, it would have been good for Reese. With how weak he is, he wouldn't have made much difference to the team and maybe he could help his son so that he doesn't follows his father's path. The little one showed more potential than him after all. A mocking laugh echoed after Latissa's words, making him and the rest laugh. Reese could only grumble at this while Pita remembered his little son, who by now should have been born and growing healthily in his incubation pod. I've told her to give him a mighty name so he does aim to come worthy of it. I can only hope he lives up to the expectation. Pita though to himself while clenching his fists. While being born as a low-class Saiyan with a laughable power level, Pita suffered greatly to achieve the power he had today. From being sent to a faraway planet and surviving since childhood and be able to return back as a warrior, to the continuing missions he was sent and forced to survive. He was always being looked down and being laughed from his peers. Yet he always came back from each mission stronger than before and more importantly, with a clear goal on his mind. Thanks to all of that he was able to reach where he stand today, being captain of his own team and with a respectable amount of 2.500 units of battle power. Although still a low-class Saiyan, he could look up with proudness at those who once laughed at him. But such is the Saiyan way. Pita smiled to himself. He had endured and suffered, but he wouldn't change anything if he had the power. It made him who he was today and he only hoped for his son to surpass him. It was his first son after all. Being young himself, he acknowledged that he has a far path ahead of him, but he knows better than no one how working under Frieza could always lead to one demise. And even if I survive Frieza, I'll have to look after my back at home. His smile faded as he gulped down. Those that thrived and became too powerful, were always crushed by King Vegeta himself or his lackeys. It was silently acknowledged among them all that if you dare to surpass certain limit, the king himself would make sure to remind everyone why he was still the king after such a long time. And it was understandable, Pita himself could acknowledge that if he ever has the chance, he would challenge King Vegeta for his position. And he wouldn't be the last one to do it. Yet sometimes he has to wonder himself if this was the right thing to do. Yes, they were a powerful race that was almost unchallenged by everyone else in the universe. But even the king himself has to bow a knee at Frieza and his father. Was this really all they could achieve? Is the strongest among them all really only enough to bow down from a privileged position in front of Frieza? He didn't believe so. Something inside him screamed that they could achieve much more, that the shackles they were put under Frieza could be broken if they want it. But seeing those that could really surpass the expectations imposing to them and be able to groan, were killed before they could achieve something, made Pita doubt that Saiyans could continue this way, and that King Vegeta should be held accountable for holding back so long their rise. His envy and jealousy was too much to be accepted. It was something that he among his other companions shared in common, a wish and a need for something better. With those thoughts in mind and a stern look on his face, he kept watching at the planet as they silently made their way back home. While Pita and his team made their way back home, in planet Vegeta the Saiyans were stir in uncertainty and contemplation. At least for those in a more powerful positions. The team captains such as Pita that were currently on the planet were looking at the hovering ship of Frieza with concern and doubts, while the figures in the palace of King Vegeta were filled with nervousness and anxiety. One of such people was a mid-class warrior and a member of King Vegeta retinue. Kia's Sebe was a veteran warrior that followed King Vegeta since he was just a children. They fought together countless times and when it was time to fight for their race position at the top chain on this planet, he made sure to left everything on battle and thrive for better, which made King Vegeta reward him by being a member of his entourage and one of the few mid-class warrior on the planet. With the position came various benefits that he made sure to enjoy while also showcasing his loyalty to the king when he required so. It was such that led to them being in their current position. They didn't know the reason behind the call made by Frieza, but everyone in the palace was frightful of one thing, that a secret tightly closed in the palace was able to reach the ears of Frieza himself. While the Saiyans fought to being freed from enslavement and a better future for them, during their victory they were able to acquire not only an status that was soon after made known in the entire universe as a fierce and relentless conqueror warrior race, but gain technology they weren't able to grasp their hands before. With it, not only they were able to raise their children with more security, but also gained major improvements in other areas. one of which was genetical engineering, who made them able earlier this year to create and improve the Cybermen, a race that would greatly help them to not only train, but also conquer more planets. However, secretly, King Vegeta also ordered an improvement made for the most promising Chidrans. Blinded by the unsurmountable talent that his firstborn son showcased, he was finally able to let their race aim for greatness, something that could later on made them challenge Frieza and being freed from his claws once again. With his son on the lead, King Vegeta expected a group of elite warriors that could ensure the growth of the Saiyan race and made them uncontested throughout the universe. It was with that in mind that various children were put on direct supervision of Saiyan scientists and engineers while making sure that Frieza heirs wouldn't be able to know about it. Kyasabi's own children were in that program, one of his sons of 3 years that was still in incubation that showed an outstanding potential while having 200 units of power level, and a recently born daughter with more than 286 units of power level. A talent that made Kyasabi extremely proud of both them, and that made them mid-class warriors that would be nurtured to reach the elite under Prince Vegeta's lead. There were in total 26 of those kind of talented children in the program with more or less talent than Kyasabi's kids. Yet they were seen as an invaluable material for the Saiyan race as a whole, and the crown in the jewel for King Vegeta plans for the future. Thus, is what made not only Kyasabi fearful of the current situation, but the king himself. It's been more than 2 weeks now, yet there wasn't any words from the Emperor Frieza nor they answered to our solicitude to a meeting with Sarban. There's something that need to be addressed, Your Majesty. The trembling voice of the current Commander-General of the Saiyan Army, Parental, spread through the throne room. Looking over King Vegeta's dark visage, Kyasabi gulped loudly while waiting for the words of Parental. What if Frieza is finally tired of us? Unlike the hushed voices and whisper when talking about this issue, this time his voice was loud enough in the hall for everyone to hear. With none of the present wearing a scouter, there wasn't any fear for someone hearing what they were saying. Moving their gazes towards their king, they saw him grasping his armrests with strength enough to crush it, yet none of them saw him showing anger. Slowly he got up on his feet and while looking over his subjects he said to them in a plain tone, if that's the case, there's nothing we can do about. But we still haven't reached that point. We are an invaluable asset to his forces. We made him gain much more than enough to prevent from such ideas to reach his head. Kyasabi wasn't able to follow his words anymore, sharing a look with a figure on the other side. He gulped down as he silently acknowledged the situation they were in. His king wasn't able or didn't want to accept the uncomfortable truth. Their hours may be counted and yet they didn't do anything about it. It has to be today. It will be today or never, he assured to himself while thinking of the plan that many shared in whispers. Those 26 kids in the program would be sent to a hiding place, where they would be ordered to remain low for a while in the case that something went wrong with the current circumstances. And if Frieza really decided to get rid of us, then they would be our last hope. Kyasabi though to himself with rage building up inside of him. He was angered at the notion that they were so weak that they have to recur such methods to ensure their survival. He was angered that at the face of extinction, they would wait like lambs for their butcher. Still, he didn't let the anger be showcased on his face. While waiting for the meeting to finish, he forced himself to herd his king's rambling and the other issues arising among their population. He was waiting for time to pass, for the night to come and with it, the start of their plan. Seeing the sunset, Grina sighed deep while walking towards her house. Today her partner Pada would finally arrive and be able to meet their son, Ban. Although she wasn't someone soft nor affectionate, every time she went to see her son she couldn't help but feel a deep connection and overprotective at him. The scientist and the nurturers on the incubation area were pretty much annoying at her requests, yet none voiced out their complaints at her and did all she asked for. Although her son was classified as a low-class Saiyan, just like herself and his father, with a power level of 89 she was sure he was someone that would surpass them both. But most importantly she would make sure he was able to achieve beyond what could she hope for. She heard other mothers and fathers being almost unaltered by the fate of their kids, and she was expecting to be the same. Yet now she was unable to not think about the future of her son and how she could help him in every way she could to ensure his growth. She was thankful for Ban to being born with his battle power, as it was high enough to enable him to live here in planet Vegeta and not being sent to another world. The low percentage of survival was a grim reminder of the fate those children were sent to. Hey Grina, did you went there today too? I thought Pedo was coming back today. Suddenly the voice of her neighbor and teammate, Jinjar, reached her ears. Looking over and smiling at the thought of her son, Grina answered her back with a content look all over her face. He is, but I wasn't able to help myself and have to see Ban too. I know Pedo would understand me, hee. Not minding the current amicable Grina at all, Jinjar smiled hearing her as she was glad for her companion. She changed so much since Ban's birth. She thought to herself while remembering Grina's previous ruthless and snarky self. I'm sure he will. Ban was among the most talented kids at his batch. I'm sure he will be proud of him. Jinjar said back to her as they walked back the bustling road towards their homes. Grina chuckled while hearing Jinjar, as the later was mother of the most exceptional kid among the current batch, and so I am, replied Grina with a sincere smile on her face. Speaking of talented kids, how's Celery doing? At the mention of her recently born daughter, Jinjar could help puff out her chest proudly while a dashing smile adorned her face. They're taking well care of her. Due to her battle power being so high she would be specially nurtured and trained later on. I've even been told she would most likely end up under Prince Vegeta orders. Hearing her words, Grina was surprised and couldn't help but say to her friend with sincere tone, I'm really glad for her, and mostly for you. Both mothers were low-classians, and survived through their lives to know how luck salary was. She would live a life without feeling the scornful remarks and the humiliating looks that people of their race were capable of giving. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to see our children battling together. Make sure Ban grows strong enough. Jinjar cheered at Grina as they continue walking. However, the joyful atmosphere was forcefully interrupted as they looked over the expression of the people around them. Seeing the uncertain looks all over their faces and the apparent nervousness around the people, was able to bring them back to the reality. Lowering various degrees her voice, Jinjar couldn't help but comment to Grina, do you think the rumors are true? Does this legendary Super Saiyan really exist? They were both aware of the rumors that started to sprout around the recent call made by Frieza. Going from a special mission to conquer a planet that needed the whole Saiyan might, to the jarring rumor of a legendary Super Saiyan that was born after 1,000 years. The last one was something that was heard around a lot during the recent times, mostly few to a kid being born with a battle power that allegedly sometimes reached 10,000 units. Although it was later said that was a malfunction of the scouters, no one heard of the kid since the rumor expanded, and with the recent call of Frieza, many started to wonder if it has to do something with it. Grina let out a deep sigh and said to her, I don't know, but if it was anything that other people said, then Frieza could have had informed us with the scouter without needing to call everyone in advance. Jinjar nodded at her words in agreement as they both were aware that something else, and important, may be going on. Reaching their houses, both parted ways while promising to talk tomorrow and share some other news. Grina didn't waste time and started to prepare a sumptuous dinner for Pitta, while humming a song. She wanted her partner in the best mood to deliver the good news that he was most likely expecting to hear. A long night was ahead of her. As the hours passed and night encroached planet Vegeta, 5 different attacking pods could be seen docking at one of the spaceports in the capital city. Pitta and his team finally arrived after more than 25 days traveling from their last mission. With a gut-wrenching hunger, they took their first breath back on their home planet. Not wanting to waste more time, Pitta said loudly to his teammates, tomorrow we'll gather once again at the mission board, try get whatever information you may find. Without waiting for an answer, he leaped into the sky and flew towards his house, leaving behind his group that started chatting among themselves while making their way into the city. Not caring about the different aliens around them that were maintaining their attack pods and doing their job, there's not a single fight. Pitta addressed into his head while observing around the city. It was a normal occurrence to see various people fighting against each other. Seeing none of it deeply concerned Pitta as only one though came to his head. Raising his head, he looked over the bright ship that almost looked like another star in the sky, Frieza. Speeding up, he headed straight towards his house, leaving behind a white trail in the night sky. Lowering his speed and levitating over the rocky house below, a small grin appeared on his face while smelling the enticing scent of meal that reached his nose. Opening the door, he made his way inside as he was able to spot the figure of his partner. Taking his time to enjoy the view, he heard the voice of Grina as she welcomed him. You stink, go take a bath so we can eat at peace. Seeing her turning her head sideways to look after him with grin on her face, he couldn't help but smile at her words as he did as she said this isn't bad, he thought to himself while thinking of the good choice that made his past self for picking her as his partner. Taking of his armor and the black spandex, he didn't waste time and sank into the small pond of water while letting out some of his energy, warming up the water. After reaching the deepest part, he sat while closing his eyes, enjoying the sensation while letting out some thoughts wander through his head. After a couple of minutes he started to rinse off his body while making himself presentable, at least to Grina standards. While he finished his bath and reached for other clothes, he thought to himself, she looked happy, so it's certainly our son live up to the expectations. Seeing him appearing back, Grina sniffed the air as she let him approach the table after no foul smell encroached the kitchen. You look good, that's better since we can go together to see our band tomorrow. She smiled while seeing him sitting on the chair and reaching the first plate of food. Pitta's brows raised up in surprise for the name Ban? Well, is an exotic one, but it does have a punch on it. Seeing him wolfing down the food while nodding his head in approval, Grina added, and he surely must pack a heavy punch. Our son surpassed us both added together when we were his age. Hearing her words, Pitta stopped eating while gulping down what he had on his mouth as he looked over her. Both of us added together? How much was the lecture? Seeing the glint on her partner's eyes, she let out a wide grin as she simply said 89. The calm look of Pitta's face slowly changed into a sincere smile of joy. She continued eating her food as Pitta started to laugh audible while patting the table loudly. Yes, Ban is a fitting name for him. Our son will be a capable warrior, of that I'm sure. After saying that, Pitta continued eating his food joyfully while the grin never left his face. Having been born with only 13 units of battle power and seeing how far he reached, he couldn't help but let his mind wander around at the possibilities that his son could get with his natural talent. Ban might still be a low class, yet Pitta himself was one, while he was also one of the strongest Saiyans on the planet. What made a strong warrior was the effort and battles they went through. A higher talent, in Pitta's opinion, was an easier way up to the top. Thus, with a festive atmosphere in the house, the couple spent the rest of the hours chatting among themselves and sharing the different news on the planet. And with both parents being in a good mood, a sibling for Ban was being made. Seeing the naked figure of Grina sleeping peacefully, Pitta walked towards the backyard of his house wanting to get fresh air. As he bathed himself in the cool air of the night, He looked over the sky and the stagnant bright figures hovering over the planet. While his head was in a whirlwind of thoughts, his eyes catch up 26 different attacking pods breaking through the sky. With a frown on his face he quickly went inside and grabbed his scouter. As he turned it on he moved back to the backyard and looked over the pods. What's this? He thought to himself after seeing the various numbers. 2, 3, 1, 1, 2. Various of such lectures were hovering over the attacking pods, and a simple question passed through Puta's head. Why are they sending so many low-class kids to other planets? It was the first time on his life that he saw such thing. Yet he stayed rooted on his place, seeing in just a couple of seconds the pods disappear leaving behind only a trail. Unease flowed through his body at the sight as a gut feeling encroached his being. Just as he was about to return inside he heard someone sobbing nearby. Flying lightly in the air, he took a look at the location and saw his neighbor Jinjar on her knees as she sobbed alone on her own backyard. Not wanting meet her while being naked he went inside and woke up Grina, narrating her what he saw and her teammate state. After getting dressed both went outside and approached the now wailing Saiyan Jinjar. What's wrong? Grina asked with concern. Hearing the familiar voice, Jinjar looked over her companion and threw herself at Grina while openly sobbing as celery sniff. They sent her away Grina, they just took her and dash. Unable to understand what she was saying after that, Grina tried to soothe over her friend as she looked over with concern at Puta. After a while and helping Jinjar recompose herself, the latter explained to them they called Nate and he went towards the city. He didn't told me anything until he came back a while ago. TTH they took our most promising childs and send them away. They're fearing that Frieza would have killed them all. Sniff B but he's not telling me why. I fear it may have to be with that legendary Saiyan thing they are talking about. Both Puta and Grina looked over her with worried expression on their faces, quickly thinking about the reason behind such decision. Celery was one of the most promising children's recently born with an astounding 350 units of battle power, and according to Jinjar words, more of such kind of kids were sent away. Kids that would have been undoubtedly the future of the Saiyan race. Looking over her teammate and her partner, Jinjar said to them with a pained but concerned tone, Grina, your boy, you'll have to send him away too. What if something worse is about to happen? They wouldn't send my Celery away if it wasn't for something that could threaten her. Hearing her words, Grina furrowed her brows and was about to ask her what was she talking about when Puta finally connected some dots. But why should I send Ban dash? They called us all so it would be easier to kill us. Puta's voice reached their ears and made their bodies stiff. It was strange enough call us back amidst our missions, but there's various teams with formidable individuals outside that would be a problem to trace back in such case. Why else if not to kill us all in one simple attack? Both Grina and Jinjar were able to feel the sheer rage behind the voice of Puta as they saw some rocks floating around them. Reaching over his scouter, Puta crushed it under his fist as he looked up to the brightest point in the sky, Frieza's ship. He knows we can't do anything but do as he says, even if we know what he's planning. We can only wait until the times comes. Fucking bastard. Grina looked astonished at Puta's face. It was the first time she saw her partner looking powerlessness. He always carried with himself an aura of indomitable confidence, yet now it finally faltered. Reaching her hands to his, she heard him saying, it's time to meet my son. It would be the first and last time I'll be seeing him. Seeing him looking at her with a defeated smile, Grina felt her guts wrenching at the reality finally stuck her. She wouldn't be able to see her son grow nor train him. She wouldn't be able to prepare his food. She wouldn't be able to teach him. She wouldn't be the mother she was expecting so much to become. Let's go and see our son. That's all she said as both flied towards the city. Amidst their flying, Puta could only think of one thing. He was grateful to answer the call. His son was waiting for him after all. Chapter 2, The Last Light of Planet Vegeta. There are various attacking pods with children's escaping the planet, sir. Do we follow them? An alien operator asked while sitting alongside other individuals, looking over a large screen. What are their power units? Asked another insect humanoid. None of them surpass 5 units. Answered back the operator. The insect humanoid scoffed at his response and with a waving hand said to him, don't mind them then, those kids are being sent to their deaths anyway. The alien operator nodded his head and continued to look at the screen. Do you think they already realize what is about to happen to them? Asked another operator with an innocent tone on his voice. The previous operator just scoffed at his words and said with an obvious tone on his voice, of course not. Those monkeys can barely stand without killing each other, and you think they can realize the plans of Emperor Frieza? Those kids are being disposed as trash. That's what they do with the weak ones. They send them to low-level planets in hopes of making something worthy of them. The majority of them dies always. The one who asked said with a pitiable tone, it sucks to be them, so at least the ones on the planet will die quickly. His words made the rest of the people in the room laugh audibly at the fate of the Saiyans. Who among them would ever feel pity towards a race of lesser violent beings? Tap 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 tap. Various footsteps echoed through the palace hall as a large group of Saiyans walked online while being escorted. Kia's Sebe was leading them, he himself being escorted by 2 low-class warriors on the sides. He could easily slip away from them, but there wasn't any reason for it. After all, he knew the king himself would admit that what they did was the right thing. Even on his blindness, King Vegeta wasn't someone to punish his most loyal followers for acting on behalf of their race. As they finally entered the king hall, they saw the remaining entourage that wasn't on board with their plan, on 2 different rows at the side of the king's seat. On the middle of them and seated high on his throne was King Vegeta himself, with somberly expression on his face. Finally halting at the required distance, the escorts remained on the side while Kiasebe looked over the king with a tired look, letting out a sigh of resignation. Why have you done it, Kiasebe? Do you realize the treason behind your actions? The cold tone on King Vegeta's voice froze everyone on place. Letting out another deep sigh, Kiasebe made sure to think carefully his words as he started. I do, my king, but I also realize the dire and threatening situation we are currently in. I trust on your judgment, your majesty, and I also trust you'll find wise what I've done. Whatever may happens in the future, there will be hope for us, the Saiyans, to make sure we'll rise. Although not openly saying it, mostly due to the low-class Saiyans escorting them, he worded it enough for the king to understand. Nate, who was behind Kiasebe, also raised his voice. If I may add, King Vegeta, if nothing happens we can always bring them back. It's a failsafe, and a way to ensure nothing happens to them. Hearing their words, the king raised his voice loud enough to make everyone feel the roar on their chest. Escorts, out. The mentioned followed the king's order, and after a few moments the only people remaining were the king, his entourage, and the people that sent away the kids. It is you who rules this planet, or it is I, King Vegeta, who does it. The sharp and inquisitive tone on the king's voice reached their ears. No letting get it on his nerves. Kiasebe answered him. It is you, my king. King Vegeta nodded at his response, yet he lose it all his composure as he screamed at them. And when did I order you to send away our most promising childrens to their death? Tell me, do you realize that Frieza can kill them if he want it? Huh. Not letting them answer him, he continued. Don't you think he can easily see their battle power and purposely cripple our future? I should kill you all, I should make an example out of you. King Vegeta sat once again on his throne after letting out his rant and frustration. Yet you did well, Kiasebe. I've also sent a message to my son to not head the call. Whatever happens, it would be only us that'll be partaking part on this. Hearing the tiredness on his voice, the rest of the entourage looked over at each other. Where did you send them? King Vegeta asked after a moment of silence. Not wasting another second, Kiasebe answered him truthfully. Towards one of the outside galaxies, an spiraled arm that's too far away for anyone to even bother after them. We divided 2 teams of 5 and 4 team made of 4 while deploying decoys on each ship. This should be enough to cover their signatures from the scouters. King Vegeta nodded at his words, yet maintained silence. Nobody dared to say another word as they waited for the king to say something. After a while, the king opened his mouth again. If things comes to it, I hope my son will find them afterwards and rebuild our race. In the meantime, no one said a word of this, and you are prohibited to talk or bring this subject again. You're dismissed. With the echoes of his voice, the last mention of these Saiyans remained forever hidden under the tight-sealed lips of the present. With only one computer containing the destination of the 26. As both Pita and Grina reached the capital, they head directly towards the nursing room where Bann's incubator pod was in. Not minding the stop calls and the integrity of the nurses, they broke through the door and entered the room where an alien-looking nurse was checking over the pods. That's our son, he is Bann, Grina said as she approached the pod with a blue liquid on it. Seeing the small baby with a black melina and resemblance with both Grina and him, Pita felt an overwhelming mixture of feelings of proudness, anxiety, and sadness envelope him. Approaching over the pod, he let his palms rest on the glass as Grina looked over the two of them with tears on her eyes, trying her best to not let them out. I hope he takes the best of both, my looks and your talent, said Pita with a small voice, making Grina chuckle at him while failing miserably to hold back the tears. Shut up, you idiot, let's take him out and get the attacking pod for him, she said while cleaning her eyes and looking over the pod itself. Pita nodded his head as he ordered the alien that was looking at them with strangeness to take his son out of the incubation pod. Although the alien first raised his complaints and concerns, he learned otherwise after feeling a heavy hit from Pita. Thus, with their son on hand, the parents flew towards the spaceport at rapid speed amidst the looks that people were giving them. Seeing one pod ready to be used and various guards around other empty ports, Pita spoke to Grina. Take Bann towards our house, I'm going to bring the pod back and wait for you on the plains, okay? The latter nodded as she swiftly fly away, while Pita looked back at the guarded port and formed an strategy to stole the attacking pod. I should have picked the scout scope for this. Pita's cursed on his mind on hindsight. Still shaking his head, he took a deep breath and charged forward while breaking through the sky. The guards around the spaceport suddenly looked up after hearing the thundering sound of the sky breaking as they saw a Saiyan surrounded in whitish light around him. Quickly sending the alert, they tried to pose a defense, yet none of them were match for Pita's might. With the average Saiyan guard around 900 units of battle power, and with the strongest among them shyly reaching the 1.300 units, they could only watch in powerlessness as he took them out one after the other. Without the enough speed nor reaction, Pita in a couple of minutes made an example out of them, with the weakest among the guards even dying due to the heavy kick that Pita landed on his chest. Seeing the unconscious and agonizing Saiyans, he spied at them as he approached the attacking pod. There shouldn't be a problem, he murmured to himself after seeing the location that the computer has already established prior. With a faraway galaxy and a planet that wouldn't be that much attractive for the Frieza's forces. After double-checking that the pod has correctly transferred the coordinates and making sure there was enough for the long travel, Pita threw a blast to the computer and grasped tightly on the pod as he flew away through the sky, not minding a little bit the various shouts he heard from below nor the energy blasts sent to his ways. Time was passing and his son couldn't wait anymore. He refused his own bloodline to end on this planet. After a couple of minutes flying, he was finally able to reach his house, yet not even stopping for a moment he shouted at Grina while flying just a couple of meters above. "Let's go, I have the pod." Grina's figure shoot through the backyard door as she held tightly at Ban on her chest, a little unnerved for the fact that until now, she didn't heard her son crying nor making more sounds. "I'm sure little babies should make more noises, right?" Unable to ask anyone in the meantime, she could only hope that the previous Daychak was truthful about the well-being of her son. As the couple passed through various villages and terrain, they quickly left behind the populated areas and continued to fly until Peta thought was far enough. Putting the attack pod on the ground and opening the door, he looked back at his only son with a serious look over his face. Seeing Ban's sleeping face, he felt something stirring inside him, yet it was only enough to make him raise his brow and let out a sigh. He didn't even cry until now. He heard the choking voice of Grina as she eyed her baby boy with loving eyes. Seeing her in such state was a first time for Peta, as she never let out such emotional side of her, not even at him. Slowly, he tried to reach his arms at Ban's. Grina eyed at him and carefully put him on his palms. His father's left hand was big enough to envelope completely Ban's body, yet Peta tried at his best to be careful enough, as if afraid of breaking something fragile. Feeling the warmth that his son, his own blood, emanated through his hand made Peta reassured that he was making the best decision at this moment. Bringing Ban towards his chest, he closed his eyes for a moment while enjoying the sensation of hugging his child for the first and the last time. After opening them, he handed it back to Grina as he said to her in a low voice, "Let's record something for him to remember us. I fear that he hasn't properly met us." Feeling her baby boy once again on her arms, and this time feeling his tail coiling around her arm, Grina held back a choke and with tears on her eyes nodded her head at his words. Walking in front of the pod, Peta used the camera on the seat to start recording, and the two of them made sure to record a video of the family for their son. Each one took a moment to tell him who they were, why they sent him away and what would have they've liked to teach him. After taking their minutes and thinking everything they were able to said in just a short amount of time, Peta stopped the recording and they both placed Ban on his attacking pod. As Grina saw the coiling tail around her arm, she tried with trembling hands to uncoiled, yet she felt it attached to her strongly, seemingly refusing to detach from her. Seeing this she couldn't help but sob in despair as Peta himself did it for her. Yet it was during that moment that Ban didn't feel any warmth anymore that he finally opened his eyes under the gaze of his father. The boy didn't cry, yet he looked at the two figures with intrigue. Seeing this, Peta patted at Grina's shoulder as he said to his son, "I'm sure you won't remember me later on, but I'm your father and this seemingly weak woman is your mother. Don't let her current look mislead you. She's even stronger than me, than both of us." Hearing his words, both Ban and Grina reacted, with the two of them gazing at each other, Grina with affection and Ban with curiosity. "You'll be alone from now on, son, but I promise you that you'll only have to look at the moon to remember us, your family and your race. We'll be forever with you and I hope for you to do what we can't." Peta's soothing yet confident voice reached Ban's ears, as the little baby moved his hand in a grasping gesture. Grina, unable to left him hanging, let Ban grasp her finger as she said to him, "Your name is Ban, you're a son of mine and your father's, live up to it and never doubt what you can reach." Tears continued to escape Grina's eyes as she couldn't help but be unable to continue talking. "You are the son of Saiyans, fight and grow well, as the stars are plenty for you to conquer. Farewell, Ban." With those parting words, Peta stepped back with Grina on his arms as he closed the attacking pod. Slowly the pod started to float and in just a moment it shoot through the night sky of planet Vegeta. Peta could only look for a moment at the trailing left behind, giving the last look at his son. Then he flew up in the air as he started to scan around in search for any attack directed towards his son pod. Yet Grina remained rooted on the ground, unable to look any other place that wasn't the trail left behind and with a hollow feeling on her chest only growing bigger each second that passed. After a few minutes, she wiped her eyes clear and with a plain gaze, she looked towards the bright spot in the sky, where Frieza loomed over the entire planet. "Let's go back," was all she said as the couple break through the night sky. Another ship is leaving the atmosphere, the destination is also unknown. This time the lecture given by the scouter is 89, and is another child, sir. The same operator said to his superior, who only showcased a more interesting look on his bug face. "That is strange, that's not a weakling if I'm not wrong." He looked over another alien that looking over a different screen, "Isn't it Pula?" Hearing his name being called, the alien looked back at his superior and answered him, "He's not, that kid would have most likely entered the Saiyan army in the future." He then continued with his previous task, leaving the bug-faced alien pondering in silence. Is he going on the same direction as the other ones? He finally asked, yet he only received a blank look on the face of the operator as he answered him, "Well, I can't tell," and simply shrugged off. Hearing the response, the bug-faced alien just scoffed at it and said to him, "Just let him off, a weakling like that wouldn't make the difference." Seeing that he didn't have to work more, the operator simply responded, "Roger that." Little did they know, back on planet Vegeta, the capital was now seeing its dawn, yet instead of peace people were restless and worried. The previous night incident on the port, and the various departing figures of attacking pods, amidst the clear orders from Frieza, left many wondering what was happening. Rumors started to spread around like wildfire and many team captains started to get agitated. While many refused to acknowledge the rumors, unable to believe any type of claim, various left wondering if this wasn't the prelude to something big. The last attacking pods that landed only brought with them more reputable and fearsome warriors, but also more questions in regard such reunion being held by their emperor. Yet whatever slight piece of peace that was left untouched, was broke the moment two figures were seen floating in the capital sky. Both clad in their battle armors, Pita and Grina looked towards the palace with stern expression on their faces. Letting out some energy to amplify his voice, Pita roared towards the palace as he said, King Vegeta, you owe us an explanation of what is happening. How is that you made a handful of our children escape and yet you keep shut over the rest of us? Come out and tell everyone the truth. The hundreds of Saiyans that heard them first weren't able to understand what the two of them were saying. Although a few exclaimed among them that they may be crazy, they were quickly shut up by the people who knew them. After all, both Grina and Pita were strong warriors that gained renown for their prowess and successful missions. What are you two talking about? Someone shouted from the ground as Grina thanked whoever it was for giving her the necessary words to start. Don't any of you think it's strange for Frieza to be calling every single one of us back here? And how he's been staying over there for more than 2 weeks straight without even bothering to send someone to say something. Her voice echoed to every place around the capital as many knitted their brows in seriousness as they thought over what she said. And isn't more strange that King Vegeta along his entourage, has yesterday sent on hiding various of our most promising children away in escape, without telling anyone else and not giving any sort of explanation to us. At the end of her words, Grina felt herself more enraged as she broke her composure once again. King Vegeta, if you can't even tell us that Frieza want to kill us all, at least have some shame and don't save others people kids without even give the rest a chance to do the same. At her words, the onlookers let out gasps of surprise and others of disbelief. Yet no one answered from the palace, and the various murmurs around the city started to get louder. Why would even Frieza would want to get rid of us, right? We're his strongest soldiers, none of the scum under him can't compare to us. Did they lost their mind during their mission? As many started to dismiss their words, while others thought deeply, Pita clenched his fist on rage and said to everyone that might heard them, if any of you want to believe us, save whoever you might want to and come with us to give a last stand. If I'll die, I'll do it while fighting. Not minding anyone else, he took Grina's hand and fly away with her, leaving behind just the sonic boom. Yet his parting words left a bomb on everyone's mind. Pita's words stirred something deep within many unsatisfied Saiyans. Another timer was set that morning, one that would explode not only at Frieza's face, but also alter forever the story on this universe. As not only those in the street heard Pita's words, but also those within the palace and the lackeys of Frieza. Kiasebe could only clench his fist on rage at the words said by Pita. He was also one of those who didn't want to die sitting on the palace while waiting for his final moment, but also giving his last fight. If we held any doubts about Frieza killing us all, then that settled it. The voice of the king made everyone look at him with surprise and fear. Let's get ready, was all the king said before turning back and entering his chambers, leaving behind his entourage looking at each other with disbelief. Kiasebe and Nate didn't waste more time and head towards their respective houses, to bide their farewell and to prepare for whatever the king may order. Seeing the flying figures moving to different directions, those who paid attention to the palace started spreading the words among the capital, and soon after the rumors reached every village in planet Vegeta. Thousands of Saiyans could be seen flying through the sky towards different directions while attacking pods continue to shine through different places throughout the planet as they made their way outside the planet. Various Saiyans could be seen on the upper atmosphere looking after every pod that was able to escape, after the first ones were shoot down by various of Frieza lackeys. What was bound to happen in a few more weeks, spiraled out of control and made Frieza advance his plans. Ho ho ho, fine, it seems these monkeys would work as a warm-up, the Emperor said to himself as he looked over the images on the screen alongside the large window on his ship. But Lord Frieza, you shouldn't bother with them, leave the work of disposal to us, Dodoria said to Frieza with an alarmed tone. Yet what he received in response left him froze on his spot. Both of you are too useful to being lost at the hands of these monkeys. His words left them rooted on their spot as they saw Frieza ascending up through the ship roof. A blinding light dimmed the brightness of the planet, as a white ball flew through the air and stayed rooted near planet Vegeta. Suddenly thousands upon thousands of giant figures filled the sky. The Uzurus started to take a flight towards the atmosphere as different trails of attacks filled the sky of planet Vegeta. Hundreds of Frieza's soldiers were killed each second as more and more reinforcements from the Saiyans appeared. Even the weakest among the Saiyan was an outmatch for every single soldier on the lines of Frieza, as with their Uzuro form everyone saw their battle power multiplied by x10. What were before dozens of thousands of Frieza's soldiers, only left a handful of them that were quickly evaporated from the attacking blast of energy made by the Uzuros. After seeing no one standing in front of the ship, the Saiyans glanced over the lone figure of Frieza who looked so small for them, so weak in front of their power. Yet a chilling smile could be seen on Frieza's face, as he eyed a lone Uzuro clad on a distinguishable armor that only King Vegeta himself would wear. Slowly he saw King Vegeta opening his mouth and charging an attack, who was quickly followed by the rest of the Saiyans. Seeing the numbers raising up fastly on his modified scouter, the smile on Frieza faded and a murderous look engulfed his expression. So you finally showed your teeth, filthy monkeys. I'll make sure to make an example out of you. His plain a cold tone was followed by the thousands of blinding lights directed at him. Inside the ship not only Dodoria, but Zarbon looked with horrified expressions on their faces as the scouters on their faces exploded. As if a supernova itself exploded, only white could be seen as the attack made by thousands of Uzuro engulfed the ship, leaving nothing behind. Yet before the Saiyans could even cheer victorious, a glowing orange light started to overcome the whitish of their attack. And soon everyone saw with despair a different Frieza in front of them, pointing up an orange ball of energy that absorbed the remains of their attack. Huffing with a rage all over his face, Frieza screamed at them, "Go to hell, monkeys, all of you disappear." At his words, the ball advanced towards planet Vegeta, relentless as the last ditch of effort made by the Saiyans was soon engulfed too. Cries of anguish and agony were soon silenced for the eternity as doom was brought upon the surface of the planet. Whatever remained of the once Saiyan race was cleansed from the face of existence. Yet only a handful of Saiyans were able to die with a smile on their faces, parents of those who will preserve their last wishes, of the one who will avenge them, and from the ones who will keep the Saiyans going on. With a bright explosion, only molten debris remained from the planet, yet the last light of planet Vegeta didn't diminished, as scattered rays of light traveled through the cosmos with the last remnants of it. It was no land but flesh and blood from the Saiyans, the conquerors of the universe, and the ones that will rebuild their planet in the distant future. Chapter 3, I'm a Saiyan. Fluttering my eyes open, I felt grogginess and a fog encroaching my mind. Slowly my being was returning back to the land of the livings as two faces appeared in front of me. I heard some of their words, apparently they were my parents, but last time I checked my old man was getting bald and looked like a nerd, and my mom was starting to show some white hairs. These two models weren't exactly what I could call your normal parents. And wait, what did he said? He called me a Saiyan? That can't be. Before I was even able to say something at them, I saw a door closing and slowly saw the view in front of the window moving at fast speed, yet I started to slowly doze off. Next time I woke up, I felt everything shaking around me. I wasn't imagining things, but I literally felt myself jumping from my seat while red lights shone through the thing I was on. It pissed me off, and I wasn't able to know why. It may have to be with whatever was happening waking me up for my nap, but even during my tests periods I wasn't this irritable. However, whatever my concerns might be, they were expelled as I saw tentacles around the only window on this thing. Yeah, that wasn't normal at all. Neither the hands with claws trying to break through the windows. Luckily, whatever that might be only lasted a couple of seconds, until everything returned to its previous state and the red lights stopped shining. Before I closed my eyes, I was able to see wallpapers of the space through the window, and I wondered if Elon Musk was behind this. He ruined Twitter, goddamned. I don't know how long passed until I woke up again, yet this time instead of the wallpaper taken out of Google, what I was seeing was a clear blue sky and some green. Although the view was a familiar one, my current situation wasn't. First of all, I didn't know where I was nor why I wasn't able to move my body like I wanted. The other issue was, it seemed like I was inside a fancy car with white interior that looked like that kind of technological touch of the 70s. Horrible taste for whoever designed this. Last time I checked I was dumping all of that Mexican food. It was a marvelous cave paint and symphonic melody that my body made. I thought to myself while trying to recall my last real memories that didn't felt like one of those dreams you have when you're with fever. Did I fell asleep on the bathroom while shitting? No way, man, that's embarrassing. I tried to hide my face into my hands, but I wasn't able to do it correctly. My hands are tiny. That's all I was able to think when I saw my hands. They looked like baby hands. Remembering everything that happened until now, some things started to make sense, yet I wasn't able to put the pieces together until I saw it with my own eyes. Be it the two individuals that claimed to be my parents and said I was a Saiyan, or the things I saw outside the window. My head came up with two possible explanations, and yet none of them were ones I would like to be in. I lived a comfortable life. I was happy, and most importantly, I didn't want it to die. Buzz buzz. Suddenly a sound like interference resounded through the thing and a voice closely followed it. By the time you have heard this transmission, it means that we have not been able to contact you nor retrieve you back. This message is programmed to be displayed 3 years after sending you to your temporary destination. Hearing the first words, I feel my whole self going stiff. What the I tried to shut my mind off as I continue listen whatever this guy might say. It was clear that questions could be made later on. In this case, your order is to restore our race, the Saiyan race. We have sent you all in 2 groups of 5 and 4 groups of 4. These were duly planned according to the potential all of you showed at birth. Hearing the mention of the Saiyan race was basically throwing at my face the most concerning question in my head. Your most vital mission will be to survive. Each of you is indispensable for the survival of our species since you were duly selected for a talent unmatched in our species. In each of your attack pods, we have loaded all the necessary data for you to train and become stronger, as well as the technology and teachings of our species. As each one of you grows, you must specialize in an area for the correct functioning of the squads. Any question you want to address or inquire, the computer on board will provide the required information that is available in our files. I tried to close my eyes as I felt each passing words could only bombard my already shocked mind each second. It was a lot to take, and yet I could only lay there and continue listening it for more than an hour probably. However, even if I ended up with a headache, I was able to grasp not only my situation, but what I needed to do. And what I was trying to do right now was to float after following the instructions given by the mechanical voice, yet I was still unable to do it. How the hell the other babies will survive, man? Holy shit, these Saiyans are a bunch of idiots. A lot of those babies will probably starve to death before even being able to get out of the spaceship. I could only rant about my situation as I keep getting frustrated. I keep denying myself that any of those babies without even a shred of memories like I do, would be able to do a better job than I. After of more than 10 tedious minutes without even been able to feel anything, I decided to do things like humans does. Thus with every fiber on my being I forced my body to move and search for the remote control that I remember Vegeta using to flee. Even though I still have baby arms and basically the body of a baby, it was surprisingly fit. After getting on my knees I took my time to adjust the sensations around my body and the dizziness I started feeling. Yet with surprising agility I was able to search around the small attack pod. There were some rations at the side of the seat, clothes, and what looked to be a legit Saiyan armor. There you are. I thought to myself after spotting the gray-colored device. Reaching my hands to it I started experimenting with the first row of buttons and thankfully I've only had to touch 2 buttons until the final third opened the door. Although I had some reservations while the door depressurized the ship, I remember the voice saying that the planet was deemed fit for survival without required gear. Nonetheless, with some trepidation I breathed for the first time the air of this alien planet while in my mind the thought of being the first human in an extraterrestrial planet flashed. Adjusting my eyes to the light, I was able to see that I was sitting deep into a crater. The vegetation around the attack pod was completely erased in a 30-meter radius, yet tall trees loomed over my head while the green covered around. It doesn't look that much different from Earth, I thought to myself after a brief moment of observation. The weather was refreshing while everything looked normal to me. Crawling outside, I didn't minded the ashen terrain nor the almost numbing sensation on my hands as they first touched a different texture. Color and sounds reached my senses as they filled my new body with so much information that made my mind numb at it. The atmosphere composition is made of 76% of nitrogen, 22% of oxygen and smaller amounts of other elements. The robotic voice of the onboard computer resounded in the back as it kept analyzing the planet. The gravity is 9 times lower than planet Vegeta. The voice continued its analysis as I sat mesmerized and with a flat look on my face while looking at the trees that surpassed the height of the crater end. I guess that's why it's so easy to move. I thought to myself, remembering that Saiyans used to have a planet with a gravity much higher than Earth. Can't remember the exact number I added to myself. I remained rooted outside the spaceship for a couple of minutes while hearing the complete analysis of the planet. Apparently there was a mismatch between the data that should be showcased on the targeted planet and this actual one. Not only that, but this planet also had 4 different moons, which made the system warn me about the potential problems with an Uzaru transformation. There should be other kids coming with me, right? Damn man, that could be a pain in the ass to handle. Other monkeys to worry about. I couldn't help but sigh in worry at the thought, as not only would I have to make sure to survive in a different planet but also had to take care of different kids that could potentially destroy the planet or an entire continent every full moon. And that was without counting if there was some sort of native civilization that could saw us as threat. Died while shitting and waking up in a shitty position? I chuckled to myself at the notion, yet I quickly looked behind me. Whoosh whoosh. I heard some vegetation rustling and then I saw the figure of a little kid in a black spandex with a Saiyan armor, white gloves, and boots, looking at me with curiosity. With dark brown spiky hair and a square face, the little kid looked not older than 5 years old yet the last showcased some muscles. Who are you? I heard his high-pitched voice sounding with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Seeing him not showcasing any sort of malice nor aggression towards myself, I sighed inwardly in relief. When I tried answering him, only blabs and gibberish escaped my mouth yet the Saiyan kid only smiled and advanced towards me while exclaiming, "You can't speak too like my little sis. Come, since you are a Saiyan like us we need to band together." As he took my hand with his own, he tried to make me walk yet since I was unable to still be able to walk I could only pat at his hand and shook my head. "What is it? You can't walk? Don't worry, big brother here will help you." As he said that with a simply pull of his hand he made me piggyback him. Yet before he was able to walk I patted once again his shoulder and pointed at my attack pod. With a he looked where I was pointing at and seemed to remember something while saying, "Oh yes, you have your things there, right? I'll come back and grab them and your pod too." And just like that, he bolted away from the crater as he ran and jumped while we traveled through the dense forest that held tall trees and a steep terrain. While running he started speaking with me, "My little sister and you, we are 5 Saiyans on this planet? Even though we were told we'll be only 4, with you here then we can grow even stronger and return back to planet Vegeta." As he said that he started to laugh audible and with a "I can't wait until you guys can speak." He continued running while speaking of the things he found on the way, which was apparently nothing at all, only a few bugs. With how noisy he is I doubt he'll encounter any animal on his path. I thought to myself while I too eyed the surroundings. With his speed reaching that of a car, we swiftly made our way for more than 10 minutes until I saw an enormous crater on front. Stopping at the edge of it, we were able to see 4 different pods carefully around each other, while one baby in Saiyan armor was flying upside down around 2 other babies. "Hey guys, look, I found another one too. Your big brother is the best." With a surprisingly thundering voice, the kid that brought me here shouted at the others while he swiftly jumped down and hurried to meet them. The other Saiyan kids looked at us, or more specifically at me, with curiosity while the one that carried me spoke. "This is our group. She's my little sister Ramala." He pointed at one girl with black spiky hair and a Saiyan armor with light brown guard pauldrons and a white stomach plate in a blue spandex. Ramala just moved her head sideways as she looked over the pointed finger that her brother was giving her. He then pointed towards another girl with lavender hair. "That one is Celery? She's the strongest among us all." with a pair of blue eyes that seemed to lure one eyes to them. She eyed at me with curiosity all over her face. She was also carrying a Saiyan armor, though her was the most distinguishable from the rest as she had a reddish-brown pauldrons and a black-colored plate around her chest and waist. Like her hair, she had a lavender-purple colored spandex. Her hair is so pretty. I couldn't help but think to myself while looking at her, it was the first time I saw a baby naturally born with such hair. That one flying there is Aprit. I thought he would be the last one I would find, but there's also you. When I followed his thumb, I saw the black-haired Aprit looking at me with raised eyebrows. Different from the rest of us that were shades of white and pink, he had a caramel skin that stand out of the rest. His chest plate was white-colored too with yellow pauldron guards. Oh, and my name is Rukule. Don't forget, since from now on I'm also your big brother. The kid that finally introduced himself as Rukule smiled at me after putting me in the floor. He then continued, wait for me here, I'll bring your pod back. And just like that he jumped away while leaving me behind with the rest of the babies. Okay, this isn't the best situation. I thought to myself while looking back at the rest of the kids who were also looking over me. We're just a bunch of babies that will be babysitted by a kid. There's no way this could end well. I finally concluded while imagining how could a kid would be able to raise a bunch of kids from a genocide race that could wipe out entire moons. Seeing movement in front of me, I saw the one called Aprit float towards my position, still upside down. Raising my eyes to see the phenomena, I thought back at the instructions given by the computer on board, and cursed under my breath at the kid who seemed able to grasp the flying technique with such an ease. Seeing him hovering right above my head, I saw him reaching out his hand and with a grasping gesture making my whole body react in pain. Seeing his hand reaching a furry brown tail, I almost cried on pain while I slapped his hand away. Fucking kid. I cursed on my head while caressing my tail. Clouded by the painful sensation, it took me a few seconds until I realized what I was doing. Giving another look at my tail, I saw it moving at my will, although my mind wanted it to see it as uncanny. It felt like it was another limb to me. Do they really cut this thing off? There's no way I'll be doing the same. I gulped down while remembering the scene of Vegeta's and Gohan's tail being cut. Just imagining the pain made my feet squeeze themselves. Gah. Hearing the voice of another kid in front of me, I looked over the lavender-haired celery looking at me petting my tail. Unable to understand what she was saying, I just looked over her. I'll have to train now that I remember. Thinking of this, I let go my tail while I closed my eyes and thought first of how should I take this from now on. Trying to not mind the inquisitive look that I felt celery giving me. I guess before even flying or trying other kind of training, I should try to focus on key training. At the mention of key training, my mind went blank. How the hell I'm supposed to train that thing? Opening my eyes in confusion, I tried to come up with ways to train something I wasn't even aware of its existence until I was born into this world. What was even worse was that not even the voice on board of the ship mentioned key even once. And it wasn't surprising at all. The key itself was only mentioned by the Earthlings, and Saiyans were ignorant about it. I guess I'll try the same approach those characters in novel use, by plot. With a newfound confidence and resolve, I closed my eyes while trying to achieve a deep meditative state. And it wouldn't be until Rukule came back with my ship that I opened my eyes. Yet different from before, instead of confident I was at loss. Unable to even feel anything remotely different aside from moving my tail, I tried almost everything I could think, for no avail. Staring blankly at Rukule, I heard his words while still unable to react at my situation. Since none of you can speak, I will be in charge of you. My dad has told me to train you all to become strong warriors like he and King Vegeta are. Rukule grabbed Aprit by his waist and put him down on the floor to continue his speech. I trained with other warriors before being sent with you, so we're going to do the same I did with them? Ramala. He looked over his little sister and sat in front of her. Even if you are my little sister, I won't let you off. I promise Mom I will make you strong. Seeing Ramala not reacting to his words, Rukule just patted her shoulder and walked towards one attack pod. After a few seconds retrieving something, he walked back to us while carrying a dark blue spandex in one hand while a black-chested plated Saiyan armor with yellow pauldrons. Tossing it in front of me, he told me with a serious look on his child face, put it on, I'm going to start training all of us, we'll be doing lots and lots of training. As I moved mechanically, I remembered that I still was naked during all this time. The spandex fitted me perfectly, and as I touched the armor, I was surprised by the strange mixture of flexibility and durability that the armor was capable of. Blip blip blip. A sound made all of us look over at the origin of it as we saw Rukule with a scouter on his left side looking over us. It works? Okay, let's see. We heard him exclaiming as he pressed tongue to the side while seemingly looking for something as he adjusted the scouter. That's it. Okay, let's see your power levels. As he said that, various figures were showcased over the scouter while he looked over Ramala. 286. Whoa Ramala, I never thought you were so strong. Rukule said with honest surprise as he went to pat Ramala's shoulder with vigor and happiness. He then looked over Celery and touched again at his scouter. Let's see you Celery. And figures too started blinking at the scouter visor until I heard Rukule high-pitched voice screaming 350? What? I don't even reach that number? I thought Dad was saying she was the strongest when we were babies. That's not fair. As I saw him pouting, Celery looked over him with strangeness as she continued to play with the dirt between her legs. While saying something under his breath, Rukule touched his scouter one more time as he looked over Aprit. 291, you are a bit stronger than my little sister, humph. He then looked over me as he said under his breath, seemingly not wanting me to hear him, yet he failed. I hope you don't have a high power level too. Various figures were showcased on his scouter until a 2-digit figure stopped 89. Well, at least one of us is a low class Saiyan. As he muttered that, he looked over me and smiled. You're stronger than the other kids I saw, don't worry, since I'll take care of you. He then seemed to look confused for a second and then he smiled with his tongue out. I forgot to see, how is your name? Hold on. He moved back to my ship while I was deep in the 89. That's not bad at all considering what was Goku's battle power when he was sent. This is basically an easy start, right? As I asked to myself that, I looked over the rest of the kids around me with more than 200 units as an average. It does make sense for them to send such kids as their last hope. With such battle powers, these kids could reach more than 2,000 units after getting their Uzuru transformation, and that while just being babies. A shudder went through my spine at notion of these kids being left uncontrolled. If they could reach only half of the power of Vegeta at the Saiyan saga, then this planet and its inhabitants were doomed. Looking over Rukyul's back as he looked inside my pod, I wondered to myself how much was his battle power. So it's Bann. I heard him shouting as he turned toward me. With a goofy smile he walked towards us once again and looked at each one of us with a resolve. Then he made his stance clear and said what was on his mind. Ramala, Celery, April and Bann? I promised my father I will train you hard, and that's what we're going to do now. Follow me. With unwavering resolution, he walked outside the crater without looking back. I followed him since I was unable to come up with a training on my own. Looking back, only Celery followed up, but she seemed to follow my tail rather than Rukyul, yet Ramala and April remained back playing with each other as the girl tried to put down April from floating. Once Rukyul reached the normal terrain he looked back at me and Celery with a complicated expression on his face. It seemed that the work of training us will be a hard task to complete. Chapter 4, Training. Boom boom. The thunderous sound of rocks being blown to smithereens resounded throughout the plains. Huff, huff. Rukyul breathed with agitation in a fighting posture as he looked seriously at the objective in front of him. A large boulder with a deep crater on the side facing Rukyul was the opponent of the little Saiyan as he tried his best to showcase his strength. His spectators were only Bann and Celery, though the latter was more focused on following the tail of Bann than giving attention to the strength display given by Rukyul. Huff. Our punches should be able to do this, Bann, said Rukyul after lowering his stance and looking back at the pair of babies. We will train every day to make our bodies strong like father said, and then we will fight each other, okay? Rukyul sat on the ground while giving a smile at Bann, who nodded his head. Oof, well, I will be going later to see if I can catch something to eat. I don't want to keep eating that powder. Rukyul mumbled to himself as he touched his belly, though he couldn't continue with his words as a hand appeared in front of him. Seeing Bann pointing his fingers at his scouter, Rukyul asked him what's wrong. Yet Bann only moved his hand further until it reached the scouter. Do you want to use it? I can lend you mine for a while. Not knowing what the toddler wanted, Rukyul said to him as he took it off from his ear and put it on Bann. After adjusting the scouter, Rukyul tried to pick an option so Bann could be entertained, yet what he only received was the tight grasp of Ban's hand as he moved his head sideways in negative motion. Before he was able to utter something, Bann reached the buttons on the scouter and looked after the option he wanted to use. 3 touches to toggle the information for the nearby keys. Bann, though to himself, still somewhat apathetic due to his inability to use key, he remembered to do the most important thing in their current situation. I should asses and look after the biggest key reading around us. It was his utmost priority to secure his survival currently, and after seeing Rukyul fighting against a rock for hours, he couldn't handle it anymore and decided to do it himself. Bip 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 bip. Suddenly various readings started to appear on the red-colored lens. 80, 82, 30, 79, 36. So many, was all that Bann could think while the numbers keep appearing with an average of 30 units. Oh, what is that? Asked Rukyul after hearing the readings of the scouter, yet Bann nor Celery paid attention to him. Bip 61, Bip 47, Bip 33. Bann was aghast after the scouter stopped in the last number, which was the biggest one until now. 780. It was way out of the league of everyone currently on their kindergarten. Ahem, camp. And although they could face off while they are in their Uzuru transformation, there were no guarantees that they'll be able to maintain their rationality. Still, one of the things that surprised Bann the most was the amount of readings given by the scouter, which were high by the standards used back in Dragon Ball. More than 900 readings with keys over 30 units on average. And that was without taking into account something important. All of those numbers were from nearby targets that were in a range of 100 kilometers around them, as that was the default filter by the scouter. It's a fairly strong planet, as it seems, was Bann's assessment after briefly thinking what would they face compared to his memories. If 10 units were at super athlete level, then this many people may be around the same levels as Captain America or something. Although the idea of people with such strength running around was demoralizing, Bann could only smile at this though. We're way out of their league. Confident on his race and the abilities that he may be able to showcase, he focused his eyes back as he saw Rukyul looking at him with a strange expression on his face. You look weird while laughing, don't do that again, said Rukyul with a clear disgusted face. He then continued, anyways, I forgot to do that thing, he laughed while moving both hands behind his head. But I heard a lot of bips and sounds. Is there anyone strong to fight Bann? Rukyul asked with expectant eyes as he looked over Bann. The latter just nodded his head as he remembered seeing a couple of lectures with keys around the 300 units to 400. though they could be counted with one hand aside from the biggest one with 780. Yes, we will have lots of people to fight against. Hearing Rukyul laughing and looking forward to fight such people made Ban let out a sigh. Those are people with the same level as Master Rashi who destroyed the moon, you lunatic kid. Though he thought this, Ban felt his blood boil at the image of such strong people. Swish. The sound of Rukyul jumping towards the boulder made Ban come back from his thoughts as he heard the kid yelling, after finishing with this rock I'll bring bigger ones so I can move them and destroy like Papa taught me. As he said that he throw another punch towards the rock that blasted endlessly debris around. Boom. And after Ramala, you and the others can walk or fly like Aprit, we'll be fighting lots and lots more. Rukyul continued saying loudly as he seemed to get pumped up by his words. Bam! And with another punch, the boulder was completely destroyed as a sadistic smile could be seen on Rukyul's face as he eyed Ban and Celery with bloodshot eyes. I'm gonna show you how to walk and fly. Though his words could have been reassuring to Ban in another occasion, seeing the maniacal look on the kid face made his hairs raise in alert. He only want us to walk and fly so he can use us as punch bags. Ban cursed on his mind yet he nodded at the kid who walked over him and took him by his shoulders. Here, this is how you do it. And with those words, Rukyul started explaining to Ban and Celery, who could helplessly tried for a while. And while Rukyul was wishing to only train and fight, the kid realized that his first steps should be helping these two in front of him, that seemed to understand his words, to function properly before even punching rocks. Thus, with surprising patience for a kid, and with one eager student and Celery, the two Saiyans made their first steps into this world. Are you sure it was on this area that you saw them falling? A deep voice of a man clad in heraldic clothes over his armor plate asked to a young-looking man walking in front of him. Yes, there were 4 of them that fallen in one place, until another one fell recently, it wasn't far from here. The young man's voice carried a hint of valiant on it, as he stride forward with a grace that didn't fit with his ragged attires. He looked briefly at the man behind him and for a few moments pondered over, until his mouth opened and asked him, is it true, sir? Did the Star Lord really send his gracious and gifted sons to us? Hearing the reverence and fear on his voice, the warrior in heraldic clothes took a moment of silence and answered him, it may be possible, Roderick, but until we see them, we won't know, while shaking his head sideways. Although faith was the least of things that they lacked, he didn't wanted to give false hopes to the young man in front of him. Their situation was dire and grim, yet many still hoped for their Lord and God to help them in such times. Many men and young men were willing to give their lives without asking for anything in return, as long as they were guided and commanded by the sons of their heavenly Lord. For many, serving under the grace and mantle of such a being was much more than they could ever aspire to in their normal lives. And with such a dark present as the one in which they lived, brave young men like Roderick sought a light in which to forge and exalt themselves to lead their people. It's past that hill, we should hurry before the sunlight disappears, Roderick said as he pointed his index finger at the horizon. With a strident and steady step, they both made their way through the tall foliage and giant trees that adorned the forest they were in. Soon they made their way, and at the top of the hill they could see a gigantic, irregularly shaped crater. Although the light was much dimmer, they could both make out a fire deep inside the crater that illuminated several figures. They are children, Roderick exclaimed as he looked closely. Turning his head quickly, he asked, my lord, what shall we do in this situation? Do we take those children to the town? However, the warrior was frozen still watching the figures. His eyes rested on the figure of one of them more precisely, whom he noticed was levitating. Witches, is all he muttered as he felt the hairs on his body rise. It wasn't fear. Far from it, he had already faced several times the threat of witches and heralds of the doom. Move out, was all he could scream as he took out his sword, yet Roderick was unable to react as the warrior saw the valiant young man, being cut in half in a flash while his face still showcased a surprised expression. Without time to continue observing the tragic death of the young man, the warrior raised his sword by pure reflex and instinct while he felt as if dozens of oxen and bulls were colliding with his hands. Asterisk boom! With his body flying out, and with his hands in pieces after receiving the blow, the man grunted in pain as his vision darkened. Adrenaline coursed through his blood as his body went into a state of hyperactivity looking to survive. Every second that flew by seemed to last minutes as the man tried to focus on the figure of the one who attacked him. In the dim light he was able to visualize him. It's a child, was the first thing he thought, only to correct himself, no, it's a demon. Looking at the ferocious expression on the little boy's face, any hint of mercy vanished in the warrior's mind. What he had in front of him was another aberration that this world seemed to offer in quantity. Dressed in rare armor and with a strange mane of hair unlike anything the common man had ever seen, the warrior was sure that this child was a beast corrupted by evil. However, the man's thoughts were brought to an abrupt halt as he saw the boy's bloody gauntlet rapidly approaching towards his face. Suddenly the world resumed its normal speed, and the last thing the man felt before he saw the darkness was his body crashing brutally to the ground, while his head exploded like a watermelon. Huff, huff. I will not let any of you reach my little sister and brothers. The high-pitched voice of Rukyul was bathed in coldness as he muttered under his breath while looking over the splattered remains of the warrior's head. With a swift move of his hands, he cleaned off the blood from his gauntlet as he eyed the remains of Roderick. Gathering energy on his eyes, he sent an energy beam that vaporized the remains of the young man. He then did the same with the body of the warrior. After making sure that there was nothing left, he moved his hand towards a pouch on the chest plate of his armor and retrieved his scouter and put it on. Let's see if there are more nearby, he muttered after adjusting the filters. Yet when nothing was registered on his scouter he breathed out in relief and letting out a smile he returned back to the camp. Nothing to worry about. Your big brother made sure that the bugs were killed, don't worry. Let's eat as there's plenty of fish. He and with a jovial laugh he reassured the babies on his care that never stopped eating. Everyone aside from Bann, who eyed Rukyul with a serious expression on his face. He was the only one that realized what the kid done after all. These are not simple kids after all, they're Saiyans. And with the grim reminder of the nature of these kids, Bann continued to eat while continuing thinking of ways to train himself. He would be in dire need of strength as it seems. Chapter 5, Sequentia. Bann. The sudden scream of my name woke me up from my sleep with wide-opened eyes as I quickly sat up and looked in front of me. There standing up outside my space pod was Rukyul, who looked fresh and energetical. Noticing the sun rays behind him faintly passing through the canopy of trees I realized it was already another dawn. How was your sleep? I hope well because we need to train again. His thunderous voice reverberated through my skull as I feel another headache starting. Yet I simply nodded my head and tried to stretch out my body while thinking of the last days. After seeing Rukyul murdering habitants from this planet, he started to train me and, to a certain extent, celery. With his help, I was able to learn how to walk, again, and to maintain my own balance. Though the muscles weren't the problem, I had a rough time adapting to my new body and its limitations. For an entire week, we spent the day doing any sort of workout that Rukyul came up with, be it from aerobics, to small workouts. Although I didn't gain strength nor something worthwhile to mention, I did got accustomed to my body and was finally able to get more things done by myself. However, much to my disgust, Celery and Ramala pick up how to flight. In the case of Celery was after I started running around with Rukyul and her not being able to follow up our pace, thus she stopped crawling and started following us everywhere while floating around. While in Ramala's case, the little sister of Rukyul learned after getting constantly bullied by Aprit. The two of them were the only ones that didn't move out from our crater until now, as Rukyul, Celery and I spent almost every day outside exploring the surroundings and hunting the local fauna. Rukyul has been trying to make the two of them follow his orders with no avail, as both toddlers just keep playing with each other and flying around. Though when I pointed out, literally, their actions, Rukyul shrugged off and said that flying was actually a good training for them. Nonetheless, after this week of adaptation, it was finally time, according to Rukyul, to officially start our training. I picked up various boulders for you to see how strong you will become. Rukyul's voice boomed out as he led the way outside the crater. Although the terrain was really steep, we move out from the crater without any sort of effort and with Celery on tow, we walked a couple hundred meters afar from the camp towards our training ground. Or so did Rukyul baptize the place. Turning himself around, he approached me and with a smile he started explaining, since now you can walk, I'm going to taught you how to punch hard. As he said that, I was able to see a whitish aura encasing his fist while he grinned. Papa taught me that what matters the most for a Saiyan is how strong his punches pack. So all you need to do is to move your energy to your fist and punch it with all you have. And while saying that, he moved sideways and throwed his punch to the air. Swish. A gust of wind followed his fists as the grass and plants move out of the way. What the hell they've given to these kids? Jesus Christ. I couldn't help but thought to myself after seeing the demonstration of strength. Rukyul wasn't even a kid that could go to the school and he was already this strong. See? Now is your turn, try it. He exclaimed as he looked expectantly to me. Yet I could only stare back at him, not even moving my fists. It wasn't that I didn't wanted to follow his lead, but I tried many times before to feel my ki. Yet I wasn't able until now to even feel anything. Seeing my inaction, Rukyul frowned and asked, what's wrong? You didn't hurt me. I simply shook my head while raising my right fist to the front and with my left hand, pointed out that I wasn't able to even gather energy. Seeing this, Rukyul stared at my fist for a moment, then he moved his gaze towards my deadpanned face and frowned. I wasn't even able to see anything until I feel it. A punch to my face, followed by a kick on my chest as I was sent flying back towards the forest. Celery, who was also caught unaware, looked frozen on the spot for a moment at my disappearing figure before she launched herself at Rukyul with a raging face. Not paying attention to her, Rukyul launched himself towards me as he continued to rain punches and kicks to my body while screaming, if you can't use your energy, I'll make your body do it for you, Zulf. That's how the others learned, hee. Although I didn't know who he was referring to others, I could make myself an idea of who exactly. After all, he was the only one among us all that trained with actual Saiyans before. Nonetheless, my mind was more occupied feeling the barrage of attacks launched by Rukyul while the air escaped my lungs and my vision started tunneling in black. A bitter taste on the back of my throat made my eyes tear up while a ringing sound started resounding more loud as the attacks continued. Boom boom boom. Feeling the punches at my face, rib cages, and the continued kicks towards my legs and waist that made my flying body align itself to receive even more punches, I wasn't even able to think straight until Rukyul stopped. Stop, Celery, that hurts? I'm just trying to help, Bann. The screams from Rukyul barely reached my ears as the darkness was slowly taking hold of my body. Yet, before I closed my eyes, I felt a jolt going through my body while heat reached every corner and inch of my fibers. With a surprising speed and somewhat in a fuzzy state, I was able to see myself dodging a punch and returning back to Rukyul, who looked a little bit surprised. Yet the next moment a wide smile adorned his face as he screamed in excitement, "It worked." And quickly he looked over Celery as he blocked another punch and kick from the Saiyan girl. "See Celery? He's doing it now, so stop." Yet Celery didn't minded his words and just continued trying to hit him while gust of winds followed each of her fist. "What is this feeling?" I thought to myself every time I moved my body. I felt like I was filled with strength and explosiveness. Connecting my right fist towards Rukyul, I saw his face surprised as he was sent away while crashing to the ground. I immediately jumped forward trying to follow him. Celery, who was now without a target, finally looked over me after seeing the shooting figure of Rukyul, and with a faint smile she looked over me, then she flew quickly towards Rukyul's position, seemingly wanting to continue with her attacks. "That was a good punch, Ban. Now it's my turn." I heard his voice rapidly approaching myself as he seemed to recover himself. Then in a flash I saw his figure approaching while leaping through the terrain, dodging Celery's attacks and focusing on my own movements. Not wanting to waste my chance, I tried to think carefully of my actions while some memories from my previous life started to surface from the deeps of my mind. Movements from Muay Thai started to appear and images of myself doing them took my attention. Without wasting any chance I kicked at Rukyul while at the same time I thought about the following movements and what did I wanted to reach. He's stronger, though and faster than me. I need to corner him alongside Celery. That was the course of action I decided. I couldn't hope to kick or punch him strong enough to stop him, but I could at least put him in a bad position. However, all my plans went to drain the moment my kick landed on his chin, as I felt like I hit a boulder. Immediately a numb feeling of pain encroached my being while a direct jab connected with my nose and with it, brought darkness. It wouldn't be until a while that I was able to wake up from my unconsciousness. A deep searing headache assaulted my head while my eyes slowly opened amidst the extreme brightness. Recountings from the previous battle started to surface my head while the pain on my limbs ensured me that it wasn't a dream. Why did that last kick was so painful? I asked to myself while I compared to my first punch that landed on Rukyul. There wasn't pain in that fist nor the one that followed it. "You're awake." Speaking of the devil, the little Saiyan kid exclaimed as I saw him approaching towards my resting figure on the grass. However, to my surprise, the kid has 2 swollen eyes, a missing teeth and various bruises along his body. Seeing my wandering eyes at his figure, Rukyul said, "He, Celery did it? She got even more mad after I punched you and you went to sleep. She punched and kicked me until she got bored of it and went to sleep too." As he said the last part he pointed his finger to my side as I was able to see the sleeping figure of Celery while she hugged her knees. Her bruised knuckles were the only thing that gave away the savagery that such cute girl had on herself. Looking back at Rukyul, I pointed out at my face while making a punch. The kid seemed to think for a few moments what I wanted to say and shrugged of his shoulder as he started speaking. "Anyways, see how you weren't able to kick me after I stopped playing around? That's the most important rule a Saiyan should follow, never fight someone stronger than you." Seeing his grinning face, made me want to punch the kid face as his ingenuity, though since I was unable to even talk, I left him continue with his blabbing. "Now, since you were able to use your energy, you should be able to use now. Try it and then let's fly around." Seeing him sitting in front of me while looking at me with expectant eyes, I nodded my head and closed my eyes while I remembered the feeling I felt during those moments. It was like when one tensed his muscles, that heat and energy that irradiated was almost exactly to the feeling. Yet it was calm in some ways. As I recalled the feeling, I felt my heartbeat increasing while electric currents surged throughout my body. A humming sound started to reach my ears as I finally opened my eyes and was able to see an incredible sight. A whitish aura encroached my body while I felt my senses sharpening. Everything looked clearer and brighter. Sounds from all over the place reached my ears as I was able to process them without trouble. And the most important of all, I felt my body brimming with strength and energy. Looking over the sight I became, Rukyul seemed surprised and couldn't help but exclaim, "Hey, how did you did that? Father tried to taught me that but I couldn't do it." With a pout he looked over my figure. Shrugging off I showcased and smiled as I jumped on my feet and started throwing punches and kicks to the air. Swoosh. Whiz. As I continued trying my movements I felt Rukyul starting at me while remaining silent. Looking over him we both shared looks and then he said, "Where did you learn to move like that? Can you teach me?" As he finished saying that, he got on his feet while seemed eager to try. I nodded my head at him in affirmation though I signaled him with my hand about flying. I want to learn how to fly after all, that was my priority. If it was a training on itself, then I needed to grasp before even thinking about other stuff. Oh yes, I forgot about that. This is how I do. Thus, during the rest of the day Rukyul taught me the basics of flying. And with flying, came more training under him in the form of fighting in the air and heavy lifting of boulders. By the end of the day if I didn't passed out before, I would eat a bountiful meal in the form of roasted meat and the powder that was given to us to feed. While before sleeping I would try to meditate and control my ki. Although it was hard and laborious, thankfully the sequence of training, eating and sleeping came a welcomed habit. I was finally after all on my way to the power. Chapter 6, Full Moon. The days passed as our daily routine of training and fighting was starting to showcase its first benefits, at least in my own case. Not only was my body becoming lower and more resilient, but my speed and dexterity too. Although when Rukyul trained me seriously I was unable to follow his movements nor able to withstand even a small slap, I was able to keep up with his laxed form as he trained me. It was during these days that I used my own scouter, which was another red-lensed one, and scanned Rukyul. The little kid was the second strongest among us with 319 units of power, behind Celery who reigned above us all. When I showcased Rukul his power, the lass seemed happy as it seems like his power increased from the last time he scanned himself. Although with the amount of beating he received from Celery, it wasn't surprising. More than once I saw him crying alone in pain after a heavy beating from the little baby, and this was always because Rukul accessed to my demands of him using his whole power when fighting me and putting me to sleep for good. Thankfully he wasn't resentful of me and saw this as a good trait for a Saiyan. Thus I was always there to bring him food when he was crying and hear whatever he might wish to say after he cried out. I couldn't begin to imagine what he might be feeling. After all, he was still just a kid that was responsible of the well-being of 4 babies in a foreign world. In my own opinion, he was doing more than good his current job, as until now none of the kids fell ill nor they were passing hunger. What's more, I was able to see Rukul's figure disappearing through the night sometimes as I saw with my scouter how he got rid of individuals that seemed to lurk around our position. None of them were noticeable in terms of ki, with the most powerful barely reaching 28 units, yet Rukul has slain more than 20 until now and I was fearing that some kind of retaliation or bigger group would be sent to see what was going on. If they brought one of those figures with more strength than Celery, then it would be the end of us. Still, I tried to let that matter not interfere with my own progress, as after a few days I was able to raise my power level to 95 units. 6 units of ki in a short amount of time was extremely good in overall terms, as it was near a 8% increase, and that while just being a baby. Thus, I continued to train with Rukul under the watchful gaze of Celery as the little kid showcased me how to expel energy out of my body in ki blast forms. And when you feel that funny sensation on your finger, that's when you should let it out. The kid explained while pointing his index finger and letting out a yellowish ki blast escape from his finger in direction to the air. Boom. Papa said that the more skillful warriors could control those booms after they left their bodies. I don't know how they do it, but it would be too cool if I can do the same. The kid exclaimed with starts on his eyes. I simply assented to his words while I picture myself doing the same. Nonetheless, I also raised my hand and followed his steps. He didn't mention the pressure, damn it. I cursed in my head while feeling my finger about to burst itself from the sheer pressure that requires using such technique. Still, not losing my focus, I tried to gather a little more as I felt my finger slowly getting hotter and hotter until it became almost unbearable. And it was in that moment that I let it out the energy out of my finger and saw a white ki blast shooting away in the sky as its hot temperature made my whole hand sweat. Boom. The blast of the explosion made my hair move wildly as a sense of accomplishment encroached my being. They were baby steps, but seeing the results of the training was a much-needed impulse of motivation. More so when I have to think about the beings I'll have to face in the future of Dragon Ball. That was great, Ban. Good work. I hear Rukul exclaiming while a sincere smile adorned his face. I let out a chuckle while I approached him and patted on his shoulder in a way of thanking him. Swoon. Swish. Boom. A blinding light forced myself to cover my eyes as an extreme gust of wind accompanied by a heavy blast shocked my body. Alarmed by the amount of energy I felt, I looked over around to seek the origin of it, only to see Celery pointing her finger to the sky too. She then looked over me and let out her tongue while another ki blast started to form on her finger to moments later let it out. Boom! The sheer energy behind such a simple attack was astounding. Yet it was a reminder that stronger kids were around me, and seeing how quickly Celery picked up Rukul's teaching was enough to make me understand I needed to redouble my efforts in order to reach them. But reaching them won't be enough, I told to myself while I looked over Rukul, who was also looking at Celery. You're so strong, Celery. I heard him mutter while I sensed some fear on his voice. He then seemed to sense my gaze as he looked back at me and heard me mumbling my broken orations, Tainen Mo. I said to him while getting on my fighting posture. Although I was aware of the exceptional benefits of the Zenkai boost, I was in a precarious position as if I were to fall ill or injured badly, there wasn't any way to ensure a safety recover. Although we had the technology and the foundations of it in the onboard computers of the attack pods, we needed to build the tools, facilities, and the technology itself first and foremost. And with the amount of things required for a healing pod, I was sure that I wouldn't be able to use its benefits in a long time. Thus, I could only rely on the boosts that the fights with Rukul could bring me, that and the key training. It wouldn't be until a few hours that we finally stopped and went hunting the local fauna, a mix between a cow and the felines of the world of Avatar, the movie. A strange animal but with really tasty meat. As we made our way back to the crater, we heard Rukul speaking while I smiled as his recounts of the things he did in planet Vegeta. The others' kids seemed to heard him attentive as they eat to their fill content. It was already night, and the moons and stars started to encroach the entire canvas of the night sky. Seeing that the surrounding was for the first time not dimly illuminated, I turned over and looked at the moon out of impulse and sheer reflex. Yet when I noticed it being full, the last remaining shred of conscience let out an exclamation shit. I stayed rotted on my position while looking at the moon, as I feel my heartbeats increasing and my breath quickening. An immense feel of rage, violence, and savagery started to take hold of my rationality as I felt liberated. It seemed that I wasn't the only one who felt liberated, as 4 more giants figures of monkeys appeared around me, and with blind lust for destruction, they opened their mouth and lay waste to the surrounding land. The world trembled as the might of the Saiyan descendant during the moonlight. Grunar and Arkez were two boys, or normal orcs from a newly created tribe called waifus who were currently following a large army after they heard their call from their warlord. Although both were pretty much comfortable fighting off against humans near their cave, when the two of them heard of big and strong enemies, both couldn't help each other and in a matter of minutes were running back to their tribe. There they heard the words from their warlord and his nobs, a group of big and powerful orcs, about 5 different beasts that reassemble monkeys, destroying the southern mountains and killing various other orcs. With the promise of strong enemies and more importantly, tasty meat, his warlord didn't need to say much else before the first orcs went running away in search of these so-called giant monkeys. Thus, while mobilizing his tribe, the warlord Urzug marched south to meet the allegedly calamity with barely concealed excitement. "Hey Arkez, do you really think there are big monkeys strong enough like the boss said?" Grunar asked while caressing his bald green skull. Smacking the head of the orc, Arkez said to him while clenching his axe, "Uv course Grunar, are ye grots or something to ask for such a dumb thing? When did the boss failed to promise a wike?" At the mention of wike, various other orcs around started to scream wike, as they raised their speed and run forward. Something that quickly spread through the marching band as they run like lunatics in direction of the south. With their quick speed, they soon reached a barren land where they started to feel the ground trembling each second as the sound of explosions resounded everywhere. At the forefront of the army was the 9 feet tall Urzug wearing his battle armor while wielding his sword in one hand and his mechanical hand raised in the air. "I am Urzug from the Wardalig clan, come and face me Yerzi tupid monkeys." His deep and harsh voice resounded throughout the plains, for a moment diminishing the sound of explosions. Yet the next moment, the morning seemed to dawn as a light approached them, without giving time to the boys to react. A gigantic explosion engulfed the orc warband as thousands were sent flying around while hundreds were vaporized from the explosion. Seeing this, those who were able to remain on their feet screamed "Yaik!" with all their might as they launched themselves forward. Shrouded in a dark mist were 2 gigantic red eyes looking over them. With a roughly height around 120 feet, the figure walked forward and every orc was able to see their foe. Cladded in a black armor with brown pauldrons and gallants, was a black-furred monkey with a mouth filled with sharp fangs looking at the green ants in front of him with clear rage. Seeing their colossal enemy, the orcs shouted in craziness and excitement as they flooded towards their enemy position. Seeing the swarm, the Uzuru gathered energy around its mouth once again and with it, illuminated the wasteland once again as he sent the blast towards the warband, vaporizing hundreds and killing thousands from the extreme blast that pulverized their organs and brains. Seeing his boys being killed like flies, Urzug roared and charged forward with his sword on hand. If he survived this battle, his name would bring more and more orcs under his banner, and with that, he'll wage wike to the humans. As more of his orcs were flattened to the ground as the Uzuru stomped its feet, fists, and tail around, Urzug jumped towards the Uzuru head as he eyed to blind the beast. Yet before he could react, the Uzuru looked over the big orc jumping mid-air in front of him and in a quick motion, gathered energy on its eyes while blasting it towards the orc warlord. Urzug received the full brunt of the attack as he was shooed away from the colossal figure. His chest was completely vaporized as only his head, waist, and limbs fell around the battlefield. Seeing their warlord slain, the orcs' nobs screamed as they retreated from the battlefield with whoever might heard them. Arkez and Grunar watched with awe and reverence at the giant monkey as it killed hundreds upon hundreds of their brethren with each attack. Yet the continued blast from the Uzuru mouth was the thing that stayed rooted on their mind. Both orcs looked at each other and then in a moment of understanding, both launched at the same time towards the Uzuru, seemingly wanting to die fighting rather than retreat. As they made their way through the craters and corpse-filled terrain, they approached the leg of the Uzuru as it was focused on killing the retreating figures with mouth blasts, giving enough time for both orcs to raise their axes and slash at the Uzuru's legs. As it felt the sharp pain of the attacks, the Uzuru stopped his attack and looked downwards the 2 orcs who screamed something unintelligible for him. Angered by their antics and the pain, the Uzuru grabbed both of them with its hands and with a swift motion, crushed them on its fists. Hearing them shouting in pain and seeing the blood flowing from their orcish mouths, the Uzuru grinned at their sight and with a growling laugh tossed them aside. With his focus now on following the trail of the green monsters that dared to attack him. When the 2 orcs landed on the ground, both of them were unable to even utter a groan as their bones, organs and muscles were crushed under the almighty strength of the Uzuru. Yet on their ugly faces a smile could be seen adorning it, as they slowly felt their vision darkening while their ears picked the thunderous roar of the Uzuru and its continuing rampage. On their minds, the mighty figure was forever imprinted as they went unconscious from their wounds. Only Gorko and Morko sure of their fate. Chapter 7, Rationality. A feeling of harmony, peace, and comfort enveloped my being as I rested. It was only when the brightness became too distracting that I finally opened my eyes. As I watched the clouds in the celestial firmament in a state of convalescence from such a deep sleep, it was then that memories and feelings began to return to my mind as if a movie was taking place. Forests and mountains destroyed in seconds before the implacable power that the transformation gave me. Rivers of blood from hundreds of bodies lying inert in the wild and destroyed field. Craters where only ashes remained of those hit and vaporized by my attacks. The smell of death, fear, and blood was still impregnated in my nose while my eyes opened like saucers before what happened. The memories of how powerful and liberated I felt made such horrifying memories have a different tinge. My human mind and reasoning wanted to judge what I did and lived. But I simply closed my eyes and tried to take a deep breath. Still appalled by what happened, I could not allow myself to focus on the negative. I was a Saiyan now, and my most urgent need was power and survival. There would be time to contemplate the violent nature of who I became. Trying to recall the incredible power I wielded during those hours, I tried to focus on remembering how easy it was for the transformation to control ki. It was amazing to think that such a wild transformation allowed such ease of using ki. It was like a second nature, just like breathing. So I tried to replicate my achievements of the night before. I sat there while I tried to get that almighty feeling coursing through my body. Thus, I managed to feel my body floating slowly as energy made its way through every space of my body, without leaving even a small crane of my body untraveled. Although the powerful feeling I felt was still far away, the doors were open. It seems that the transformation to Uzuru is necessary for the Saiyans and their continued growth of power. I thought to myself after analyzing and comparing the results. The ease of moving the energy in my body had shot through the roof. It was as if I had previously clogged pipes full of garbage, and now I could move it without any kind of obstruction. Opening my eyes again, I tried to keep controlling my ki in different ways, be it projecting my energy to my palm and fingers while preventing the energy from shooting out. Although I failed miserably in the first few attempts, I did not allow myself to break from my current concentration as I noticed that I was in the zone and tried to make the most of this moment of enlightenment. Thanks to this, I was finally able to project 2 balls of energy into my palms while moving them in coordination with my movements as I tried different fighting postures. Dazzled by my accomplishment, I avoided thinking about the terrible hunger I was feeling at that moment as I continued my ki training. Although I was oblivious to the depths of the nature of ki itself, I tried in my mind to get an idea of what it represented. Thanks to this I was able to get a basic idea that I was able to understand as I found silence and peace. In one hand there was the aspect of physical ki, which was what gave me strength. And on the other, the one I felt, which was nourished by emotions. The latter was something I noticed when I was in my Uzuru transformation, when it seemed that my ki increased tenfolds as I became more powerful in moments where rage and anger consumed me. There was also another nature of ki, but I was really unable at this point to discern its nature, so I did not delve deeper and proceeded to venture further into my enlightenment. I should try to perceive the ki of others, I thought to myself, as I forced a part of my ki outward and tried to perceive my surroundings. However, all I received was an enormous amount of information that caused me to lose not only my concentration, but also my awareness. It wasn't until several hours later that I woke up again, and this time it was Rukyul's familiar voice, as he was glad to found me. During the whole ordeal, most of us separate with each other after fighting off. Celery and I went to one side while Rukyul, Ramala, and Aprit went to other. Thus, with all of us passing out, it took almost a day for Rukyul to use his scouter and pick us all. Luckily we flew fast back towards our campment, although what was once a green and lush forest, was now a barren wasteland filled with craters and devoid of all life. During the flight I was able to notice the sheer amount of destruction caused by us and I was left rendered speechless. Only some spare pieces of grass was left behind as dozens of kilometers around were flattened and utterly destroyed. Seeing this, we decided to move away from the current campment as there wasn't any hiding spot to hide ourselves while we grow up. We then spent the whole night moving away from the original location and built a cave in one faraway mountain to remain as our home, while at the same time to prevent another full moon incident. After getting the information of the next full moon for the computer on board, I draw on the cave walls a calendar with the days that we should avoid to look outside, much to Rukyul's surprise. Although I was asked in regards of how I was able to read and write, I simply shrugged off while I continued training. However, our little incident seemed to create enormous shockwaves throughout the planet, as we had to many times watch with concern various armies and warbands scouting our previous campments while seemingly powerful figures emerged to search for us. Although I was able to recognize the humans on some of these warbands, I paid little regards as I acknowledged the menace we currently were. Luckily it was during this time that I finally was able to talk, although with some slurred words. Rukyul was more than happy to have someone to chat with, and with me able to influence directly his decisions, we finally saw advances in our goals and objectives. Unbeknownst to us, however, the wheel of destiny had begun to turn, as our first interaction with this world set off a domino effect that would forever change the fate of this galaxy, and with it, the power of the Saiyan race made its first appearance on stage. The total loss of fertile land has reached nearly 15%, which will undoubtedly affect our production for the tithe. And that's not counting the various cities and artisans lost in the attacks. A stern voice, belonging to a woman, echoed through the high ceilings of the vast chamber. Ebony marble floors and walls carved with various motifs, statues, and figures adorned the chamber, while a large chandelier of exceptional craftsmanship displayed the luxury and wealth of its owner. In the center of the chamber lay a large black table of fine and exquisite wood, above it an artifact that revealed the image of a refined and beautiful woman. Seated, watching her from his imported armchair, was a middle-aged man. The silver hair on the sides hinted that his age was certainly advanced, yet the jet black of his remaining hair, as well as his mustache and beard, showed that even in his age, this man enjoyed vitality. Accentuated by his elegant and refined surroundings, the man was dressed in fine fabrics that revealed a remarkable sophistication in fashion. I will call for help. This is far beyond what the planet's defenses can do. Ruinous powers may be the ones who have brought or summoned such beasts. The man's deep, raspy voice answered the woman, his tone strident but weary. Be that as it may, we cannot let this situation continue forward, even more so when I ignored the plague problem of those filthy Xenos. At the thought of the orc invasion his planet was suffering, the man could not help but form an expression of disgust and contempt. As you command, my lord, I will try to keep you informed. The woman's voice echoed once more so that the image was lost and silence buried the room. For a long moment the man stood frowning at his desk in silence as different thoughts ran through his head. Letting out a long sigh, the man shook his head and muttered to himself, let's hope we get a quick response from the administratum. After all, the imperial tithe will be affected by this. And like an oracle sorcerer, the man was to be ignorant of how real his concern would be. Time flew by as Bann and the others accommodated to their lives. With their daily routine of training, fighting, eating and sleeping, the kids grew stronger and healthy as the months passed by. It was during this time that Bann began to take a strong interest in learning what he could about Saiyan technology. The need for a recovery capsule was a priority for him if he wanted to further improve his training results. However, the more Bann learned, the more he realized how difficult the situation he found himself in was. Without someone with Bulma's intellect at his side, it was going to take not only time but patience and luck for him to replicate the technology. Not only that, but also the fact that the most basic materials for the manufacture of the basic tools required a process that Bann himself acknowledged he was incapable of producing. It was then that, seeing such a difficult situation, he listened to the orders given again by the computer in command and found the solution to the problem. The same Saiyans who were with him should each take a role so that they could make progress. It was then that he asked Ruly about the instructions they had been given and what orders they had. And the answer was simple and effective. Each member of the team has a responsibility and an order to make technological and social progress. Understand this to mean taking on a role and fulfilling the duty to reproduce to repopulate our species. With order in hand, Bann began to teach Ruly as much as he could about what was most necessary for the future of the team. Not letting the little boy fall into his frequent depressive episodes, Bann forced him to listen to the military organization of the Saiyans, the training they received on the planet Vegeta and the different types of martial arts they used. It was there that they also heard the message that Ruly's father had left Ruly about how to control the Uzuro transformation and maintain rationality in order to squeeze the most out of its power. With such important knowledge in consideration, the two began to train their minds to become stronger mentally. However, this training was complicated and required a great deal of discipline, which although Ruly had plenty of at his young age, it was not enough to overshadow his normal nature, for he was, after all, a mere child. However, even with the slow progress in controlling the Uzuro transformation, the children never stopped growing. Within the first year of arriving on the planet, Bann had seen his fighting power rise to 140 units, while Ruly had seen his grow to a respectable 410 units. However, even so, Ruly still couldn't avoid overtaking Celery, who remained the strongest among them with 426 units. Although the little girl was not the one who was training the most with Bann and Ruly, the fact that she was constantly fighting with someone at Ruly's level and flying almost all day long, was enough for the talented baby to keep her advantage so far. On the other hand, Ramala and Aprit, being the last to join the training and fights, improved the least, with both coming in at 307 and 306 respectively. Even so, these two still had a level of power that Bann could only hope to reach in another few months or years, depending on how successful his approach to training was. As the months passed, the growth of the small squadron of Saiyans increased even more, while the world around them was thrown into change and chaos. Bann and Ruly watched the changes and events closely. After all, this world would be the springboard that would propel the Saiyans into the future, and though they were still in the shadows learning and growing, they did not remain ignorant of their surroundings. Growing up observant of the world around them and of Bann's guiding figure, the rest of the children learned to speak. The cave they lived in was filled with talk, laughter, and play. Bann and Ruly took on the de facto role of father and / or older brother to their peers, with the former even overlapping Ruky's role as trainer by his 5th year on the planet and never losing it since. Although over the years it became much more complicated to keep the group still in the shadows and observant, the squadron of Saiyans remained patient, waiting for the day when they could finally show themselves in all their splendor. However, it was during the 12th year that every plan made by Bann and Ruly was affected, and that the planet Faradras finally got the help they asked for more than a decade ago. The full amount of the imperial tribute had failed for over 12 years, and finally the empire had sent not only an emissary to account, but a fleet to attend to the cataclysm that occurred. It was time to pay. Chapter 8, Faradras. The Imperium of mankind is vast and extensive, and among its millions of worlds, one can find all sorts of features. Some may be veritable bastions where every meter of land is meticulously planned to aid in defense and battle, while at the same time, there are worlds where their only reason for being and existing is the pleasure of vices such as gambling and sex. However, there are also worlds where the function of these worlds is the simple subsistence of the humans that inhabit them. Faradras belongs to this type of world, more precisely it is a feudal world. A type of world where, unlike other parts of the galaxy, technology was intentionally set back to the time of swords and arrows, where lords and nobles rule over their serfs who do not see their lives altered. In all the galaxy, only on the feudal worlds can one find one constant, order. Complete and utter order. While on other worlds men make and forge their fate, on the feudal worlds you are what you are born. If your father was a blacksmith, you will be a blacksmith for the rest of your life and so will your children. And though to many this may sound frightening, certainly many would prefer the simple, forced, and honored life of these worlds, rather than witness other horrors that happen in others' worlds more free, so to speak. For a feudal world, Faradraz is quite populated with a population of over 400 million inhabitants. They were spread over one main continent and several subcontinents. Although several city-states and kingdoms rose, they all answered to the supreme ruler of this world, who was their planetary governor. It was he who was responsible for ensuring that disputes did not go beyond certain limits that would impede the functioning of the world, so that its annual tide would never be too short of time and with the exact amount. It was also responsible for organizing the planet's defenses in case of need, and thus it was the only one who could call upon the empire itself for help when the world's forces were overwhelmed. Fortunately for Faradraz, few were interested enough in such worlds to invade them. That is why many worlds of these types enjoyed such absolute peace and tranquility that they were never aware that they even belonged to the empire of humanity itself, as many generations would only live their lives without the Imperium's intervention in their world, aside from the witches that would be sent away. Only the reminder of their lord in the heavens was the only thing they knew beyond them, and his 9 angelic sons who wielded their flaming swords at their enemies in divine retribution. The word of the ecclesiarchy was even more respected than the word of kings on the planet, and rightly so, for kingdoms rose and fell, while the divine word was constant and absolute. Castles rose and crumbled while detailed and ostentatious cathedrals remained unchanged from their construction thousands of years in the past. They were the only reminder to Faradraz of the origin of all. In all, there were 3 cathedrals in the world, each in a major capital city where a significant part of the population gathered around it. Long population centers where lords and nightingales fought for control and influence over banal desires, such as land, power, and glory. One of these bustling cities was Redentia, a long-lasting bastion of humanity that was built long before dynasties, houses, and kingdoms. From an age of glory that only walls have seen and known its past. Many armies marched through its streets, the grand palace has seen many kings and queens be crowned and buried. Yet the city remained still and strong as rivers of blood cleansed the dust of time. The flesh of the fallen made trees rise strong and steady as they had yet to wither of old. On its ancient streets, kids of all ages could be seen running amidst the heavy transit as the workers saw with some happiness the youthful joy that many shared once before their duties befalled upon them. And although tricksters and punks, many among the adults agreed that none should condemn the ways that these kids should act, as it wouldn't be long before those times of laugh and happiness would fade under the laborious routine of work. "Can you remind me why are we here, Bann?" A bratty feminine voice could be heard amidst the bustling street. Clad in a brown hood covering her whole visage, nothing stands out aside from her alien language. Beside her, a much larger figure that dwarfed the kids and scrawny men could be seen walking, also clad in a brown hood. "We haven't been able to collect enough data for the scouters to learn their language." His deep voice made the female beside him feel her chest vibrating at each word he said. "Yeah, but that's the thing. Why should we bother learning their language instead of making them learn ours? They're not important at all," the female added while a hint of exasperation could be felt in her tone. Looking around the different faces of the people in the city, the man spoke once again. "I've told you many times, Celery, that these people are important for our plans. If we wish to return to our planet, we need their hands and minds working on our cause." Some people looked over the man's direction as they looked with surprise and fear at his figure. His booming voice and foreign language were eye-catching and shocking altogether. The girl named Celery seemed to let out a chuckle and answered him back. "These people? Just look at them, they are pathetic and worst of all, weak." As she said these words, she eyed with contempt at the surprised faces of the people around her that were eyeing both. They even seem to feel fear for our foreign language." She pointed out with her chin at a mother trying to hide her kids from their view. Bann looked over where she pointed and could only let out a sigh of exasperation. They have seen the same attitude in the many cities, towns, and villages they went through. There are many things that don't make sense at all, Bann thought to himself while reminiscing certain things he saw throughout the years they had been living on this planet. Raising his gaze towards the sky, he remembered there are ships and spatial technology in that space station, yet the world itself is stagnated in the Middle Ages. But why? What's the point of it? The more he thought about the issue, the less sense it made for him, as various threats were looming around the planet, such as the orcs that Bann has been killing and beating non-stop for more than 10 years. These orc kind of beasts are way above what the local garrison could face. If not for us, they would have already wiped out whole cities. Remembering the scene a few weeks ago, Bann felt his blood pumping. Rivers of blood and mountains of bodies filled a valley not so far from the current city they were in. Alongside Rukyul, they fought against a column that was moving towards the city that held at least 100,000 orcs, which carried alongside them many other small beats and little fellas. And that was just one of the many that we've been killing these months. Bann thought that his staying in this world would be a more peaceful one, yet he has been fighting the green pest for a long time now, and although it was a great way to try out the techniques he's been learning until now, it was tiresome work. More so when endless waves of these orcs appeared with more frequency than before. I wonder how long it would be until a horde would appear in this city before we could react. Bann wondered to himself as he appreciated the feudal architecture that reminded him of his previous life. And that's why we need to learn their language, so we don't stand out and make them fear us without reason. As he said his last word, Bann advanced further, although Celery looked over his back with a raised brow. Why did he let out his key? She asked herself as she let out a sigh and followed him. Don't tell me you're planning to do the same thing as Rukyul and Aprit. Celery asked after a moment of contemplation as she eyed Bann's actions. Which one exactly? He asked her back as kids ran away scared of his voice. The one where they pick some of these weaklings to breed them. Celery spat out her words as she eyed the various females in the street with contempt and disgust. Bann couldn't help but let out a chuckle as he answered her truthfully. Well, since only Ramala appealed to Aprit's pleas, it is normal for Rukul and I to recur to these females. We must fulfill our duty after all. Sensing a key raising after his words left his mouth, Bann added, unless of course, you are willing to take their place, which is something that would prevent me from reaching out to them. Looking back at Celery, he saw her face getting crimson as she looked over his eyes with indignation, but also shame. I told you I would not let someone weaker to fancy over me. She pointed at him with her finger as she felt her cheeks burning as so if you want to take me you better keep training. As she said those words she didn't wait for Bann to answer her as she moved forward. Bann could only laugh at her words as he answered her, well, if you keep trying to kill these people then it would be a faraway dream for you to be fancied by me. I need those healing pods to keep training. Hearing him laughing and his words, Celery could only keep fuming while she breathed in deep trying to calm herself. That is unless you decide to loosen up and let me get you. As Bann said those words, he saw Celery stopping on her track and looking back at him. Seeing her surprised expression he winked at her as he continued walking. Yet the girl just keep looking at him while her heartbeats keep rising like drums. Getting back on her senses she jolted back beside him as she looked over more meek than before yet she continued chattering with him. So, after learning their language what are we supposed to do? She asked while gazing carefully at Bann's expressions. Tilting his head sideways he told her the next step of their plan we'll try to approach the authorities and try to get a deal with them. Since we already own some villages that are working under us, we'll try and see if we can reach a mutual agreement first. Celery noted a certain sarcasm behind his voice and asked, and if not? Bann let out a laugh and looked over her. We'll make them understand their position and make their fear justified. But why don't we do that foremost instead of trying to negotiate with ants? It doesn't make sense. Celery told him her opinion. Nodding his head at her rationing he explained, and you're right, but it's always better to make them feel as if they have some sort of decision on the matter, even if they're not. After all, it would make them happier and easier to control. Hearing his explanation, Celery didn't look convinced still, yet she only answered with a whatever. Beep beep beep. The sound of their scouters made both stop chattering while walking as different notifications appeared on their screens. Finally, it took a while until it gathered all the information. Exclaimed Bann as he eyed the result of the analysis. I can't believe this small planet had these many variants of a language. It's awful, said Celery with disgust on her face. After all, she didn't even learn one language until now as she deemed their language as one beneath their mother tongue. Low Gothic? That's a peculiar name. Bann muttered under his breath while remembering the language back on his home world. I didn't know Akira Toriyama was this acknowledged in ancient languages. Until now Bann thought that the planet they were residing in currently still belonged to the Dragon Ball universe. Still beneath the universal language that we since spoke. Added Celery after hearing his commentary. Well, I'm going to try the live translation until I learn enough. Bann said to her as he touched the scouter that was hiding behind his black mane under the hood. As the unintelligible ratter and chatting that was around them became clear, both Bann and Celery started to grasp the livelihood of the citizens of this city. And as they continued walking more and more the streets, a look of seriousness and confusion was on Bann's face. And our Lord Almighty will guide us all through the veil of darkness that always threatens to encroach our lives. Do not hear the whispers of the wicked as they want to lure your soul to their wretched hands to live the eternity away from the warmth light of the Lord in heaven. As Bann continued hearing the words of one of the many preachers that seemed to abound on the streets of the city, he couldn't help but feel that something important was missing from his knowledge. What is that I'm missing? He thought to himself, yet not for long as he heard someone shouting near him. Look, a star of iron is falling. Take cover. The Lord has been angered. Looking over the various ships and aircraft descending towards the city, Bann looked over Celery with a frown. It was the first time that one of these ships appeared over a city in all the years they'd been exploring this world. Those key are way above the average. Celery told him as they both focused their senses in the direction of the ships. There are hundreds of these numbers. Bann muttered while he eyed carefully the ball of fire. Yet when one of the ships became clearer from the smoke and fire, Bann felt his throat squeeze while his stomach turned upside down. It can't be. He could only mutter in horror at the visage of a double-headed eagle in golden, and the various motifs of skull and machinery. Those logos, they are. His mind was in complete and utter chaos as they could only belong to one universe, one that he knew little but enough to frighten him. The air finally passed through his squeezed throat and let out a whisper. It's Warhammer. Chapter 9, Heaven Sent. I've already sent more than 40 different calls throughout the choir, yet it was until now that it was answered. A strident voice could be heard resounding in the ample chamber as a man with silver hair sat upon his throne. In front of him, various figures clad in strange clothes were hearing his words with raised chins as they eyed him. On some of them it could be seen a red laser eye that added another layer of coldness on their stoic faces. Although I am foreigner of the procedures used by the administratum, I do apologize on their behalf. Though that's no reason for the lack of efforts put on the completion of the imperial tribute, Your Highness Commander, said one of the men at the forefront, clad in a mix between golden regalia and armor. After hearing his words, many beside him nodded their heads in agreement as they eyed the now visibly irritated Imperial commander of Feridras, getting antsy on his seat. Yet instead of lashing out at the man that said such words to him, he knew otherwise. Indeed, Inquisitor Gannicus, it was a mistake from my part, one that now could be compensated with a negotiation of my current resources, as Feridras will comply with whatever shall you request. The Commander Kalos said, as he tried to suppress the rage behind his voice, yet failing miserably as almost everyone on the chamber was able to notice that he wasn't happy with their late arrival. But such was the fate of many worlds and they couldn't do anything against the lack of efficiency from the administratum. So be it. Now regarding the matter of my presence here, I heard 5 different beasts devastated this world. Could you please give me more information? The raspy voice of the Inquisitor Gannicus resounded through the chamber as the commander sat uncomfortable at the mention of the 5 beasts. Noticing the change of atmosphere, the general of the Imperial Guard that came alongside the Inquisitor, with other delegates that accompanied them furrowed their brows in attention. The first time they appeared it was more than 12 years ago. They came out of nowhere, razed the land, destroyed mountains and rivers, and killed thousands of our defense forces. All in the span of one night. By the dawn of the next day, they were nowhere to be seen as the only confirmation of their existence were the various craters on the landscape. From then on, we only have just one report of their appearance, but the only witness was a deranged man that couldn't add too much to the report. Commander Kalos told them with a weary tone on his voice. What was their appearance? And what they were capable of? Describe them for me. The Inquisitor asked with a serious frown in his face. The Commander Kalos could only let out a sigh as he recalled the description given by the various lords on the planet as he opened his mouth. They were titanic, brown furried beasts that held some resemblance with monkeys. Their sharp mouths could eat a man and his horse as a whole, while their fist could destroy mountains with ease. Their eyes were red just like the blood that flowed through their mouths, and it seemed like they could use some sort of energy attacks from their mouths and hands as they pleased. He then reached to his side as he motioned one of his servants to bring him his jug of wine, gulping down the liquid as he felt his throat dry while recounting such description. You are completely sure that they held some resemblance with monkeys? The Inquisitor asked him with an icy tone. Eyeing the man, the commander was able to see a clear look of contempt from the man. Letting out a chuckle out of exasperation, Kalos answered him, yes, that is what they told me. A 40-meter-tall monkey beast that decimated entire armies and towns. Breathing deep, the Inquisitor Gannicus nodded his head and turned around. I thank your highness for your time. The gentleman here would discuss further the new agreement for the tithe whilst I'll be heading towards the planet. May the Emperor protect you, Commander Kalos. He left those words as he headed outside. May his light guide you, Inquisitor Gannicus. The commander answered him back as he looked over the different officials as they approached him with different documents at hand. It would be a tedious day for the commander after all. Dozens of ships were heading towards the large squares on the center of Redentia. The fortress of the city held more than 5 different squares built up from hard stone that was able to withstand the weight of the different machines that were descending from the transport ships. Alongside them were the various companies were forming ranks while hearing the shouts of their captains. Witnessing the event was the current highest noble of Redentia, and the responsible of its defense, Aurora Fenitos. Clad in her noble clothes that covered her whole body, she towered over her servants at her side that looked at the spectacle with surprise and reverence. Her red fiery hair in a ponytail alongside her icy blue eyes gave Aurora a detached and dignified demeanor, while her thick lips and small round nose showcased her beauty to the world. Yet those who knew her were aware of her cunning and merciless attitude. Thus remained to be a dangerous rose filled with thorns. 10 years late. Aurora murmured under her breath as she clenched her fist, her blue eyes throwing venom at the sight of the men of the Imperium that were looking over at the foreign world. Ensure that our guests are well fed, and call Minister Agrippo towards my office. Aurora ordered to her servants as she looked one last time at the Imperial guards. She then turned around and left the balcony. As the various doors on the large palace were open in front of her, different individuals started to flock beside her. Be it clan heads, lesser nobles and military officers that wanted to know the identity of those that appeared on their capital out of nowhere. Yet Aurora remained with tight-shut lips as she continued her ways towards her office, only giving glances for those that stepped out of their boundaries and demanded answers for her. It has become importunate the lack of information regarding our pledge and loyalty to the Empire, she thought to herself while reminiscing the time she also uncovered the truth. The sense of dread was minimal compared to awe she felt to the Empire itself and its long-lasting legacy on their world. The tales and stories of heroes of long-forgotten eras were the fuel she used to build herself upon the woman she was today. She wished the best for her kin, but also to leave a long-lasting name of herself to be forever remembered. Lady Aurora, what did you require me for? Suddenly the familiar voice of her minister, and the only one that could help her manage the current madness that has become Redentia, reached her ears. Turning towards the origin, she saw the elderly man with a bald spot on his crown and white hair surrounding it. Different from the rest of people with fancy and expensive clothes, the man wore a piece of humble shirt and pants that has seen many years and parchments. Yet when she saw his green eyes that held profound knowledge and wisdom, it made her let out a sigh of relief as she answered him, Agrippo, there's a lot talk about, please get inside so we can start. She then turned towards the retinue that followed her, raising her eyes in surprise seeing at least 50 different people. And ladies and gentlemen, I will answer all your questions after I finish my meeting with Minister Agrippo. Until then please leave the zone. She gestured with her hands towards the door as she eyed them with confidence, knowing quite well that each one of them wasn't happy at all with her words, yet none voice out their discontent and simply left out the place in order. Turning back towards her study, she closed the door behind her and said to Agrippo, "So, where do I begin? I don't know why he's so persistent with seeing those ships and soldiers," asked to herself Celery as she eyed at Bann, who was looking at the soldiers being deployed from the transport ships. "Ever since we were able to see clearly those ships he's been like this. Does he know who they are? But how?" she asked to herself as she remembered the frantic walk that Banns did while moving towards the fortress. They were now hiding in a spot on the wall while eyeing the continuous movement from the Imperial Guard. Yet Bann remained with a poker face as he didn't stop looking over the humans since they reached the place. "Would you please tell me why you look so concerned about these people?" she asked once again, the same question, yet different from the 9 times before. Her childish voice seemed to reach Bann's head as he snapped towards her and answered. "They are the Imperium of humanity," he said to her with a frown on his face, yet when Bann saw the confused look on Celery's face, he knew that she wasn't aware of what they were facing currently. Shaking his head, he said to her, "What I want to say is that our plans might change from now on. Their appearance would only further complicate what we had in mind." Though she heard what Bann said to her, Celery felt that he wasn't telling her all that was on his mind. More so when she saw for the first time his face showcasing fear. "But fear for what? We can always blast away all these ants' ships and they wouldn't be able to do nothing against us." Celery eyed the ships, seemingly looking for some kind of weapon that could threaten them. Yet she saw none. "So what's going to be now? Are we going to follow the plan of negotiation with these weaklings?" She spat the question at Bann. The latter shook his head as he raised on his feet while answering, "We won't be able to negotiate with them." He then paused briefly as he scanned over the different figures on the square. Moving back his gaze towards Celery, he continued, "But that doesn't mean we won't be able to use the people from this world. We'll have to take another approach." Celery raised her brows as she looked over Bann with question marks all over her childish face. Seeing her antics, Bann let out a chuckle and said to her, "Don't worry, we would take care of it. For now I'll keep recording images so we can go back to the base. Wait a little bit longer." He then moved his hands towards the head of Celery as he patted her. The latter just nodded her head and let herself be lost in thoughts as they continue eyeing the regiment form ranks. "If we're in Warhammer, then I'll have to get in my hand a healer. That would work until we get enough manpower to extract the resources for the technology." Bann started planning with the new rules on the game. After all, he couldn't keep crying over his new reality. He was a Saiyan now. He had an advantage that no one in this universe has aside from him, and he would make sure to exploit it fully. "I need to get my hand into Psychers ASAP, not only to train my mind, but also to gauge how in defense the rest of the squad would be facing the forces of chaos." For Bann, the maximum threat was the chaos, as he was almost sure that physically nothing would harm them seriously in the Warhammer universe. But their minds were another thing. More so when he knew how much the Saiyan physiognomy affected their judgment. It was a mix of both the conditionament they were put into when they were launched, as they left the computer on board repeating a speech for the complete duration of their flight, and the aggressive nature of Saiyans. Bann, who was perfectly aware of his personality back on Earth, saw various changes on his attitude. Be it his facility to kill, his sheer pleasure to break bones, and the blood-pumping feeling of fighting. It was completely different of who he was back before, yet he was helpless against his own body. And that was exactly what made him fearful of the unknown. Tha represents the chaos. He wasn't aware of how much would the whispers of gods and demons would affect not only his mind, but of those he was teaming up with. "I don't even want to think about one of those kids getting possessed by demons." The notion sent shivers down his spine. Still, now with this change of plans, it would be more wise to keep them in the dark regarding the Zenkai boost, he thought to himself while his eyes wandered towards Celery. Although she was physically 16 years old, she still remained with a childlike body until now. Most of them didn't grow up yet, so it's better if they reach their zenith first, and then I would see if it's worthwhile to showcase them the training, Bann decided. Although the situation at first seemed like the worst one possible, he was now able to see that not only things were looking good for them, but the possibility of healers that could enable him exploit the Zenkai boost at will was heaven sent. Chapter 10, The Way of Saiyans. After making sure to record most of the deployment of the Imperial Guard, both Bann and Celery moved back towards the city to escape. Although this time different from other times before, they didn't flew over towards their base. Bann was aware that the Imperial Guard was most likely wary of things that flew over the skies of this world, more so when it was such a backward one. After all, flying and levitation wasn't a thing in Warhammer, as far as Bann knew, so it would be a dumb way to give themselves away. Thus, without other option than jumping through the terrain, both Bann and Celery made their way back towards the mountain chain that became their base. On their path, they also patrolled over the few villages they had under their control. It wasn't anything crazy, just a bunch of people that gave them food and resources in exchange of security. This was something that Bann came up with a few years ago, mostly as a test to see how the locals would react to them and how much they would be able to bargain something from them. And he was glad that he made the choice. After all, not only they benefited from it by having lots of meal that were prepared with expertise hands of mothers and fathers, but also gave him a time to relax and chat with other people that wasn't a bunch of kids. Thus, it marked the beginning of a good relationship between the Saiyans and some inhabitants of this world, as the exotic nature of the Saiyans was a welcome novelty to the villagers who saw the theft of their cattle and lands reduced to zero, all in exchange of food and some minerals they were asked sometimes. After getting their hands on a piece of meat for their dinner, Bann and Celery bid their farewell to the nearest village from their base as they soon entered the cave they made their home. Inside were April and Ramela eating together after it seemed to be a battle between each other. Both were wearing their battle armor although without gloves and their scouter. After so many years, Ramela was the only one aside from Bann and Rucule that was transitioning from childhood towards adulthood. And although she still held the same childish face, she was getting taller than April and Celery while some parts of her body started to also grow. Her black mane was untamed and reached her lower back. If it wasn't for the trimming that Celery gave her, her hair would have long ago covered her whole face. Her thick and muscular thighs, alongside her powerful arms, showcased that she was well fed during all this time. But her innocent smile was the reminder that the girl still have the attitude of a kid. Well, the attitude of a Saiyan kid. Meanwhile April still has a child body, although not tall at all. With his 4 feet 6 inches feet he looked like a normal brat. Though just like Ramela and pretty much all the Saiyans, his musculature was extremely developed for a kid. His back was starting to become wide while his arms and legs started to also bulk up as he approached his puberty. He too still held his childish features alongside baby fat on both cheeks. His once caramel skin took a darker tone as he spent many hours alongside Bann and Rucule training outside under the sun. His wild long curls gave him an untamed look, although instead of getting an afro the kid hair was growing downwards. If someone's convince him to get braids or dreadlocks would be a great improvement for his appearance. Bann thought to himself as April eyed him. Cleaning his mouth with his forearm, the kid asked him what is it. A frown could be seen on his face. Bann smirked at his question and expression while answered him nothing. It seemed like you lost once again at Ramela, heh. Hearing his words April's body tremble a little in rage, yet he decided to gulp down his food and breath deep to calm himself. He has already been beaten enough by Ramela to start a fight against Bann which he didn't know that he would be able to win. Thus he decided to follow the steps given by Rucule to calm himself down. Seeing the kid not falling to his words Bann just let out a chuckle and said to them, well, since you both already ate I will only make this for the 3 of us. He pointed towards the sizable piece of meat on his shoulder while he started to laugh at the distraught expression on both kids. Walking forward he headed towards the kitchen of their base while Celery never left his side. His footsteps echoed through the corridor built up from a special alloy, made by their crude technology. After so many years studying the various chapters of information left on their board computer, Rucule was finally able to start building machines and other tools that helped to build their base and exploit the resources of the mountain they were currently in. He has made great strides towards unlocking the rest of the technology, and I've been a helpful hand cutting his hair and beard. Bann thought to himself proudly. Before dying he was a proud barber on his city. His Instagram page was successful and many celebrities came to his place to get their haircut and beard trimmed. And although he tried to learn the Saiyan technology, he quickly assessed like the good boss he was that sometimes, you need to stick up with what you're good at. He didn't finish high school for a reason. Thus he promoted himself to the unique title of Saiyan Barber, a title that he made sure to boast when it was necessary. I may not be a genius, but I'll be a guy with drip. He reassured to himself as he smiled towards Celery who looked at him with interest. He then took a few minutes to get the ingredients to prepare his special sauce to cook the meat while some vegetables of alien look were on the table. Although Saiyans were capable of eating almost anything, they always preferred to eat something tasty. After finishing preparing the meat and the vegetables, he moved both hands to the side while the meat stayed on the middle of them, then gathered key on his hand while focusing on not burning the whole meat. Thus with patience, he started to cook for the inside to outside the meat until it reached the point of well done. He then increased the temperature and gave the exterior of the meat a golden layer. After ensuring that his food was well cooked, he took 3 trays and placed meat alongside vegetables on them, with a good amount of food remaining to be refilled once they finished their meat. With trays in both hands and his on his tail, he sat on the table alongside Celery who took her tray and started wolfing down the food. He placed the other one towards the seat where Rucule would take and lastly took his while his left hand touched his scouter and called to Rucule, food's ready, come now. He only heard a grunt in response. Without waiting any longer he started to eat his food with joy written on his face. He only raised his eyes when he heard the sound of something flying with great speed towards their location when they say Rucule reaching towards them. Not minding the winds that accompanied the young man, he only nodded his head as they eat in silence. I take that you already seen the images I sent you. Bann spoke after a few minutes while he headed to serve his second ration. Rucule nodded to his words while he continued eating ravenously his food. Meanwhile Celery floated beside Bann while her tail caressed his back as she asked him for another ration. Bann complied to the lavender-haired girl while he continued speaking. They would be troublesome. Their organization is even bigger than the forces of Frieza. Although I'm in the dark regarding their capabilities, I can assure you they won't be an easy foe to defeat. Celery muttered a thank you to Bann as she head back to eat while Rucule gulped down the piece of meat on his mouth to speak. And how do you know this? We weren't able to gather information regarding the space station and the ships, so how did you get such information? The young man's voice reached Bann's ears as the latter turned around and looked over Rucule. He was taller than him by great margin and his physique was intimidating to say the least. At 7 feet 3 inches he dwarfed even the orcs they encountered until now. His muscle mass was nothing to be trifled with as his biceps were bigger than Bann's head. His thighs were almost the same size of a regular human chest. The once little kid became one kind of a beast, and his square face and rugged features gave him an intimidating look. Winking at his serious looks, Ban answered to him nonchalantly, I heard what they say, and most importantly, I do look after everything that seems important, unlike others. His last words made Rukyul choke on his food while he retracted his gaze and looked downwards as he ate with shame. What Ban was referring to was an event that occurred a few months ago, where Rukyul encountered some people nearby one of the villages under their care, and he didn't took them as important, only for said people to come up a few weeks later and ransack the village for all its belongings. There are various things going on, but the most important are these. This world is under the rule of a bigger organization and the population is controlled by a church, called the ecclesiarchy. He added after a few moments while munching down the meat. Hearing his words, Celery nodded her head and added, yes, I heard they were also talking about a celestial lord or something, most likely the one in charge of them all and someone in the big leagues like Frieza. She gulped down the piece of meat she was munching and then continued, though they don't seem that dangerous to be honest, their people are scrawny, weak, and their weapons don't look that troublesome. I say that if you all give me the chance I'll take down their little army overnight. Celery eyed both Syans with eagerness and cockiness. Although her words sounded arrogant, she had the power to back up such claims after all. The little girl has showcased until now why she was classified as elite, and why was she supposed to be a member of the royal family in the future. She was the only one surpassing the 10,000 units in power, and although they had learned long ago to not rely on the lectures given by the scouter, they knew that the lecture given by it was a good description of their capabilities. And Celery was one of her kind. In another league. Yet she met shaking heads from both Ban and Rukyul as the later explained to her, the Sunway won't work for what we want. We need lackeys and manpower to fuel our industry and get what we need to keep improving. Celery. There's no one to sell this planet. There's no reason for us to destroy our temporary home, and most importantly, he gulped down his food as he get up on his feet to retrieve more meat. There's no reason to waste the opportunity at hand. These humans, whether you liked it or not, are compatible with us, meaning that we can rebuild our numbers with careful planning, said the young man as he gave his back to both of them. Ban nodded his head while adding his part. If both Aprit and Ramela decides to partner with each other and bear children's, then we would have pure blood guaranteed, while Rukyul and I produce more hybrids to marry them. In that way we would ensure that our roots are not diluted while maintaining strong Arcean blood. After hearing such words coming out of Ban mouth, Celery eyed him with a pout while she clenched her fist. We have a duty to fulfill. Our lives were spared to continue and avenge our parents. Don't forget such a thing, Celery. Rukyul's voice reached out their ears as he looked over them with a serious expression on his face. Of all them, he was the only one that kept memories of their home world, and he was the one that suffered the most for their fate. Although they didn't have the confirmation, Ban already explained the most likely outcome of the Saiyan race. Thus, since they were kids, everyone in the squad was aware of their duty towards their race, and its weight heavily remained on their shoulders each passing day. We don't know if the Prince Vegeta is still alive, Celery, so it would be better if you start to change your stance regarding getting a partner. You still have time to think about, but remember that times pass and we need to do something, Rukyul said to her as he wolfed down his food. Celery looked downwards while she clenched her fist. She didn't want it to be told what to do, neither to be pressured to decide such important thing for herself. Yet she knew that Rukyul didn't told her such things out of bad, but with their mission heavily on his mind. A mission she also received and was heavily reminded by her parents on the video they left her. Seeing her expression, Ban decided to caress her head while he told her with a gentle tone, don't worry, brat, no one can force you to decide something. You can kick our asses, remember that. He. Hearing his laugh, Celery let out a chuckle and simply nodded her head. She then raised her head and looked over Rukyul while exclaiming, only those strong enough can fancy me. I'm Celery, daughter of Nate and Jinjar, and I wouldn't expect less for me. As they heard her words, Ban smiled at her while Rukyul showcased a faint smile. Well said, brat. Now eat or else you'll be a scrawny kid, Ban urged her while pointing towards her tray. Meanwhile, Rukyul's voice reached them. I guess that's how it should be, is the way of Saiyans after all. Chapter 11, Mind. After the meal, Ban called the whole squad for a meeting. It was time to propose a course of action and direct the duties to the squad. Seeing everyone sitting around him, Ban coughed to get their attention and mark the beginning of the meeting. As you all may know, we've came into knowledge of the existence of the powerful backing that this world had. An empire that seemed to expand across many worlds as it seems. Ban paused as he checked that everyone still paid attention to him. Their armies has descended to this world and we might have to face them. I say might because those pesky orcs can do the job for us and we could reap all the benefits from it. After saying those words, Rukyul raised his question, and why should we let those orcs get the fight in our stead? What's even worse, those orcs would probably destroy everything we need of these humans after all. Hearing his words, Ban nodded his head and acknowledged and explained to him that would be the case if we let the nature take its course, but that's where we will appear, by saving these humans from the Green Horde and getting all the deserved recognition for protecting them. At his words, he only received silent glares. That's stupid, said Celery with one raised brow. Ban glared at her while he exclaimed, it's not, and let me tell you why. Those humans need to acknowledge our worth, be it by saving them and being the best wing of protection they can get, which is true since we only need a couple of weeks to conquer this whole planet if we wanted it. Hearing his reasoning, Ramela and Aprit nodded their heads in agreement while Celery pointed out her opinion. And what makes you think they would change their loyalty towards us? For all they know, we could be those witches they often speak about and would want to burn us into stakes. Rukyul nodded his head in agreement with Celery's words while Ban let out a sigh and continue explaining the rest of his plan. That would be the case if we don't reach out to the people in control of these cities. Thing is, humans are greedy and most likely hope to get more than they currently had. We had the means to lure them towards our side, and I'm speaking about our technology and knowledge. We can promise them many things while they ensure that the masses comply with our will. Although Ban had one plan in mid, while speaking he realized that he wasn't good enough with words to explain it perfectly. And more so he realized while he looked over Celery, who was about to point out something else, but to make them acknowledged what we promise is feasible we need to show them proofs. Physical and material proof that gave no room for excuse or doubt. Rukyul eyed Celery with good eyes as he liked the way that the little lass showcased her sharpness and analytical mind. He then looked over his sister and saw the girl looking at loss, shaking his head in disappointment of the difference between the two. Ban couldn't help but look at Celery with a poker face and then ask her, "Are you serious? We have our ships and scouters, things that they most likely don't have nor ever seen. What more proof would they need?" Celery let out a groan and tried to explain him her point of view. "Our spaceships don't work, they won't fly, and you have seen those ants that came down. They too wear a gear at the side of their eyes that may pass out as a different type of scouter in these guys' opinion." She then cursed under her breath, "How can you be so stupid?" Not minding her last words, Ban reasoned with her, "And have you seen the people from this world wearing one of such things?" "No, we haven't, because they had been kept this world in this way for a reason. We would be giving them a key to access higher technology and means to produce their own ships, weapons, and whatever they might need." Seeing her about to retort him, he gestured with his hands to stop her and continue, "And you're forgetting one important thing. We have the monopoly of power, might is absolute. And with our little display of power it would be enough for them to acknowledge it." With that said, Celery could only shut her mouth while trying to think another way to refute him. "We already have seen some of the big shots of this planet. Now we need to find ways to meet them in person and have talks with them. Our priority is to ensure that scientists and other necessary people can be picked and sent out here to start studying the basics." As he said that, Ban touched his scouter while sending images towards the scouters from the team. Their various blueprints, texts, and buildings started to appear in front of their eyes as he continued, "If we reach an agreement, we'll give them the blueprints for lesser versions of our armors, ships, energy guns, shields, and planetary defense. Alongside this we will provide them with the knowledge to increase the production of their primary goods. We would be in need of more capable workers in that case, cause I doubt they would know for a while how to operate the tools and other equipments we might give them." Rukyul interrupted him as he pointed out a significant problem. "That should be covered when the scholars and more acknowledged people came to learn our technology. In the meantime, until we get the productive hands doing their job, we'll have to take care of different targets that may be inconvenient, be it those persky priests on the streets or a noble that might raise armies against us." Ban continued explaining while he saw April opening his mouth. "Why don't we just destroy those armies and force them to obey us? Without anything to raise against our might it would be virtually impossible for anyone to say a word of dissent, right?" He eyed Ramala and Rukyul as if seeking validation for what he said. Yet before Ban answered him, Rukyul, "Did we want to integrate their society within our future empire, our children would be rulers and they need people that support them. We won't be there always to guide them to the right path, so we need to ensure a loyal population and advisors for them. All of that wouldn't be possible if we follow our Sun way." April listened with open mouth that he made sure to shut after nodding his head in understanding. "Not only that, but if those preachers say some true, the dark feelings and desperation that we might raise during our conquer might lead to something we don't wish to open this soon," added Ban after seeing the expression on April and Ramala's faces. Celery scoffed at his words. "Ugh, don't tell me you believe what those annoying things says to this people? It is obvious they do it to control them," she pointed out, and Rukyul nodded his head in agreement. Seeing this, Ban let out a deep sigh and crouched down to look at Celery, leaving only inches between the two as he said to her with a raspy tone that still made everyone felt their chest vibrate, "Want to bet that there are things we don't wish to face?" Celery flushed at his proximity but refused to back down as she eyed him with bravery. "Bring it on. There's nothing we Sun won't face." Her words seemed to ignite something within the rest of Suns as Rukyul commented with clear dissatisfaction, "You should be ashamed to speak such words, Ban. That's not how our ancestors thought." April exclaimed. "I would beat to pulp whatever you put in front, Ban." Even Ramala shouted with resolution as she smiled towards Ban. Seeing everyone acting up against him made Ban almost let out a sigh of frustration. "If only these fools knew about chaos, how the hell I'm supposed to warn them from a thing I shouldn't supposed to know?" He wondered to himself as he raised up against to his feet and looked over them. "Mark my words, if that's the case, I'll be there to remind of the words you all spoken today." He decided to not back down and defy them all. One by one the rest stand up on their feet as they looked over him. The first one to speak was Rukyul. "If that all you wanted to say, us all? If that's the case, we're in dire need of a sparring, just you and me." He looked coldly towards Ban. The latter felt his blood pumping in advance at the clear defiance from Rukyul, yet he answered to him, "There's more to speak about, so hold your wish to get beaten for a while until I finish." Rukyul let out a growl in response yet stayed on his place. "After we approached and made our deal with the people in power of this world, we need to seek out the best candidates to start breeding and producing our heirs." Ban looked over Rukyul at first, then he looked over April and Ramala. "Some of us would need to agree on who will be producing hybrids, as we need a couple to continue producing pure Suns. Be it celery and I, Rukyul and celery, Ramala and I, or Aprit with either celery or Ramala. At the mention of this the squad looked restless as they looked each other. Meanwhile Ban continued, we have to ensure that each generation has a purebred to continue with our race as it was. Hybrids would be encouraged to couple with purebred to improve their purity, so it shouldn't dilute it over generations. Although Ban was aware that hybrids seemed to be more powerful than regular Saiyans, he wanted to prevent whatever taint may befall on hybrids due to chaos, to affect regular Saiyans. With each decision I think, the need of psychers or someone to explain and test the effects of warp on us it's more evident. Ban thought to himself while sighing deeply. We need to also increase our numbers greatly if we want to fulfill our duty faster, just the 5 of us won't be enough to face Frieza and his lackeys. Rukyul also added while crossing his arms. Ban looked over Rukyul and Aprit and said each one of us need to have at least 5 child of our own, the more the merrier, but by the time we are adults in 20 years or so, we need to already have our own squads complete. Listening to him both Ramal and Celery looked at each other with complicated feelings. Yet Ban continued, although we don't have our parents to lead us in battle, we will ensure that our children grow under our lead and battle alongside us. After saying those words, Ban took a moment to think his next words as he eyed the reaction of the squad. After all, each one of them had grown while looking fondly at the videos that their parents last sent them. Even if most of them were just videos explaining who they were and how should they survive. Until now it has been a peaceful life the one we'd lived. Now however the gears started to move and we have to take the first step to complete our mission on this planet. I want each one of you to keep training and studying. We will need both body and mind to build the foundations of our empire. You are dismissed. Saying those words, Ban gestured Rukyul to follow him as he flew out of their base. Meanwhile the rest looked over each other as they thought about his parting words, yet a few moments later they also followed behind him as they wanted to see the battle that was about to begin. With their minds filled with thoughts, the Saiyans prepared themselves to the future that awaited them. One that would require their strength to reign supremely over their enemies. Chapter 12, Progress. Looking over the tall figure of Rukyul, Ban started to think about the strategy he would follow during the fight. He alongside Rukyul were the ones that followed behind Celery in terms of power. Although Rukyul led the run with 7.241 units of power, Ban wasn't far behind with his 6.822 units. What's more, Ban was the fastest of the two and the one capable of better using the ki in their techniques. Different from Rukyul, who was more accustomed to relying on pure strength, Ban has trained himself to be swift, agile, skillful, and durable. His stamina was unparalleled in the squad, as he was the only one capable of fighting for a prolonged amount of time. Something which he has already emphasized many times to them, and that only Celery heard his words. Now that I know we are in the Warhammer universe, I should probably focus more on improving my stamina and crowd control. He thought to himself as he stretched his body. It would be bad if I encounter Tyranids and I'm unable to keep up with their waves. Just the notion of it made Ban's senses heightened in alert. Eyeing Rukyul, who was also stretching, he tried to diminish his thoughts as his battle state started to engulf his being. His sense of smell greatly improved, alongside his hearing as he was able to even listen to the breathing of Rukyul and his beating heart. His eyes were capable of catching even the smallest of details besides being able to see clearly how the wings of the different bugs flying around moved each moment as if in slow motion. But most important of all, he was able to feel the wind and the different movements through his skin. He was ready. Getting on a wide stance, he saw Rukyul following his steps too, and getting on position. Eyeing each other, both seemed to share the moment to start the fight. Launching himself forward with his left foot, Rukyul left a crater on the ground as in a flash appeared before Ban while throwing a jab to his left cheek. The fist brushed Ban's cheek as he moved his body sideways in order to evade while he launched an uppercut toward Rukyul's abdomen. The fist connected with the abdomen squarely, causing the force behind it to knock the wind out of Rukyul, while the shockwave of energy that single punch had was released into the sky, scattering the low clouds. Rukyul clenched his teeth and with a pale face, he slammed his knee into Ban, who was able to defend against the blow by blocking the attack with the palm of his free hand. However, Rukyul followed up his attack with a quick elbow to the back of Ban, who returned the kindness with several punches to the abdomen of Rukyul, who after the 7th punch was thrown into the air as he was unable to take any more of Ban's punishment. Once in the sky and able to breathe again, Rukyul threw several punches forward in Ban's direction, forcing hurricane winds in Ban's direction and raising dust into the air. Once he had achieved his goal, Rukyul launched himself ferociously at Ban in an onslaught of fists and kicks that sought to disable the other Saiyan, who could only defend himself and evade attacks for a moment until he finally managed to better predict Rukyul's movements. Although with reduced vision, Ban was able to look more clearly at the muscles in Rukyul's body and based on that predict the direction of each punch and kick. While his visual acuity and perception were much more advanced, his body had some difficulty keeping up with the extreme speed it required. For the casual onlookers, nothing could be seen as both Ban's and Rukyul's figures moved at such high speed that not even traces could be seen, yet the aftershocks of their punches and kicks colliding started to slowly rearrange the scenery around them. The once cloudy sky was now a clear one, winds started to move wildly as the air started to move towards the center of battle trying to fill the void left behind. Thundering claps reached everyone's ears, the attacks collided against each other. However, it was Ban who had the upper hand despite the raw strength disparity between the two. His movements were beyond the ability of Rukyul to evade as he could only cover himself to block or minimize the impacts. As such, many hits started to slip through his defense and hit his body. Rukyul was only able to predict the attacks, as his eyes didn't work at this level of fights. He only saw after images of Bann staying still or throwing sometimes punches and kicks. Yet each moment dozens of attacks connected with his body. Seeing that he wouldn't be able to tank more attacks before starting to take serious injuries, Rukyul gathered all his ki and in an explosion forced Bann away from him. A whitish aura around Rukyul encroached on his being as his movement speed was greatly enhanced and launched himself back to attack Bann. The latter received his enhanced attacks and started to analyze his fighting pattern. In just a moment, Bann was able to not only grasp the abilities of the ki-enhanced Rukyul, but quickly be able to counter him back, resulting in the previous match condition. As Rukyul saw himself being cornered once again, frustration took over his mind and with sheer rage gathered ki around his eyes and expelled it towards Bann, who now had to look after the laser hovering around his head while evading and attacking. Although silence reigned over the two fighting, the same couldn't be said for the onlookers. Alongside the thunderclaps and the booming constant sound of Rukyul using his ki, was now added the constant explosions of the zones that Rukyul's laser landed upon. Celery scoffed at the scene and couldn't help but curse the two of them, those idiots. They should have picked out a place far away from our base. Those ants would be alerted by all this sound and explosions. Ugh. Aprit, who heard her words, moved his eyes away from the action and raised his brows in surprise. I forgot about that. He then shrugged his shoulder and exclaimed, well, if they come up to us we would swat them down anyways, and looked back to the fight. Meanwhile, Ramela was looking over the direction of different key signatures that seemed to move slowly towards their position. Celery, who also noticed the same, looked over Ramela and asked her, see with the scouter if those are the rats from that place. As she said that, she spat out those words with disgust while Ramela did as she said. Ignoring the beeping sounds from the two figures and their key spikes, Ramela focused towards the direction of the key she felt. Various numbers started to appear alongside their lectures. Seeing the value and numbers, Ramela nodded her head and answered Celery. Yeah, 760 units followed by the others, it should be them. Can we kill them all since Bann isn't looking? Asked Ramela while tilting her head. Celery didn't answer right away as she remembered the words used by Bann the time they fought against those cockroaches. They are honorable people that should be let alone and in peace, were the words he said, followed by a threat to all of them. Biting the inner side of her cheek, she let out a look of contempt and said to Ramela, no we won't, I'll be right back, and flew away in their direction. Both Ramela and Aprit eyed her departing figure and shrugged it off. The action was in front of them after all. More and more shockwaves started to spread as both Bann and Rukyul let out their power against each other. Rukyul's armor and face started to look seriously roughed up while trails of blood were around his nose, mouth, and brows. Various bruises and cuts could be seen around his face, legs and arms. Meanwhile, Bann was in a better condition, though various were the bruises on his arms and legs. A lone red bruise was adorning his right cheek beside the mouth, that Rukyul was able to connect a few moments ago. The sheer strength behind it left Bann with a heavy headache and somewhat disoriented, though he was able to maintain his pace with great effort. I should end it or else I'll end up seriously wounded, Bann thought to himself and let out his ki. Feeling his body invigorated and filled with strength, his speed upped up alongside his power. With decisiveness, he targeted Rukyul's ribcage and with a shout punched both sides. Rukyul failed to prevent his attacks as he fell to his feint. When the two punches landed on his chest, his movements stopped and his eyes opened wide in surprise, his pupils dilated to the size of a needle as he observed Bann gathering the ki around his palm that was in front of his face. Big bang attack, muttered Bann under his breath as he launched a point-blank attack. Rukyul, who was paralyzed by the terrible attack on his ribs, could only watch the bright flash before losing consciousness. The sky for miles around darkened, while the temperature around him rose to several million degrees for a thousandth of a second. A bright explosion of white rose, Ramela, and Aprit, still with their eyes closed, were able to see the arteries around their eyelids. Both were forced to move away from the area as they felt the air being sucked into the 0 point. Soon a terrible shudder resounded in a burst, so fierce that not even the roar of thunder resembled it. Boom! Rings of steam formed around the blast as a mushroom cloud rose high. The earth shook in an earthquake of great magnitude as Bann watched the fruit of his training with a serious look on his face. Although Bann was sure that Rukyul would survive the attack and that it would not leave him with any serious after effects, the terrible amount of energy released in the massive explosion sent Rukyul's body into a huge crater in the ground. It managed to worry Bann for a moment. He should be fine, after all the worse attacks he'd received from Celery, Bann thought to himself as he recalled past fights between the two. The Saiyan's body was very tough, extremely tough. And although the explosion of his attack could be compared to a nuclear explosion quite easily, this attack did not overcome the base defense of Rukyul, who would undoubtedly be hurt by it, but it would not be strong enough to kill him. It should be enough to force his body to heal, Bann added as he let out a sigh. During the fight, Bann was able to see how Rukyul was unable to keep up with his speed and agility, and even though the boy was stronger than him, Bann was able to prevail against him without much trouble, something that troubled him greatly as this should not be the case. If only sheer speed and agility are required to overcome them, then they're in for a run in this place. Bann analyzed. Some of the feats of certain characters he was aware of reached the omnipotence and god levels, and although they would fare well against every army in the Warhammer universe, the same couldn't be said for figures that may hunt them down. A small burn and headache shouldn't be a problem for someone like you. That was all Bann said as he floated towards the ground. Some parts of his armor were broken, and pieces were torn from his black spandex as well, yet he remained in a fairly good condition after the tight. Crossing his arms to his chest, his face grimaced a little after feeling the injuries left behind by the attacks that did manage to hit his body. Although not many, the strength behind Rukyul's attacks wasn't to be taken lightly. Shit, if he didn't broke my arms then it shouldn't be far from it. He groaned while rubbing his forearms and shoulders. Not minding the hurricane winds and the debris falling around, he landed on the ground and started walking toward Ramala and Aprit. After sensing that Rukyul was okay with his ki, he shouted towards the Tusians, have you seen why it's important to train all of your abilities? Focusing on strength alone wouldn't do anything good to all of you. Although he said that, he was somewhat happy with the progress they all made. We haven't reached adulthood and yet we're this powerful. I can't wait to get my hands on better equipment, he thought to himself with a smile. Until now all they could train with was spar fighting and ki-enhanced calisthenics. There wasn't any cheat like gravity chambers, augmented technology to train with weight clothes, or special training rooms. All in all, they only had a peaceful life yet they were this powerful. This was statement enough of their talent. Chapter 13, Face Off. The heavenly voices of the choir of sisters singing hymns were the first thing that Cielo heard as she woke up from her slumber. The soothing and melodic voices made the last memory from her dreams slip away, as the frantic beating of her heart started to relax. The golden locks of her hair covered her flushed visage as she looked over the ceiling of her room. Moving both hands towards her chest she tried to regain her tranquility while her mind came slowly back to reality. It was that dream again. My emperor, what do you want to show me? She asked herself in frustration, as the same dream and some variants started to fill her dreams 2 months ago. In that dream, she met a tall man with wild looks, savage eyes, and a deep voice. He would then lead her around battlefields and save not only this world but many others. How I can be shown such heresy? We even make a family? No one but the emperor should have access to my body. The embarrassment she felt was overwhelmed by indignation at the notion of such a thing happening. She has given her mind, soul, and body to the emperor for all eternity. I shall repent today with Legate in Miriam. She murmured to herself as she resolved to expel impure thoughts out of her mind. Getting up from the plain bed she put on her humble clothes while praying to the emperor. After finishing up her morning ritual she made her way towards the monastery dining room as she greeted the novices, cantus, and other sisters on the way. Pious were the words they exchanged as they hurled praises at the emperor, causing the guilt in Cielo's heart to rise. Once she entered the room, she was able to spot Legate in Miriam who was talking along with other sisters who were listening attentively to her words. Cielo decided not to eat breakfast. Fasting was going to be necessary for repentance. Legate in Miriam, I am sorry to disturb you at this time, but may I have a moment to speak with you? Cielo asked as the Legatin looked up and observed her figure. The Legatin only needed a moment to look into Cielo's troubled eyes to understand that Cielo needed her guidance. Smiling, she nodded as she replied, of course, Sister Superior Cielo, go to my room and wait for me. Thank you, Legate in Miriam. Cielo sighed in relief and nodded her head while she turned around and did as she was told. On her way, she repeated the chants that the various cherubim and servitors praised. Before long she turned towards the last corridor before reaching the Legatin chamber. There she saw various sisters walking with urgency as they were followed behind by numerous unknown battle sisters who were led by a dark-haired woman with a stern look. They were carrying heavy armor that could only be identified as the Adeptus Sororitas power armor, one that on the whole monastery, only Legatin Miriam owned. Seeing their sister superior looking over them, the sisters that were leading the guests sighed deeply in relief as they spoke to her while stopping Sister Superior Cielo. We are looking for Legatin Miriam as Thestash. She wasn't able to finish her words as the black-haired woman cut her short while saying, I am here on behalf of the order. There is work to be done. The redeeming fire of the God Emperor has to purge heretics and enemies of mankind. Her words stunned her, as although she was aware of the duties they all pledge, it was all too sudden and unexpected. Nonetheless, she was able to recompose herself as she nodded her head in understanding. Cielo then led the way toward the Legatin Miriam location as she inquired about the identity of the woman, who presented herself. I am the Palatine Ursula Creed, from the Order of the Redeemed Flame, the same one you all belong to. Her tone when saying those words was strict and sharp. Her long black hair gave her stern face a detached look. Her large frame was the cherry on top to give the woman a commanding and imposing figure. Once they reached the dining hall and left behind the surprised sisters and novices, Ursula raised her voice before Cielo could even announce her presence and who she was. Legatin Miriam Sereth, the call of duty for your mission has come. By the order of our Canonis, I am here to inform you and guide you to assist the purge of heretics, unholy, traitors and Xenos from this world, informed Ursula with a strident and dramatic tone in her voice. The sisters of battle behind Ursula spread out as they looked with solemnity at the rest of the people in the hall. Miriam, who remained silent until now, rose to her feet as she eyed Palatine Ursula into her eyes, and with a calm and pious tone said to her, and my mission would answer gladly to the call made, we shall impart the Emperor's will. Her words brought shock to the sisters under her care, as it marked the beginning of the warmongering part of each sister's life. For many of those who lived in the monastery, all of their lives until this point were reduced to preaching, training, and helping the local garrison to curb witches. Yet now they were called into arms. As such, many sisters felt their blood pump into excitement as the time to prove themselves to the Emperor and bring forth his will was here. Cielo was one of them. Her tumultuous heart was beating like a drum on her chest as she felt this was the opportunity sent by the Emperor himself to showcase her loyalty and adherence to her oath. Legate Miriam then ordered the monastery to prepare for war, as the novices, Constantia, and Cantus helped the many sisters and novitiate to arm themselves while the various cherubim and servitors sang hymns and battle chants. The smell of incense invaded the monastery as they blessed their blades, armor, and shields. Cielo wore her armor proudly. The fiery rose on her chest plate shone brightly as everyone could see how well each piece of her equipment was maintained. A long and heavy two-handed sword was pointed towards the floor as she gripped the handle with both hands. At her side, the novice Adelina alongside the Constantia Serena prayed while moving the incense, bathing each piece of her armor in its holy smoke. After a good amount of time passed, they exited Cielo's room and walked towards the exit of the monastery. Outside, dozens of sisters could be seen forming ranks alongside the novitiates and Cantus who were trying to remain calm and serene. Solemnity encroached the atmosphere as each sister remained silent while chanting in their minds. Only the melodic voices of the novices and Constantia could be heard as they sang pious hymns to bless them. As more and more sisters walked out and formed their ranks, it wasn't long before the Palatine Ursula and Legate Miriam walked out clad in their power armor, behind them the many other sisters that followed Ursula to the planet. In total, there were more than 200 battle sisters, alongside 100 novitiates and Cantus whose purpose was to aid and serve the sisters in the command zone and fulfill a more logistical role. Aside from Cielo, there were 5 other sister superior who were in charge of a small group of sisters of battle. Cielo was in front of her group as she eyed Ursula and Miriam who were overseeing the ranks formed. I've heard from Legate Miriam about the encounter you suffered a few years ago, how a bunch of wretched witches and witchers attacked the monastery while they slain a couple of sisters. Ursula said as her words brought memories to some sisters. One of them being Cielo. The sudden memory of a pair of kids flying while completely obliterating some of her sisters in an effortless but gruesome way remained intact in her memory. It is with that in mind that we're here today to bring down those wretched souls and cleanse this world from those abominations that escape the Emperor's light. Under the command of the Inquisitor Gannicus, we shall illuminate this land and slain the Empire's enemies, Ursula said with solemnity. Yet before she was able to continue with her words, booming sounds started to resound and were quickly followed by an earthquake that made many lose their balance. Amidst the cries of surprise and alertness, they all looked around in search of any explosion in the vicinity. However, nothing could be seen. The servitors then sent a distress signal and inquired for information towards the Imperial Guard and the command base. There they received the direction and presumably foes that were the cause behind such an event. Ursula ordered the mission to move towards it as they marched with fervor burning bright on their soul. As they sang together, more and more sisters fell into a trance that promised blood and fierceness upon the enemies of the Emperor. It was then that Cielo spotted a figure approaching at extreme speeds. 1 second it was a dot on the horizon, before long a moment later was in front of them. Clad in a whitish aura and accompanied by extreme winds and a thunderclap, was a lavender-haired kid in strange armor, wearing a black spandex that accentuated her childish figure. For Cielo, however, it was the reminder of a foe that scarred her mind. Those same blue icy eyes were the ones that slain her sisters and brought shame to their monastery. The same red-colored lens was at the side of her face, and a more disgusted look was splattered all over her face. At the sight of the kid, not only Cielo but all the sisters of the monastery roared in rage. Shouts of witch, heretic, scum and many other swearings could be heard in the vicinity. The kid seemed to understand their words as her face contorted in anger as she screamed at them, "Get out of here before I kill you all." Hearing her roar and the threat, the sisters raised their bolt guns and shot at her figure. Yet all they saw was a clear spot before many were stripped away of their guns, swords, and shields. "It's only because of Bann's pity that you're all still alive." Her childish voice sounded calmer, yet the cold thread of unveiled despise could be seen on her face. Following the origin of it, they saw all their weapons tossed beside the little girl. Ursula eyed the lass in stupor as she muttered under her breath, "Impossible." As never before in a battle someone showcased such speed. Buzz. Suddenly the silence became deafening as the sky dimmed and a whitish explosion appeared on the horizon. Everyone looked in the direction as the sisters looked at everything with intrigue and dizziness. "Those idiots, tch." The little girl muttered under her breath that only Ursula, Miriam, and Cielo were able to hear amidst the silence. The whitish explosion soon gave way to the gigantic mushroom that followed. As the shockwave and explosion sound hit the group, boom! The thunderous roar hit everyone's chest and ears. It was soon followed by the buzzing sound of dizziness. The earth trembled once again and Cielo felt as if a cataclysm approached the land. "As I told you all, begone and live at peace, or else you will force me to visit your house once again." The girl's voice brought back everyone to their reality, although the more experienced sisters never stopped paying attention to their foe. Ursula growled in rage as she cursed the girl. "We will never stop until we see your body extinguishing from reality itself under the Emperor's fiery blaze. You wretched being of evil." Hearing her words, the girl laughed maniacally as if hearing the biggest joke she ever heard. "You and whom? All of you are bugs that I could squeeze whenever I want. It is only Bann and his words that prevent me from showcasing to you all how much difference lay between us." The girl seemed to look distressed at the lack of understanding. Yet before letting Ursula open her mouth once again, the girl disappeared from her position and reappeared in front of the Palatine. Choking the woman with her hand, she raised her as she floated over the rest of the sisters who were simply too slow to react. Ursula, who struggled and tried to use her enhanced strength to even damage an inch of the kid's body, felt as if every part of the girl was the hardest of metals. The iron grip of her little hand threatened to rip the throat of the Palatine as she said to her, "Just look at you, see how helpless you are when I'm not even trying to kill you. No one but me can prevent your death," the kid said to her with a hateful look. Ursula, unable to speak, could only glare at the girl with fire in her eyes, as the bright flame of faith made her able to even look at the horrors of chaos without falling into madness. Seeing that she wasn't getting the response she wanted, Celery threw away Ursula to the ground as she looked over the figure that displayed the highest lecture of ki. Landing her eyes on the golden-haired woman with ample figure, Celery felt her blood boil in annoyance and envy as she appeared in front of her. Grabbing her by the hair, she said to her, "You're coming with me," and flew away. Meanwhile, the Battle Sisters could only watch helplessly as the two women figures disappeared from their eyesight, leaving only behind a sonic boom. The Cantus that were not accustomed to such extent of force fell to the ground as blood flowed from their ears. Meanwhile, Ursula coughed with effort as she screamed, "Inform the base of what happened? We cannot let such offense go unpunished nor let our sister be taken away." She then continued to curse under her breath while the mark of Celery's handprint was for all to be seen. Chapter 14, Imperial Truth. Why would he care about these people? They're so annoying, Celery thought to herself as she looked over Cielo, who was clutching at her hand with all her strength. The speed of her flight was simply too much for the Sister of Battle, who almost felt her scalp tearing apart from her. "Ugh, I just hope he didn't save them all because he was a horn dog," Celery added while remembering the lecherous glances that Rukyul showcased to these humans back then. Although many of these nun-like people showcased battle powers above the average, a handful of them even were in the 100 zones and proved to be interesting foes to train against. Yet the only time Ban accompanied them to one of those trainings, he prohibited them from attacking these people. His reasoning was somewhat understandable as he explained that these people most likely helped the locals and it wouldn't be a good idea to give themselves a bad image. Yet his threat of going rogue if they didn't comply was the thing that bothered her. Why would he do such a thing for these unimportant people? Although she was the strongest in the group, she recognized the utility and importance of Ban in the team, as he was the one aside from Rukyul they all went with when they were in need of talk or company. He not only gave them a purpose aside from fulfilling their mission but encouraged them to train themselves and keep improving each day, to become more than mindless weapons that only know how to kill and destroy. Lowering her speed as she approached their base, she raised her voice so that the woman could understand her. "Now look carefully, woman, try and remember how to reach our place so you can go later and tell those bugs where we are." Cielo, who was gritting her teeth, did as she was told. Mostly because she wanted to hunt down these witches if she had the chance to escape alive. "Since your people don't understand what is good for them, then you would have to witness all of our glory." Celery smirked while saying this. At first, she was ready to let them escape unscathed from this and return to the base. Yet when she heard their words and insults, she wasn't able to stand idle anymore. She didn't kill them outrightly but wanted to light a torch so they come to their doors and give Ban no excuse for them to not retaliate. With a cold glint in her eyes, Celery started descending while she eyed the figures of Ban and Aprit looking at her, while Ramela was attending to the unconscious body of Rukyul that was lying on the floor. After descending and tossing Cielo to the floor, Celery smiled smugly at the strange look that Ban and Aprit were giving her. "Who's her and what is she doing here?" Ban pointed at Cielo while speaking in their mother language. The Sister of Battle looked roughed up while her golden hair covered her face, making the Syns unable to take a look at her visage. "I brought the strongest bug those humans had. They were coming this way to attack us," Celery answered while crossing her arms on her chest. When Ban heard her words, he frowned deeply while an accusatory look showcased on his face. "Why did you do that? Now those pests would come here instead of going to battle the orcs, you dumbass." As he said that, he groaned out while moving his hand to rub his temple. Seeing his reaction and hearing his words, Celery scoffed in annoyance. "That was bound to happen, you big idiot. Who told you to make such a mess? I've heard those nuns even relaying information to their base, so they should be on their way here." Ban let out such a deep growl that made not only the vicinity tremble but even woke up Cielo from her shock. "For fuck's sake, why is nothing going as planned?" Ban growled in annoyance as he thought about the mess that was about to reach them. Snapping his head towards Celery, he advanced towards her while saying, "Do you realize that now not only we'll have to deal with those bugs you despise so much, but hunt down every single one of those orcs since those humans won't be doing the plague cleansing?" His finger was poking at Celery's center collarbone while she raised her neck to look at his raged eyes. Feeling enraged herself, Celery snapped Ban's finger sideways as she told him with clear venom in her voice, "Don't you dare to point at me. It is your fault those people were alerted. Now we're going to finally do something instead of sitting here and planning while doing nothing." She then pushed him sideways with force while walking towards the base. On her way, she kept murmuring things under her breath while the ground trembled under each step. Meanwhile, Ban looked at his crooked finger with a plain face. He then proceeded to put it in its right place. "So, do I wake up Rukyul so we start preparing for the battle?" Aprit's voice reached everyone's ears, as Ban nodded his head. Getting his answer, Aprit went towards Rukyul's location as he started slapping his cheeks. Meanwhile, Ban let out a sigh of resignation as he raised his neck and eyed the sky. The gears in his mind were moving while plots and scenarios played on. "It's you?" He heard a faint voice that made his head turn towards the direction of it, seeing the woman that Celery brought with her. Raising one hand to wave, he greeted her, "Hey there," as he let out a deep breath. The woman who was on her knees until now, fell to her bum as her eyes opened wide like plates in shock. It can't be. Why would the Emperor showcase me a heretic like you? There was clear consternation in her tone while her eyes took the image of Bann's figure and superposed it with the one in her dreams. Listening to her words and giving a second look at her attire, Bann put things together and exclaimed, "You're a battle sister." He then turned completely in her direction while clear interest could be seen in his eyes. "But why aren't you wearing the power armor like a normal one?" Seeing his interested look, Cielo gulped down while her mind tried to rearrange itself. "There's nothing to talk with you, you filthy heretic," she spat out without thinking too much. Seeing the woman misjudging him, he corrected her while moving his finger sideways. No, I am no heretic but a Xenos." Cielo's body froze on her spot as she heard, stunned, his words, "Even though I look like your regular human, I am a Saiyan, a warrior's race that is pretty much far away from here." Even though Bann showcased an amicable smile, his deep bass voice alongside his intimidating appearance was only decreasing Cielo's opinion of him each second. The look on her face contorted to pure disgust while she voiced out without realizing a Xenos scum. Yet when Bann heard her words he only let out a laugh. "Ha ha ha, hey, let me ask you something. Would you be willing to discuss for a while without being a xenophobic piece of shit and listen to reason?" There was clear amusement on his face while he asked her this. Cielo's mind was in disarray as on one side her indoctrinated mind was telling her to curse and spit out at the Xenos in front of her, while the other one that was affected by her devotion to the Emperor, and suffered the dreams, was telling her to give a chance to the alien, for at least to speak and know more about him. After all, he was chosen to be showcased in her dreams by the Emperor for a reason, one that escaped her current notions. With a ragged breath, she nodded her head to him in agreement. Seeing her cooperation, Bann was taken aback slightly as he thought that the woman in front of him would refuse without even thinking, yet a smile escaped his face as he sat in front of her. With clear excitement he rubbed both hands as he started. "Okay, here's the deal. This would be called Let's Talk Without Knowing. Both of us will ask and answer whatever the other might want to know, all while being truthful and unbiased, okay?" Seeing his childlike reaction made Cielo feel a little bit more comfortable, although her body language showcased her extreme dissatisfaction. Nonetheless, she nodded her head in agreement while Bann asked, "First, what is your name?" "The complete one." Looking at his onyx eyes, Cielo answered him, "Name Cielo Sterna." Her hands were grasping tightly at the ground. Hearing her name, Bann raised his brows in honest surprise while exclaiming, "That's a beautiful name. I like it. My name is Bann and I don't have a last name." He pointed himself with his thumb. While Cielo made sure to remember his name, she then asked him, "What is your purpose in this world? Why did you kill my sisters?" Although she was aware that Bann wasn't the one who killed her sisters, he was clearly with the little girl who did it. Bann looked stunned for a moment until he realized where she came from. That he let out a deep sigh and explained to her, "I wasn't aware my teammates were picking the people from your church when they told me they were training with slightly stronger humans. I didn't thought too much on the matter until I accompanied them." Seeing Cielo trembling at his words, he continued, "That was when it happened, and since then I forbid them from going there. I know an apology won't return your sisters from death, but what I can assure you is that their death won't mean nothing." He wanted to continue answering her until Cielo couldn't take it anymore and snapped at him, "She killed people that did nothing against you all because of training, and you expect me to believe that?" There was a clear look of rage on Cielo's face, yet Bann didn't pay her attention. "The reason we're here is because our world was destroyed. We will take this world for ourselves and protect the people living in it." When Cielo heard his words, she opened her eyes wide in horror. Yet Bann looked over her with cold eyes. "And I don't want to hear that from you, nor the people from the Imperium. Your kin would exterminate entire civilizations for just not believing that your emperor is a god." Cielo, unable to hear such heretic words any longer, tried to raise on her feet, yet Bann's hand on her shoulder stopped her from doing it. Cielo tried to struggle to get his hand away from her, yet it was immovable. "Get your hands off from me, you Xenos scum! I won't stand here hearing your words against the god emperor." Seeing the woman acting unreasonable, Bann used his other hand to cover the woman's mouth while he told her, "I know you won't believe me after all the things that the Imperium did to you, but just hear me, okay? Remember, I first told you I would be truthful, and that is something I would fulfill." Cielo still struggled while she glared at him with a blazing fury, yet she could only hear his words. "More than 10,000 years ago, I think, since I don't know the current age, your emperor was still living and moving throughout this galaxy." Cielo, who still was resisting, couldn't help but feel a little curiosity at Bann's words, even though she was sure that it would be a heretical lie. "Did you know he despised the religions?" His words seemed to reignite the fury on Cielo, yet she stopped after hearing his words, "And that was because of the Chaos Gods, the thing that they probably told you lure the heretics under their grasp and corrupt entire worlds." Hearing some truth in his words, she decided to let him finish. He believed that humanity should remain away from cults towards any sort of deity while only following strictly something called the imperial truth. "I don't know what exactly was, but it could be resumed that humans should only believe in what was empirically correct and remain atheistic while striving to reach technological advance." When Bann finished saying that, he let out both hands that were constraining Cielo as he felt she wanted to talk. Although Cielo wanted to curse at Bann for spouting such heresy in front of her, she tried to reason that the Emperor showcased him to her for a reason. "The Emperor is our god and his blazing fire runs deeply within me and the many citizens of the Imperium. That is a truth, Bann. He is the light that kept away the darkness from encroaching humanity. Cielo said to him with conviction firm in her eyes. Ban nodded his head. Indeed, the Emperor has probably ascended to godhood. As Cielo heard his words, a small whisper of hope ignited within her as the Xenos seemed to realize his folly. But that doesn't mean he wouldn't find abhorrent what his Imperium has become. Yet his words only extinguish it again. Seeing the clear dissatisfaction at his words on Cielo's face, made ignite something within Ban, that made him want to showcase how wrong the Imperium was, to its citizens. And the strong-willed battle sister was going to be the first person he would change. Let's make a deal, okay? He smiled at Cielo while the battle sister frowned her brows. Her first thought was that of refusing any sort of deal between the two, yet realizing that her current situation didn't let her do any other thing to do in the meantime, made her decide to follow the Xenos' whims. What would it be? She asked as she sat in a better position. How about in the next battle I won't kill any of your sisters and let them live? His words made Cielo shake her body in alertness. In exchange for you following me and my teammates throughout the whole galaxy while I show you what the Imperium descended into and how much suffering it's bringing to its people. Ban, who said such a thing with a smile, was quickly able to spot the rage on Cielo's face. Yet the woman, instead of lashing out at him, gulped down her anger and tried to reason with it. I shouldn't be making a deal with a Xenos, more so with one that spouts such heresy from his mouth. Yet the Emperor himself showed him to me and his feats. Cielo gulped down while she remembered the power that Ban seemed to have on her dreams. A Xeno capable of destroying entire worlds that fell into the wicked hands of the chaos, with a wave of his hands. Someone who would save entire worlds with his whole presence. Although she held doubts in her heart, the reality was that the man was in front of her. And just like the imperial truth that he spoke about, the Emperor's truth seemed to reach out to her to meet the man in the flesh. Chapter 15, Deal. Cielo felt her heart beating fast as she contemplated the deal that Ban proposed her. I could save my sisters while also giving them a chance to battle into other places without wasting their lives here. She analyzed with a clear mind. She wasn't foolish enough to believe they would be able to face the whole team. Just one of them was necessary to disarm their entire mission without them realizing. And there was now 4 more of them that were capable of most likely doing such a feat too. And if the dreams showcased me by the Emperor are true, then they could destroy this world with ease. The harsh truth sent shivers down her spine as she looked again at the imposing Xeno in front of her. You said you wanted to protect this world, that does also mean its current population. She asked for clarification. Ban nodded his head in agreement while raising his finger. That's indeed the case. We need the people from this world to start producing resources so we can build our ships, and other necessities. As Cielo listened to his words, she couldn't help but ask him something that irked her. And what about the Imperial forces? What about their pledge to the Imperium? Although her mind was able to cope with the incredible sin that was making a deal with a heretical Xenos, she wouldn't be able to ask for forgiveness to the Emperor if she betrayed them. Ban shrugged his shoulder as he answered her truthfully. We don't care about them. The planet could still belong in papers to the Imperium, but they won't see any resources from us. They can send fleets to recover it but would mean nothing. So the Imperium will lose this planet. Cielo thought to herself. Seeing her so thoughtful, Ban tried to convince her. Look, the Imperium lose worlds every day. One more stripe to the tiger won't do any damage. Besides, the people would remain alive and in better condition. He smiled at her, yet his words only irked Cielo more. You're asking me to betray my faith, my people, and home. She spat out at him. Ban shook his head while he corrected her. You could still hold on to your faith, visit the monastery and meet with your sister once they are disarmed. He let out a chuckle at his last words. Yet Cielo wasn't amused as she eyed him with a plain look. After a few moments of uncomfortable silence, where only the distant sounds of Rukul and April hitting each other could be heard, Cielo let out a long breath. Promise me my sisters would live to escape from this world unharmed. She finally decided to cave in as she looked over Ban with a firm look. If the Emperor's wills it, then I shall see it done, she assured to herself while maintaining her stoic facade. Seeing the battle sister accepting his proposal made Ban let out a joyful smile as he grasped one hand of Cielo and shook it with energy. Your sisters would live to see the battlefield on another planet, Cielo, that I can assure you. Seeing his joyful attitude, made even the bittersweet Cielo smile briefly, while a sorrowful sigh escaped her lips. Although she steeled her resolve to see the Emperor's will be done, her heart ached at the treachery of her actions and her vows being broken this way. Seeing her state, Ban's smiling and joyful attitude was replaced by a more understanding one as he patted her shoulder. You did the right thing. I can assure you once you saw what this galaxy has become you'll agree with my words. Cielo only shook her head in disagreement yet didn't say a word. Ban then looked over his companions that were arguing with each other and the lazy Ramala that was laying on the ground, looking nonchalant at the approaching battle. Although Ban was also relaxing himself, he wouldn't shrug off the Imperial forces to the point of not paying attention to them. Turn it on his scouter. He touched the bottom for a few moments while he applied the scanner setting to reach the whole world. Hearing the beeping sounds, Cielo raised her head as she eyed the device on Ban's ear, one that she saw herself carrying in one of her dreams. What is that thing? She asked with curiosity. Ban smiled at her while still focusing on the scouter. This beautiful and useful thing is called scouter. It serves from a wide variety of things, but the most important of them being instant communication across galaxies, planetary scanner, energy sensor, and live translator. Cielo raised her brows in surprise at the wide variety of utilities such device seemed to had, which surpassed the many tools that even Legate and Miriam wore. It sounds useful. she murmured under her breath while she remembered the various devices that she studied on the Schola. It truly is. Now I wish to ask you something. Bann eyed her with a toothy smile. Seeing her eyes laying unto him, he asked her, I hear you saying it's you and other things. What did you mean with that? Cielo froze on her spot after listening to his question, her eyes moved sideways trying to find something else to lay into, the gears on her mind trying to find an answer that didn't give away the dreams she often seen. Then she abruptly stopped, her eyes gleamed with confusion until she looked back at Bann, who was now looking at her with more curiosity. Why should I try to hide the Emperor's will? She thought to herself as her hands moved to do the Aquila sign. Letting a deep breath while closing her eyes, she took a moment to embrace her faith and with unwavering eyes she met Bann's. The Emperor has been showing me dreams of you, visions of your feats and many other things. Her last words were said with a blush slowly creeping into Cielo's cheeks. Bann raised his brows at the surprising news and couldn't help but ask her, so you're a psyker? Can you peer into the future? His hopeful tone was met with a stern face from Cielo. I pray the Emperor I am not of such, for all I've seen was his will. She shook her head and asked him with an accusatory tone, why would you believe that I am a damned soul? Seeing her zealously acting up, Bann let out a sigh and tried to reason with her. A psyker is not a damned soul like you might think, or do you believe that the Emperor is damned? Cielo breathed in profound indignation at the notion that Bann told, her eyes morphed to pure rage. Yet before she lashed out at him for saying those heretical words, she gulped down and remembered her current situation. The Emperor could never be such a being, is our God and the only reason those condemned beings doesn't destroy humanity, she said to him with a low eerie tone. Bann almost let out a chuckle at her ignorance, yet he only shook his head sideways and told her it's not a bad a thing per se to be a witch like all of you like to call them, they may even be the only thing that could prevent the Imperium to fall apart. Cielo, who had already killed psykers and seen the doom they brought, could only bit her lips in frustration. It is the ignorance and lack of training that made them so dangerous. If your empire had only followed the imperial truth, then the current situation of such people wouldn't be like it is. Bann lamented with a weary sigh. Just thinking about the amount of fuckery and bad decisions going around the empire was enough to fill him with negativity. He then looked over Cielo, who was looking at him with complicated looks, and said her, I believe that seeing the future is one of the feats that psykers are able to do. We'll have to seek someone to train you, so you don't end up opening a fucking gate to the warp. Hearing Bann chuckling at his words, Cielo looked over with consternation. I am not a witch, she reassured. Bann patted her shoulder with a smile and told her simply, don't worry, I'm not an idiot from the empire, and move away while laughing, leaving behind a frustrated Cielo who looked down and closed her eyes, both hands on her chest as she prayed to the Emperor not only for forgiveness, but to give her strength for what was about to come. Unknown to her and the Syans around, a golden wisp was circling around Cielo's hair while she prayed. Now that I think about, after all this fighting we need to move towards those villages and small towns to gather more psykers. It is really a threat to have them running around without even knowing the danger they represent. Bann thought to himself as he moved inside the base. Once they know the significant dangers that using their powers represent, it should diminish the risk of the warp and daemons possessing their bodies. Bann believed after reading the few novels he did, that the best solution for the threat of possession was to make aware their users of such thing. That in training the psykers while also giving them all the information at hand. It was them after all the ones who might hear the whispers of the darkness. And if they were aware of what would befall upon them if they ever heed their call or look at them, then it was entirely up to their stupidity to act upon it. If I'm not wrong, there was a taint that chaos undoubtedly produced to everyone that sees a daemon or interact with the warp, right? He tried to remember as he saw the sulking celery laying on a corner while hugging her legs. What do you want? She asked him with sulkiness on her voice. I want to gather us all, there's things we need to discuss in advance. He told them while meeting her eyes. There was clear grievance from her part as she felt indignation for how he treated her. Yet Bann wasn't one to ask for forgiveness to impetuous brats. Therefore the stern look on his face. I don't care, she simply said and turned around, giving her back to him. With an okay, Bann wheeled and headed back outside, leaving an enraged celery who wanted him to play into her antics. As he made his was outside, he shouted to his teammates, cut the chat and hear me out, making both Aprit and Rukul stop with their banter and cat battle, while Ramila moved towards his position. Once they gathered around, they made a circle with Ramila resting her elbow on Bann's left arm, Aprit standing on his feet in front of Bann, and Rukul taking his right side. There's at least 10,000 units moving towards our position, they're mobilizing in different vehicles. The ones would take our first focus would be their aerial units. Don't destroy them and just force them to land, incapacitated their motors so they cannot repair them in a quick motion, he ordered as he eyed them. Once their aerial support is out, we would take their vehicles and their infantry. Without the numbers they would eventually retreat back, look after all their high-ranking officers and leaders. We would use them as pawns to force them to clean the orcs in our stead. Bann's plan was simple, as everyone in the group was extremely lazy regarding the orcs, they would use the Imperial Guard to do their job. The Syans were simply too strong for the current forces to take, so they would give them the chance to call for reinforcements if they wanted, while in the meantime they cleaned the world from its current pest. Since we would make ourselves known and fight against the humans on this world, we'll have to take the bulls from its horns and do what we need. I'll be heading towards the capital to talk with their leaders and force them to a deal. Bann crossed his arms in front of his chest, making Ramela adjust her elbow position to his ribcage. You two would follow my lead and head towards the other capitals, do a small showcase of strength in the nearest wasteland to make them understand and try to seek out a good deal. Although Bann doubted the diplomatic abilities the Syans may showcase, he was at least sure that Rukul may have some pragmatism into him. And what would be looking after? Asked Aprit with a lost look on his face. You're talking about the deal? Asked Bann in confirmation, seeing Aprit nodding. You need to offer protection, technology, improvement in production, increasing in the population living conditions and strong bonds to the noble houses. Bann enumerated with his fingers. In exchange they would put the population to produce what we need, educate themselves, and the nobles would pledge loyalty towards us. They would also provide noble women to be our concubines so we can produce our descendants. Bann told him while giving a look to Ramela, who poked her elbow a little bit too strong against his ribcage at the mention of concubines. Is that all? Asked Aprit, only for Bann to nod. That would be for the meantime. Tell them that once they agreed to these first conditions we would meet again to proceed with the details. He then looked over Ramela and said to her, meanwhile you and Celery would be doing the same, with the rest of the capitals. Made sure to turn on the scouter so I can give you indications. Bann was aware of the seeming reluctance from both Ramela and Celery to let them breed with humans. He didn't know if it was jealousy or out of possessiveness over them, but he didn't trust for both Syans to correctly negotiate with the humans on their part. Now, let's prepare for battle, Bann exclaimed after letting his key in an explosion. The rest of the squad followed his lead as the four Syans started to float above the ground. After more than 12 years, Faradraz was about to witness the might of the Syans. Chapter 16, Blitz. The land southwest from Redentia trembled under the roar of engines and the marching steps of the regiment. In the sky, groups of Valkyries carried shock squads that would be the first ones to be thrown into the foray. The transport ships were accompanied by vultures armed to the teeth with destructive and ferocious weapons, missiles capable of destroying even the greatest of heretics. On land, the troops followed the various chimeras and Lehman Russ tanks. The various columns marched with fervor as they heard the chants provided by the preachers of the ecclesiarchy among their lines. The artillery, which was to be of vital importance according to the intelligence provided, was heavily guarded under the watchful gaze of the Inquisitor Gannicus and his retinue. He was the man who the troops will heed his words. His large frame, alongside the solemn look on his square face, reminded the many troops the times when they were trained. As Gannicus eyed the regiment moving at decent pace, he asked to his acolyte on his right how long it would take until we reached the point agreed with the battle sisters. His hands were itchy as his mind repeated the images recorded by the servitors. Never did Gannicus saw a psyker of the caliber showcased by the images. Someone so fast that in a blink of an eye disappeared and took away the weapons of an entire mission. Other powerful psychers or chaos daemons would be able of reproducing the feat, but not in the same speed. At least that was what Gannicus deducted. In 40 minutes or so is when shall we reach their position. The sing-song voice of Greta made his thoughts came to halt as he nodded. Gannicus then ordered his cotters to check once again their weapons while he proceeded to inform of the various abilities they should expect their enemies to have. The orders for everyone were simple: shot down every single enemy and seek for the cause of the earthquake. Thus, the minutes passed by under the clear sky of Faradraz. The sweat from the foot soldiers rained upon the dirt, as the land was flattened under the mighty weight of the regiment and its machines. Just like the acolyte Greta said, 40 minutes later Gannicus and the regiment encountered the fuming Palatine and her mission. The woman had to meet the Inquisitor as her eyes were blood-fueled in rage. Inquisitor? An offense was committed to the God Emperor himself. One of our sisters was even kidnapped. We cannot let such actions left to be unpunished. The woman tried to diminish her rush, yet it was clear for everyone she failed to do so. The Inquisitor looked over the woman and calmed her down. And so it will be done, Palatine Ursula. Do not haste, as we shall see those heretics perish under the mighty force of his armies. So he wills it. The Emperor wills it, repeated Ursula with pious tone. Yet she clung tightly her sword. I'll take, as you have already seen the images from the servitors, she questioned as they overlooked over the sisters being organized on their vehicles. We have indeed. Gannicus responded with both hands behind his back. Whatever their tricks are, I'll make sure to squander their efforts with my cotters, the man assured while he showcased an stoic look. Meanwhile Ursula couldn't help but doubt at his words after eyeing the regiment. Yet before she was able to pinpoint it, the land trembled while a rumbling sound deafened the surroundings. The soldiers were thrown in disarray as shouts and order were heard. Servitors received information while the sergeants tried to bring order to their squadrons. Yet the eyes of Gannicus and Ursula lay into the lone figure floating in the sky above. Surrounding in a whitish aura was a man of great physique clad in armor eyeing the regiment with a forlorn smile. Weapons were raised to aim into his direction as the soldiers eyed the man with awe and confusion while the earth still trembled. Hello, Imperial Guard. A deep voice resounded from the man and golden man. He eyed the Inquisitor while saying that. I am the Inquisitor Gannicus of the Ordo Xenos. By will of the Emperor I order you to give yourself in and be held into custody. For his grace and mercy you will be given honorable judgment. Gannicus shouted while trying to overcome the rumbling. His weapons and blade were unfolded as he prepared to face the negative from the witch. The rumbling suddenly stopped as a deep laugh escaped the man's mouth. Then in a blitz, the man disappeared from his position in the sky while Gannicus triggered his pistol out of reflex at the figure in front of him. Bang! The shot echoed the land while the cotters and the Palatine alongside her sisters aimed their weapons. Yet to everyone's surprise, the imposing figure of the man was facing off against the Inquisitor. On his toothy smile was being bitten the ammunition from the Inquisitor pistol. Spitting the munition, the man nodded towards the Palatine's sister. He then eyed one for one the various people around the Inquisitor as he landed his gaze into the man. "What if I refuse?" he asked to the Inquisitor, who had to raise a little bit his eyes to look into the man's face. "Then you shall be put down, as in the Imperium there's no place for rebellious witches," the Inquisitor answered as he grasped tightly to his sword. The man smiled while he said, "Well, then there is a problem, Inquisitor, as I am no witch but a Xenos." His words brought silence to the zone while the Sisters of Battle were barely containing themselves from throwing lead and fire to the Xenos. Yet Gannicus only showcased a serious frown as he asked him, "What do you want, Xenos?" His mind was sure of one thing: the only reason that hell didn't break loose, it's because the alien in front of him wanted to talk. "You're smart, I like that. For once I feared you might be one of those unreasonable Inquisitors," the Xenos said to him with a smile. "My name is Bann, and I'm here to propose you something." His words only fueled more the rage on Palatine Ursula as she screamed, "Inquisitor, there's no place for Xenos like him in the Empire, do not entertain such nonsense," and shot him down. As Gannicus was about to speak, Bann interrupted him. "Come your tits, sister, I promised Cielo that I wouldn't harm you, so let us speak in the meantime." However, his words only fueled the woman as she triggered her pistol and was soon followed by the rest of the sisters. Gannicus was pushed away by Bann as the latter disappeared from his spot. The shoots found their way to the unprepared artillery crew that were torn into shreds and blew their bodies into pink mist. Yet the barrage of shooting was brought into a halt as Bann disarmed the sisters and with a pissed tone said to them, "Do not be unreasonable, you have killed your own people for being this impulsive." Not minding the accusatory words and swears at his figure, Bann spoke again to the Inquisitor, "Move your troops away, there are orcs that are waiting to be killed. Save your men, as their lives would only be wasted battling against us." Gannicus' expression morphed into an angry one as he answered to Bann, "Is absurd for you to believe that we will comply with your words, Xenos. Cut this folly and accept your destiny." Gannicus raised his sword at Bann. Yet the latter only sighed in defeat and raised both arms. Without anyone being able to blink, Bann suddenly let out a key explosion. "Is such a shame your troops would be wasted here." His words echoed around the battlefield while Gannicus alongside his cotter raised to their feet after being thrown away by the blast. The earth once again rumbled as the soldiers from the regiment started to open fire at his figure. Yet an energy sphere was surrounding Bann, stopping the projectiles around him. "Behold humans, the might of the Syans," Bann shouted in dramatical grandiloquence as his deep voice made not only the earth tremble, but the heart of the men below him too. The clear sky was now darkened in black clouds as Bann channeled his ki, not for doing something fancy, but to bring forth terror into the hearts of the Imperial Guard. He knew that everything was being recorded. Bang bang bang. Boom boom. The sky around Bann was filled with explosions as the artillery shells exploded around him. The various lasgun were ineffective against his skin and the ammunition was blasted away by the continuous explosions that were unable to touch him. That was until a lighting was thrown into his direction, making Bann look over the origin of it as he eyed the figure of a psyker. It was a woman wearing pristine crimson clothes and was alongside the entourage of Gannicus. With a smile he said to himself, "You just saved yourself, hee hee." And in a flash he disappeared from his position. Blam. A crater was formed on the front lines of the regiment as the soldiers turned around in terror as they glanced over the tall figure of Bann, who cracked his knuckles while eyeing them. "Who will be first?" His voice vibrated on their chest as a captain launched himself with lasgun on hand and a knife on his other one. "For the Emperor," the man shouted while he ran forward. Many others soon followed his rally as they started shooting their weapons against the figure. Not minding the laser guns, Bann raised one hand as he threw an invisible ki blast. Immediately the man's head exploded like a watermelon as his body fell to the floor, his fingers still shooting his lasgun. Bann then disappeared from his position and in just a second he moved alongside the soldiers as he broke their necks, impaled their chest and decapitated their bodies with his hands. In just a mere second more than 90 soldiers were slain without a shred of mercy from the once human as he continued his onslaught forward. The soldiers watched in terror as their teammates were killed without them even noticing. Nobody was able to spot Bann as more and more soldiers fell. It was massacre that brought suffering to the poor soldiers who weren't even able to defend themselves as there was no target to aim their weapons. Men and women fell one after another as in just a minute entire platoons fell. Then it was followed by the sounds of chimeras and Lehman Russ tanks being destroyed. It was utter chaos. The smell of blood and death filled the terrain as Bann moved at his highest speed through the battle while picking his enemies. Yet he suddenly came into halt as he passed through the armor of a chimera. Inside were various soldiers who looked over his visage with horror and surprise, yet Bann looked over a female soldier with interest. A nice smell that was both pungent and potent entered his nostril and made something within him stir awake. He approached the woman and with a swift motion said to her, "You're saved," and disappeared while leaving behind a ki blast that killed the people inside. In a flash, he appeared alongside the Inquisitor and his cotters as he left the woman there, who not only was dizzy but vomiting her rations. Meanwhile the Inquisitor, the Palatine, and the Commissar were shouting their orders as they eyed with horror the sheer massacre made by the Xenos. Eyeing the disarray that he brought into the leading figures made Bann smile as he returned back to the battlefield. In seconds hundreds and dozens fell into death as Bann moved. When he thought it was enough of melee combat, he floated again into the sky while creating his ki barrier. Soon he was once again aimed and shoot as he gathered ki around his body. Directing the energy towards his hand, a bluish-white energy sphere was gathered and soon he shoot it towards the regiment column. Boom! A defying explosion made the earth tremble and sky rumble. The soldiers on the center and proximity were evaporated alongside their vehicles. Others were thrown away by the blast followed as debris fell. In just a movement, thousands died and hundreds were wounded. The spiritus of those few that saw the attack was shatter as they eyed the man capable of doing it. The cold eyes of Bann eyed the battlefield below as he crossed his arms in front of his chest. The first battle between the Saiyans and the Imperium ended with a shattering defeat of the Imperium of Mankind. Chapter 17, Showcase of Might. As the dust settled and the sunlight illuminated what remained from the regiment, devastation was all that could be seen. An enormous crater was created on the land, ash started to fall into it as glass surrounded the place. The extreme heat generated from the blast glassed the earth. Cries of agony started to raise, as others groaned in pain. On the now wasteland lay down hundreds of bodies amidst the charred remains of the mechanized cavalry. The smell of charred flesh was nauseating. Some soldiers stumbled as they weren't able to keep their balance, their eardrums were torn by the explosion as blood oozed from their ears. Many fell to their knees and started crying, others looked lost at the destruction. The Inquisitor, his cotter, and the Sisters of Battle looked over with a somber expression. Some were even looking with dread. What was in front of them was beyond what a regular Xenos could achieve, or an insignificant psyker. His floating figure slowly descended as he moved towards them. Bann eyed his enemies with a plain look. He was sure by now that the Imperial forces understood the difference between them. This could have been prevented. Those soldiers could have lived and see the day to fight against the true menace in this world, the orcs. Yet this is the path your decisions led. Bann opened his mouth as he gathered the attention. I came here with the intention of negotiating. Yet I only received undeserved violence. Is this what the Emperor's Imperium fell into? A mix of zealous fools that don't know what's good for them. His words echoed while the few soldiers that still preserved their hearing listened to his words. Silence, you wretched being! Do not spout such venomous words, for the Imperium's greatness is beyond what you could understand. Palatine Ursula shouted at him while picking up a lasgun and shooting at him. Bann eyed the still laser beam coming at his way. He spotted the other sisters picking up weapons, seemingly frozen on time. Sighing, he let the beam hit his body while the sisters opened fire once again. Yet the rest didn't fire at the Saiyan as it was clear for everyone to see he seemed to be immune to the damage made by their weapons. You're not only wasting your ammo and strength, but also your time. Bann opened his arms as he tapped the ground. He walked forward towards the Inquisitor Gannicus, who was looking at him with clear consternation. Call for reinforcements if you want, but it would be futile. Order your men to march elsewhere and look for the orcs. Bann ordered to Gannicus. The Inquisitor face morphed into a furious one. I would not do such thing. It is you that needs to be hunt down. Seeing the man not willing to cooperate, Bann moved his hand and choked the man. His cotters immediately moved to his sides and opened fire at Bann's figure, yet he remained stoic. A small barrier engulfed not only him, but the Inquisitor too. Ammo seemed to stand still while the psyker attacks only crashed with the barrier, unable to penetrate. For the other people in command, move your troops away and search for the pest. Or else this man is dead. With those words said, Bann disappeared from the spot while he blitzed away at his highest speed towards the base. Gannicus couldn't even look to the surround as the sheer speed that Bann reached made him unable to see anything but a blur. In just a moment the two approached the Saiyan base. Bann heard the Inquisitor grunting in pain as the G-forces almost killed him. Throwing his body to the ground, he chained the man with keychains on his limbs while he eyed the alarmed Cielo. Take care of him in the meantime, I'll be back. With those words he flew away. Cielo wasn't even able to say a word to Bann as she looked over the bloodied and pale Inquisitor as she made her way towards the man position. Gritting her teeth as the sonic boom echoed, she tried to speak to the man, but found him unconscious. Yet it didn't take long before she heard another boom as Bann appeared once again with two figures under his arms. Tapping the ground, he put the two females with gentleness as he looked over. Cielo tried to speak with these two. The one with robes accompanied the Inquisitor over there. Let them know it would be worthless to try and escape. Bann pointed with his finger at Gannicus while Cielo opened her eyes wide at the mention of his rank. And with this girl here you can help her get inside. If she tries to follow the order from those two, just tell her that she's now standing higher up than them. As Bann said this, he gulped down while he eyed the short-haired guardsman. The same enchanting smell filled his nose, making him dizzy. Cielo, who saw the lustful glint on Bann's eyes, looked troubled while she asked him, why did you brought her? I can understand the Inquisitor and his follower, but she... Cielo pointed to the seemingly normal guardsman laying on the ground. Bann looked over the Sister of Battle and with a smile simply told her she's going to be my concubine. And turned around. Now, I'll be going for a while. I have to make deals with the nobles in the city, so be a good girl and take care of these people, will ya? Bann turned his face as he gave a smugglish grin to Cielo. Bang! The land before his feet was blasted away as he disappeared in the sky. Cielo could only let out a deep sigh of exasperation. With closed eyes she prayed, oh my emperor, what else do you expect from me? She didn't know what to say at these people once they woke up. She was a traitor now by all means, and they would undoubtedly want to kill her once she showed friendliness or even a slight favor at Bann. I guess I'll be taking the prisoner card, she thought to herself while letting out a sigh. Her mind was now working to provide a good alibi. Such was her fate. Meanwhile Bann approached at great speed towards Redentia with a clear goal on his mind. By the loyalty of the nobles. By now they probably know who I am, right? He wondered to himself as the grey stone walls of the feudal city made themselves clear. Ban's body suddenly tensed as his eyes eyed the extremely slow-motioned missiles, artillery shell, and other kind of energy weapons coming at his way. Letting his ki encroach his body, he resumed his flying as he swiftly located the fortress that held the governing palace. Eyeing the streets, he saw guardsmen alongside the garrison heading towards the fortress. Raising his eyes, he looked over the square that held a couple thousand people moving in alarm. BLAM. Landing in the middle of square, Ban let the dust settle as he saw the weapons aimed at him. Noticing the trembling hands on some of them made Ban let out a slight grin. Call the local nobles or whoever is in highest position from this world. I came to discuss a few things. Ban spoke while he advanced forward. Halt. Hold your fire. Do not engage. As Ban kept stepping forward, he heard the shouts of the officers as they tried to stop their soldiers from killing them all. Soon enough, a few figures clad in fancy clothes with Imperium regalia and motifs appeared in front of him. Their faces looked somber as they eyed the Saiyan. A man with a laser eye and bald head stepped forward and spoke to Ban. Follow us inside. And please refrain from attacking us. Ban let out a chuckle with a laugh as he answered to the man, quite shameless of you for asking that after such receiving. But I will. Heh. As he followed the officer's lead, Ban took a moment to inspect the people surrounding him. There were various abhumans alongside mutants. Be it people with 3 eyes, cat people, ogrins, and all kind of interesting combinations. It seems like a freak show, crazy that they are so vicious against the Eldars as even them look more human than some of these guys. Ban couldn't help but think to himself as he eyed the scenery. His gaze, however, was soon occupied by the figure standing below the frame of a double door with intricate carvings. There a tall woman with fiery red hair and icy eyes looked over him. Her gorgeous face, accompanied by the green dress she wore, made her stand out like a proud flower amidst the scene. Ban's eyes couldn't help but roam down to the woman figure as he saw her wide hips giving her an hourglass figure, while her pristine legs left a hint of intrigue to see the rest hidden behind the green clothes. His whole attention was taken by the woman that he didn't notice the other nobles nor the officers looking over at him. Ahem. The bald man that lead him coughed to get his attention. Being successful, these people are the nobles and dignitaries from Redentia. Please let's get inside so we can talk. As Ban advanced, he was able to sense the various individuals being extremely tensed while at the same time their faces sweated profusely. Be it male or females, they were using their handkerchief to clean the drops on their faces, while their wandering eyes betrayed their anxiety. I want those things away from the room where we'll be standing, Ban suddenly said after seeing various skulls, cherubims, and servitors moving alongside them. The officers ordered with haste for the servitors to be taken away as they walked through the marbled floors while Ban scanned the place. The architecture was clearly grandiose while fine works were adorning each corridor with elegance. Paintings featuring different individuals alongside unique carvings and statues could be seen around. This would be a nice place to live. Ban pointed to himself while the tapping sounds of their footsteps echoed around. They came into halt once they reached a door with ebony wood. 2 halberdiers were standing at each side of the door guarding. A servant opened the door as the nobles and officers made hastily their way inside, sitting into the various ornamented seats that looked expensive at Ban's eyes. The high ceiling of the room alongside the ecclesiastical painting on the roofs gave a grand splendor to the chamber. The white marble of the floor was accompanied with an intrinsic pattern that pointed towards the middle of the chamber. There in a small circular stand with 5 steps is where Ban stood proudly in front of the nobles. At his sides below the stairs the officers stood together while they tried to give an stoic facade. Ban looked over the chamber as he tried to spot any opening or window that could be useful if it was necessary. By now I expect all of you to know who I am, or better said, what I am capable of. Ban spoke after finishing with his assessment. I am Ban, from a race of proud warriors that conquered worlds and galaxies alike. We're called Saiyans and we held a power beyond what any of you could fathom. He took his pause to gaze each one of the individuals in the chamber. Resting his eyes on the woman once again, he resumed, as you have seen, I've already defeated the Imperial Guard and the forces of the Inquisitor. His words made the nobles gulp down in fear as the servitors clearly showcased his feat. It was something broadcasted to the various capitals on the planet. So without the excuse of your sorry defenses, I am here to make our demands clear. His deep voice took a ruthless tone. Suddenly this world and its moon would fall into our control. We expect not only yours but the population loyalty. His words stuck like lightning at each individual present as Ban keeps saying his demands. You will be producing what we require, and last but not least, you will be providing your finest woman to produce our heirs. With this we will ensure that your families are tied with our fate. The first ones to object were the Imperium lackeys. May the Emperor damn my soul if I let someone took one of his planets without fighting. We shall rather destroy this world than let it be taken by a Xenos. With a plain look, Ban raised one arm and with a motion of his hand, he let his ki blast the head of the Empire officers, leaving behind 2 pink mist and a terrified audience. I am not asking, this is what is about to happen. Of course there is something else in return for you all. Ban showcased now a more amiable face. Yet it was evident that every single noble aside from a pair was extremely tensed and horrified. Suddenly an enchanting voice asked with interest, what is that you will offer to us? Ban turned towards the origin and saw the red-haired woman looking at him. Smiling at her, he answered, the most important of them all is us. This world would be under the protection of the Saiyan race. Nothing this galaxy has to offer would shake this planet. Ban spoke with confidence as he started to float. But most importantly, we will provide you with technology far superior than anything the Empire could ever offer. Ships capable of moving to nearby system in a couple of minutes, armor sturdy enough to even withstand those annoying lasers, medical advance far beyond you could imagine, and many more. Bann opened his arms wide as he and the woman continue staring each other. Is that all? The woman asked with a plain tone. Is the birth of an empire such a small matter for you to ask such question? Bann grinned while he asked her back with amusement. Aurora shook her head while she raised from her seat and walked forward. It wouldn't be the case, sire, if we didn't spoke about the possible retaliation from the Imperium of mankind itself. There was respect on the woman's voice, though it wasn't for what the Imperium represented, but for its might. Oh dear, it is not them whom you should fear, but us. As Bann said that, he let out a key blast through the opened window he previously spotted. Only the sizzling sound of the key flying could be heard for a brief moment until an explosion was heard from afar. Boom. Redentia trembled while the nobles eyed with terror at the man floating in the high ceilings of the chambers. For all their lives they felt not only reverence to the figure of the Emperor, but the Imperium itself. Many heard and saw what the armies were capable of. Yet for once they felt sheer and utter fear at the presence of the Saiyan. Now, shall we sit and speak the details? Chapter 18, Throne. After doing a little showcase of power, Bann sat with the nobles and started stating the improvements they would be giving to Faradraz, be it by modernizing the cities and towns while also stepping into a technological era, to the talks concerning the education of the masses. He made his stance clear regarding the needs that this world would have once they approached a certain milestone. He then proceeded to explain the importance of the Psychers in their future society, although it was heavily met with disagreement, looks and disgust at the notion. Yet they could only accept his words. For more than 40 minutes he spoke with them and explained what he expected not only for Redentia but the whole planet itself. And so we reach the last point. There are currently 2 other male Saiyans alongside me who are, and would be, in the age of taking women to increase our numbers. We do expect females from your noble families to be given so we can tie our lineages and deepen our relationship with Faradraz. Bann explained while the nobles looked at each other, many with doubtful looks as they couldn't believe the notion of a Xenos species mixing with humans. But aren't you a Xenos? How could you impregnate a human? Aurora couldn't help but ask Bann with a raised brow. Aside from our tails and other features, we are like your regular human, although we are vastly superior in every aspect you may think of. He answered her with confidence and arrogance as he tapped his finger on the armrest of a wooden chair that was given to him. Aurora sat more comfortably on her seat as she leaned forward and asked Bann, so, if you take a noble woman and have a children with her, would you give her a world for her family? As you mentioned, you'll be conquering worlds from now on. Interested in reigning over a world, Ms. Fenitos? Bann asked with amusement at her clear interest, but answering your question, yes, that would be indeed the case. Each Saiyan would be given a world to hold into alongside his family, for all of us would be princes. His words seemed to not only pique Aurora's interest but all of the nobles too. Many of them have been raised among the nobility of the Imperium of mankind and seen the amount of extravagances that planet governors enjoy. That wasn't without saying the importance their families would be getting by holding control of an entire planet and its resources. What was offered was far beyond what they could even dream of. Not only that, but given the ties with us, you'll end up having a being of our might or even higher protecting you. He sweet-coated them. Aurora remained silent as she eyed Bann with the same icy look she always showcased. Yet her mind was in a roar as she thought over the implications and possibilities such a decision may represent. Of course, we'll be picking from the women you'll be presenting, as we cannot waste our time just breeding around. There's much to be done and I'm sure our enemies will not sit idle in the meantime. Bann pressured the nobles as he let his eyes roam over Aurora. After hearing the various murmurs, Bann finalized with his pondering and decided to act. Miss Fenitos, I wonder if you're married or engaged? Aurora, who was still debating over, couldn't help but be stunned by his words and said out of reflex, excuse me. The woman was simply too far into her machinations that her mind was left unable to process what was said. I asked if you're either married or engaged. He told her while giving a toothy grin. The decision has already been made for me. Aurora realized while also sighing in relief. Mostly due to Bann doing the job of bringing out the issue. I am not, sire. I'm still marriageable and without suitors. How could that be? A woman of your charms is someone that could easily make nations wage war for your hand. Bann asked while pondering why was the reason behind it. One needs to be blind to not see the beauty and sexiness the woman oozed. She is but a thorny rose, milord. Someone better to enjoy from afar rather than catch with your hands. Least you bleed for it. A man among the nobles voiced out while trying to answer Bann. Some whispers of agreement resounded through the chamber while the answer made Bann let out a smile laugh. It was clear that many have suffered under the woman and have been wary since. I am a woman of worth, Lord Ventus. I do not expect less for me than someone worthy of, said Aurora while giving a glance to the man. And could I be a man of such worth, Miss Fenitos? Asked Bann with amusement. The moment he asked her in regards to her availability, it was already sealed the fate of Aurora. That you seem to be, sire. Aurora answered him with courtesy, making a smile appear on Bann's face. Tapping the armrest once again, Bann raised his voice. I'm going to hold another meeting with you all later on, but this time we'll be working to start doing our job. So I'll be waiting for no less but all to bring forth all the information at your hands in regards to the functioning and production of this city and the surrounding lands. His deep voice echoed throughout the chamber while the nobles followed his steps after seeing him standing up. My team should be speaking with the other cities by now. Ensure that the Imperial guardsmen hunt down those orcs in the meantime. Ban then turned to look at Aurora and said to her and Miss Fenitos, I hope to speak with you later on, in private. Saying that, Ban floated once again to the ceiling and in a flash, he disappeared from the chamber, making all the present feel like a weight was lifted from their shoulders. Some fall into their seats out of relief. Others simply raise their hands behind their heads as they look over each other with disbelief. It is clear that a new era has begun in our world. We cannot do anything against it, so let's ensure that Redentia is up to the task and secure its longevity. The sudden voice of Aurora echoed throughout the chamber as her tone was firm and cold. Although many wished her words weren't true, they could only bow their heads and accept their fate. Thus, the reign of the Syans started in Faradraz. Far above the sky over Redentia was Ban raising towards the stratosphere. His goal was a clear one after remembering one important thing regarding the proceedings in the Imperium. As the atmosphere thinned, Ban took a deep breath and raised his speed. Docked alongside the now more clear space station of Gothic design, was a kilometer-length ship of beautiful design under Ban's opinion. It was escorted on both sides by 2 other ships of lesser length. Should I destroy those ships? But if I do that, then there won't be a way for the Battle Sisters and remaining troops to leave the planet. Ban pondered over as he continued approaching the space station. With the change of government, there was a need for someone to dispatch the man who was sitting on the throne of this world. After spotting a long corridor bay, Ban accelerated in a moment and without any further thought, penetrated the thick walls and armor of the space station. Sounds of alarms reached his ear as the pressure in the corridor was decreasing at an alarming rate while Ban moved towards one of the pressurized doors and made his way inside. It's nothing but a scratch, Ban said to himself after giving a brief thought of the reparation someone would do later on. Once he turned around, he was welcomed by the sight of stunned and terrified people who looked scrawny and abused. Their hollow eyes and wrinkled skin showcased the clear mistreatment they suffered. Seeing the collars around their necks made Ban understand who they were slaves. He assessed while a clear frown appeared on his face. Not giving them a second glance, he made his way into the space station while he was reminded of the grim dark nature of the universe he was in. The smell of wax and other mixes he didn't wish to know invaded his nostrils as he looked over the scouter beside his eye and followed the path it scanned. The metallic sound of his footsteps was dimmed by the constant blare of the alarm, until he finally saw some armed individuals making their way towards him. They didn't voice out a halt order and just opened fire against him with their lasgun. Ban quickly dispatched them while using just a key beam from his free eye. As he entered one of the central corridors of the space station, he faced more resistance from the station troops while some other fellas that looked like Imperial Navy officers exited the adjacent cabins while firing their weapons at him. Ban halted his steps for a moment after killing a disgusting officer with a particularly ugly face. What made him stop was the overwhelming negative key he felt inside the cabin. He stepped out. Moving the door with his hand, he took a look inside and saw a woman with furry ears shaking. Her back and limbs were filled with cuts, bruises, and scars. She was the origin of such negative emotions that made Ban a little bit uncomfortable. Hey, do you understand me? That guy is dead, he told her. The abhuman just stayed in her position while she hugged her legs, still giving her back. Closing his eyes, Ban used his mind, and just like the many times he used the trick with his Saiyan teammates, he spoke to her mind. You're okay now, I've killed that guy. Remain here for the meantime since it's going to be dangerous outside. The woman stopped shaking as she turned her head and looked over Ban with widened eyes. He just nodded at her and exited the cabin. Eyeing the door of the various other cabins, he stopped his mind from wandering and simply shook his head. It would be solved once I kill the planet king or whatever he may be. Then I would take care of these fellas. Ban decided to step up his speed. It was when he saw a large group defending a gate that he knew he reached his goal. Swiftly dispatching the defenders, he stepped inside and was welcomed by more lasers fired at him. Soldiers, servitors, and sentry guns opened fire at him while the man he was looking for was cowering behind his loyal guard. Enough, Ban simply murmured under his breath as the world froze and everything seemed to stand still. Moving in front of the man who had a mix of fear and anger on his face, Ban looked down at the expensive clothes and well-fed visage of the man. His silver hair was a mess, his bloodshot eyes were frantic open. He was carrying in one hand a light bolt pistol, while the other held an energy weapon. Resting his hand on the crown of the man's head, Ban applied a small amount of force before it was crushed. The time seemed to resume as a bloody explosion bathed the room and everyone turned to look at the origin of it. There they saw a scene that left them horrified and stunned. The mirrors that looked over Faradraz were painted in blood while the figure of the 6 feet 5 inches tall Saiyan clad in his armor was grabbing by the bloodied skull and the spine of the Lord Commander Kalos, whose remaining lay at the feet of the barbarian. There's a charge of administration now. Ban's cold and deep voice sends shivers down the spine of the soldiers present. Eyeing the 100 of individuals in the chamber, he muttered, "And none of you is welcome in my station." What followed his words were cries of agony and desperation as Ban slaughtered without mercy almost every individual in the chamber, leaving behind only a handful of survivors. The ebony marbled floor was covered in crimson blood, and hundreds of bodies were scattered around alongside their innards. The smell of blood, shit, and piss was nauseating. Only a tech priest from the Adeptus Mechanicus alongside 4 other servants were spared, yet they were kneeling before Ban, who was sitting on the fancy throne of Faradraz. Eyeing the planet, His eyes were calculating, and a plan that would turn upside down the whole galaxy was brewing in his mind. Chapter 19, Spoils of War. For more than 1 hour Cielo sat inside the Saiyan base while she looked over the 3 unconscious figures lying on the metallic floor. With eyes closed she tried to meditate and pray to he who sits on Terra for insight into her next steps. Cielo wasn't one to lie or to deceit. She saw such things as demeaning of a person's integrity. Although she hid her dreams from her sisters, she felt that such a thing was more of a connection with the Emperor than anything else. Thus she was now feeling troubled by what she needed to do once everyone woke up. And much to her chagrin the first signs of some of them waking up started to appear. The cotter that accompanied the Inquisitor was the first one to start stirring up from her slumber. She seemed sluggish for a moment until she jolted awake and looked around in search of danger. The surrounding area around the cotter was illuminated with bright flashes of lightning. She cautiously surveyed her surroundings. Her eyes darted around, scanning for any signs of danger. Her attention was drawn to a figure sitting while looking over her, and as she approached, she furrowed her brow and asked, "Who are you, and where are we?" Her voice was laced with both confusion and concern, as she tried to piece together the events that had brought her to this unfamiliar place. Directly looking into the witch's eyes, Cielo let out a deep sigh and answered her, "We'd been captured by the Saiyans. They are holding up hostages in their base." Cielo motioned with her hands to their surrounding space. The cotter, however, seemed stunned for a moment until she opened her eyes wide open. She then searched around in a frenzy until she spotted the figure of Inquisitor Gannicus lying on the floor. She stumbled towards the figure as she tried to assess whether he was wounded or not. Seeing her desperation, Cielo told her he did nothing to him aside from kidnapping and throwing him to the floor. Yet her words seemed to not reach the psyker ears. The woman meticulously searched every inch of the Inquisitor's body, her eyes scanning every crevice and fold of his armor. She seemed determined to find something, and her search went on for several minutes until she finally let out a deep sigh of relief. She slowly brought both arms towards the chest of the Inquisitor and bowed her head, resting it on her hands. Her lips curled into a mocking smile as she let out a laugh that echoed through the room, filled with a sense of both mocking and contempt. "I'm useless. I couldn't even stop a Xenos from attacking us. He would be so disappointed," the woman murmured while her whole body started to shake. With chillness in her gaze, Cielo looked over the woman until she deemed more worthy to pay more attention to the future woman of Bann, warding over the female guardsman. As Cielo observed the woman's body closely, her eyes fixed on the various scars that marred the skin of her arms, neck, and hands. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips as she traced her fingers over the scars on her own hands, feeling a sense of camaraderie with the woman before her. The scars on her skin told a story of battles fought and won, a testament to her strength and resilience. Cielo felt a deep sense of admiration for the woman, whose scars spoke volumes about the struggles she had overcome in her life. It showcased that she was a worthy daughter of the Emperor and that not only did she survive to tell the tale, but proved to be enlightened as she was now lying in front of her, waiting to be taken as the woman of a figure that holds power beyond Cielo's imagination. "It was his will for you to be here, and I shall see his will be done," Cielo said to herself in her mind while eyeing carefully at the guardsman. As the room grew quiet, the stern voice of the cotter cut through the stillness, demanding an answer. "I need to know who you are," she said, her tone leaving no room for ambiguity. Her amber eyes locked onto Cielo's back, her posture rigid and unyielding, as if daring the battle sister to withhold the information. The air in the room grew tense, and Cielo could feel the weight of her scrutiny bearing down on her. Not looking in the direction of the cotter, Cielo remained still in her position as she answered, "I am Sister Superior Cielo Sterna, from the Order of the Redeemed Flame. And who you might be, witch?" Cielo didn't see it, but the mention of the word witch made the cotter tremble a little bit. Nonetheless, the woman answered, "I am the Inquisitor Gannicus Acolyte. My name is Augusta and I'm a sanctioned psyker, not a witch." Cielo shook her head and closed her eyes in response to the woman's words. "Call it what you will, but in the eyes of him, you are merely a witch. One who is unlucky enough to have not been offered to his throne in Terra as a sacrifice." Augusta was struggling to keep her temper under control after hearing such words, her jaw tightly clenched as she fought the urge to lash out. She knew that if she didn't rein in her emotions, she would do something she would later regret. She bit her tongue, trying to keep herself from speaking impulsively, and let out a deep breath of frustration. Finally, she looked at Cielo and said, "We do not have the luxury of arguing such things. We should be planning on how to escape from this place and reach out for communication." Hearing her words not only made Cielo let out a chuckle at the notion but also made her remember the parting words of Bann. Shaking her head and turning to look at Augusta, she told her, "You're welcome to try, though it would be futile since they would get us back without any effort whatsoever." Seeing the acolyte about to lash out at her, she added, "You have seen what they're capable of, am I right? Then you should know that there are more of them." Augusta looked over the sister of battle with strangeness after hearing her words. It was the first time she witnessed one of them sounding so defeated, as if she had already accepted her fate. A stark contrast with the fierce and unyielding image she had of the battle sisters. In Augusta's opinion, it was unfit for Cielo to accept it. "And you expect me to sit here while we wait for them? Just what in the name of the Emperor is wrong with you?" Augusta couldn't help but ask with clear indignation. As Cielo listened to her words, she remained impassive and kept staring at Augusta. "I did not perish in battle and I was brought here. I'll stand and wait for his will before doing anything rash." Hearing the words that bordered heresy, made Augusta look at her with frustration. On one side, she was aware of the zealously that the Sisters of Battle were commonly known for. So not even for once she'd believed that Cielo was colluding with Bann, nor that he even tasked the Sister of Battle to look after them. Augusta was acutely aware of the formidable power of the Saiyans. She had no illusions about the danger they posed and understood that even if they managed to break free from their current predicament, it was highly likely they would be tracked down and captured once again. Feeling helpless and unable to devise a viable escape plan, Augusta settled back down next to the Inquisitor and attempted to calm her racing thoughts. She knew that her mind was clouded with fear and anxiety and that any rash decision could prove disastrous. She took a deep breath and tried to focus on the present moment, hoping that a solution would eventually reveal itself. Thus, the Saiyan base was once again in silence as both females waited for someone else to wake or the Saiyans to return. Neither did the Inquisitor or the female guardsman wake up before both Cielo and Augusta heard something approaching. Tap tap, tap tap. The metallic sound of footsteps reached their place as they both looked over the origin of it. Walking down the corridor, both tensed their bodies as they eyed the figure of the lavender-haired girl in Saiyan armor. Celery stopped in her tracks once she saw the various figures alongside Cielo. Raising her right eyebrow, she asked, "And who are these three? Who captured them?" Her questions were directed to Cielo, who looked at the Saiyan girl with clear animosity on her part. Yet she answered, "Bann brought them." Hearing her calling him for his name, made Celery furrow her brows in annoyance and seem to forget about the new prisoners. "When did you get so familiar with him?" Tell me." The little girl appeared in front of Cielo, who was surprised by the sudden action and fell to her back. Eyeing the eyes of the demon girl, Cielo quickly recomposed herself and looked with rage at Celery as she answered, "I don't need to answer such a thing, you wretched fiend." Celery narrowed her eyes at her response and attitude. Grabbing Cielo by her neck, she lowered her childish voice to an ice tone, "Don't get funny ideas in your head, you bug. None of you humans will be enough for him," she hissed as she threw her down. Celery summoned her inner energy and focused it on the tip of her finger. With a steady hand, she pointed directly at Cielo, who gazed back at her without flinching or showing any signs of fear or discomfort. "I should kill you now since you are no longer of purpose. We have already defeated the human armies and now we control this world." Letting out the energy, Celery watched as the key impacted the battle sister chest and fell. She then moved her eyes towards the three other humans and after seeing the hateful glare that Augusta was giving her, let out a humph of annoyance and moved inside the base, looking for a seat to wait until everyone came back. Watching the Saiyan walk inside, Augusta looked over Cielo's body, which lay motionless on the floor. Gulping down, Augusta made the Aquila sign and closed her eyes. Enough blood was spilled today. Yet a couple of seconds later she felt a golden flash passing through her eyelids, making her open them both in a hurry to witness a miracle. Cielo was staring back at her with a confused expression. The Sister Superior showcased a consternate look on her face while she touched her chest area. Upon closer inspection, the chest plate worn by Cielo revealed a tiny circular gap, barely larger than the width of a finger. The gap was situated directly over her chest, where her heart lay beating beneath the protective armor. As the Cotter and the Battle Sister exchanged glances, they were both struck with a sense of disbelief. As Augusta gazed upon the daunting gap in Cielo's armor, her hand trembled slightly as she summoned the courage to make the Aquila sign. Cielo watched intently, mirroring Augusta's movements as she too closed her eyes and delved into her memories of the experience. It was a moment she would never forget, a moment when Cielo felt as if all the air had been sucked from her lungs, and her strength was rapidly draining away. But then, in a burst of warmth and light, a fierce fire ignited within her chest, renewing her spirit and awakening her to the power within. If she previously held any doubt, it was all but dispersed. "I shall say this chance you have given me to see your wish and command be done, my Emperor." Cielo prayed with conviction while feeling tears streaming down her face. "The Emperor, he healed you." Augusta could only mutter in disbelief. Swoosh swoosh. Tap 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 tap. Yet before Cielo could utter a word, they both heard the arrival of two more Saiyans. Cielo didn't mind them as she closed her eyes again and decided to keep thanking and praying to the Emperor. Augusta looked with trepidation towards the corridor until the figure of Ramela made herself visible while an annoyed expression was all over her face. "That idiot of Aprit. Did you see him touching that woman's body? He is staying back because of her." Ramela fumed in anger as she let out her frustration. "And you too, big brother? If I didn't look for you would be doing the same." She stumped her feet to the ground as she turned around and stared at her brother. Rukul walked over with confidence on each step as he hastily scanned over the corner where the four hostages were currently as he answered Ramela. "He's just finishing the touches of the negotiations, and I'm of age to fancy women, little sis. Remember that." He then pointed with his chin towards Augusta, Gannicus, and the guardsman as he exclaimed, "More importantly, there seems to be more guests brought by either Celery or Bann." Walking over them he saw Augusta looking fearful at him while she tried to cover with her body at the Inquisitor. Seeing her antics made a grin appear on Rukul's face as he eyed from head to toe the woman. The woman's hood was pulled low over her head, casting a shadow over her face. Despite this, her presence was captivating. She seemed to radiate a certain charm that drew people to her. Her features were delicate and feminine, with a small, perfectly proportioned nose and full, lush lips that seemed to beg to be kissed. Her skin was smooth and despite a scar on her cheek, she had a healthy glow. Even with her face obscured by the hood, there was no mistaking the fact that she was a vision to behold. As the fabric of her robe draped over her body and her armor encased her form, it struggled to wholly obscure the contours of her figure. The swell of her hips and the arch of her back were still visible, tempting the gaze of any onlooker. Despite the modesty of her attire, her voluptuous curves were strikingly apparent. It was a fine woman, one that Rukul seemed eager to know. Crouching, he tilted his head sideways as he asked who you might be, miss. Yet before he could get an answer from Augusta, a deep voice resonated through the base as Cielo, Augusta, and Ramila looked over the figure that walked in. She's a spoil of war, mine to be more precise, Bann spoke while he walked over to a seat in the middle of the room. Looking over the direction of the corner she was scurried into, Bann stared back at Augusta, who gulped down while eyeing him. Although she didn't understand a word he said, his fierce glare made her shiver. Her right hand moved to search for something to grasp. Finding only the armor of the Inquisitor, who lay still unconscious. For more than 1 hour Cielo sat inside the Saiyan base while she looked over the 3 unconscious figures lying on the metallic floor. With eyes closed she tried to meditate and pray to he who sits on Terra for insight into her next steps. Cielo wasn't one to lie or to deceit. She saw such things as demeaning of a person's integrity. Although she hid her dreams from her sisters, she felt that such a thing was more of a connection with the Emperor than anything else. Thus she was now feeling troubled by what she needed to do once everyone woke up. And much to her chagrin, the first signs of some of them waking up started to appear. The cotter that accompanied the Inquisitor was the first one to start stirring up from her slumber. She seemed sluggish for a moment until she jolted awake and looked around in search of danger. The surrounding area around the cotter was illuminated with bright flashes of lightning. She cautiously surveyed her surroundings. Her eyes darted around, scanning for any signs of danger. Her attention was drawn to a figure sitting while looking over her, and as she approached, she furrowed her brow and asked, "Who are you, and where are we?" Her voice was laced with both confusion and concern, as she tried to piece together the events that had brought her to this unfamiliar place. Directly looking into the witch's eyes, Cielo let out a deep sigh and answered her, "We'd been captured by the Saiyans. They are holding up hostages in their base." Cielo motioned with her hands to their surrounding space. The cotter, however, seemed stunned for a moment until she opened her eyes wide open. She then searched around in a frenzy until she spotted the figure of Inquisitor Gannicus lying on the floor. She stumbled towards the figure as she tried to assess whether he was wounded or not. Seeing her desperation, Cielo told her he did nothing to him aside from kidnapping and throwing him to the floor. Yet her words seemed to not reach the psyker ears. The woman meticulously searched every inch of the Inquisitor's body, her eyes scanning every crevice and fold of his armor. She seemed determined to find something, and her search went on for several minutes until she finally let out a deep sigh of relief. She slowly brought both arms towards the chest of the Inquisitor and bowed her head, resting it on her hands. Her lips curled into a mocking smile as she let out a laugh that echoed through the room, filled with a sense of both mocking and contempt. "I'm useless. I couldn't even stop a Xenos from attacking us. He would be so disappointed," the woman murmured while her whole body started to shake. With chillness in her gaze, Cielo looked over the woman until she deemed more worthy to pay more attention to the future woman of Bann, warding over the female guardsman. As Cielo observed the woman's body closely, her eyes fixed on the various scars that marred the skin of her arms, neck, and hands. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips as she traced her fingers over the scars on her own hands, feeling a sense of camaraderie with the woman before her. The scars on her skin told a story of battles fought and won, a testament to her strength and resilience. Cielo felt a deep sense of admiration for the woman, whose scars spoke volumes about the struggles she had overcome in her life. It showcased that she was a worthy daughter of the Emperor and that not only did she survive to tell the tale, but proved to be enlightened as she was now lying in front of her, waiting to be taken as the woman of a figure that holds power beyond Cielo's imagination. "It was his will for you to be here, and I shall see his will be done," Cielo said to herself in her mind while eyeing carefully at the guardsman. As the room grew quiet, the stern voice of the cotter cut through the stillness, demanding an answer. "I need to know who you are," she said, her tone leaving no room for ambiguity. Her amber eyes locked onto Cielo's back, her posture rigid and unyielding, as if daring the battle sister to withhold the information. The air in the room grew tense, and Cielo could feel the weight of her scrutiny bearing down on her. Not looking in the direction of the cotter, Cielo remained still in her position as she answered, "I am Sister Superior Cielo Sterna, from the Order of the Redeemed Flame. And who you might be, witch." Cielo didn't see it, but the mention of the word witch made the cotter tremble a little bit. Nonetheless, the woman answered, "I am the Inquisitor Gannicus Acolyte. My name is Augusta and I'm a sanctioned psyker, not a witch." Cielo shook her head and closed her eyes in response to the woman's words. "Call it what you will, but in the eyes of him, you are merely a witch. One who is unlucky enough to have not been offered to his throne in Terra as a sacrifice." Augusta was struggling to keep her temper under control after hearing such words, her jaw tightly clenched as she fought the urge to lash out. She knew that if she didn't rein in her emotions, she would do something she would later regret. She bit her tongue, trying to keep herself from speaking impulsively, and let out a deep breath of frustration. Finally, she looked at Cielo and said, "We do not have the luxury of arguing such things. We should be planning on how to escape from this place and reach out for communication." Hearing her words not only made Cielo let out a chuckle at the notion but also made her remember the parting words of Bann. Shaking her head and turning to look at Augusta, she told her, "You're welcome to try, though it would be futile since they would get us back without any effort whatsoever." Seeing the acolyte about to lash out at her, she added, "You have seen what they're capable of, am I right? Then you should know that there are more of them." Augusta looked over the sister of battle with strangeness after hearing her words. It was the first time she witnessed one of them sounding so defeated, as if she had already accepted her fate. A stark contrast with the fierce and unyielding image she had of the battle sisters. In Augusta's opinion, it was unfit for Cielo to accept it. "And you expect me to sit here while we wait for them? Just what in the name of the Emperor is wrong with you?" Augusta couldn't help but ask with clear indignation. As Cielo listened to her words, she remained impassive and kept staring at Augusta. "I did not perish in battle and I was brought here. I'll stand and wait for his will before doing anything rash." Hearing the words that bordered heresy, made Augusta look at her with frustration. On one side, she was aware of the zealously that the Sisters of Battle were commonly known for. So not even for once she'd believed that Cielo was colluding with Bann, nor that he even tasked the Sister of Battle to look after them. Augusta was acutely aware of the formidable power of the Syans. She had no illusions about the danger they posed and understood that even if they managed to break free from their current predicament, it was highly likely they would be tracked down and captured once again. Feeling helpless and unable to devise a viable escape plan, Augusta settled back down next to the Inquisitor and attempted to calm her racing thoughts. She knew that her mind was clouded with fear and anxiety and that any rash decision could prove disastrous. She took a deep breath and tried to focus on the present moment, hoping that a solution would eventually reveal itself. Thus, the Saiyan base was once again in silence as both females waited for someone else to wake or the Saiyans to return. Neither did the Inquisitor or the female guardsman wake up before both Cielo and Augusta heard something approaching. Tap tap, tap tap. The metallic sound of footsteps reached their place as they both looked over the origin of it. Walking down the corridor, both tensed their bodies as they eyed the figure of the lavender-haired girl in Saiyan armor. Celery stopped in her tracks once she saw the various figures alongside Cielo. Raising her right eyebrow, she asked, "And who are these three? Who captured them?" Her questions were directed to Cielo, who looked at the Saiyan girl with clear animosity on her part. Yet she answered, "Bann brought them." Hearing her calling him for his name, made Celery furrow her brows in annoyance and seem to forget about the new prisoners. "When did you get so familiar with him? Tell me." The little girl appeared in front of Cielo, who was surprised by the sudden action and fell to her back. Eyeing the eyes of the demon girl, Cielo quickly recomposed herself and looked with rage at Celery as she answered, "I don't need to answer such a thing, you wretched fiend." Celery narrowed her eyes at her response and attitude. Grabbing Cielo by her neck, she lowered her childish voice to an ice tone. "Don't get funny ideas in your head, you bug. None of you humans will be enough for him," she hissed as she threw her down. Celery summoned her inner energy and focused it on the tip of her finger. With a steady hand, she pointed directly at Cielo, who gazed back at her without flinching or showing any signs of fear or discomfort. "I should kill you now since you are no longer of purpose. We have already defeated the human armies and now we control this world." Letting out the energy, Celery watched as the key impacted the battle sister chest and fell. She then moved her eyes towards the three other humans and after seeing the hateful glare that Augusta was giving her, let out a humph of annoyance and moved inside the base, looking for a seat to wait until everyone came back. Watching the Saiyan walk inside, Augusta looked over Cielo's body, which lay motionless on the floor. Gulping down, Augusta made the Aquila sign and closed her eyes. Enough blood was spilled today. Yet a couple of seconds later she felt a golden flash passing through her eyelids, making her open them both in a hurry to witness a miracle. Cielo was staring back at her with a confused expression. The Sister Superior showcased a consternate look on her face while she touched her chest area. Upon closer inspection, the chest plate worn by Cielo revealed a tiny circular gap, barely larger than the width of a finger. The gap was situated directly over her chest, where her heart lay beating beneath the protective armor. As the Cotter and the Battle Sister exchanged glances, they were both struck with a sense of disbelief. As Augusta gazed upon the daunting gap in Cielo's armor, her hand trembled slightly as she summoned the courage to make the Aquila sign. Cielo watched intently, mirroring Augusta's movements as she too closed her eyes and delved into her memories of the experience. It was a moment she would never forget, a moment when Cielo felt as if all the air had been sucked from her lungs, and her strength was rapidly draining away. But then, in a burst of warmth and light, a fierce fire ignited within her chest, renewing her spirit and awakening her to the power within. If she previously held any doubt, it was all but dispersed. "I shall say this chance you have given me to see your wish and command be done, my Emperor." Cielo prayed with conviction while feeling tears streaming down her face. "The Emperor, he healed you." Augusta could only mutter in disbelief. Swoosh swoosh, tap 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 tap. Yet before Cielo could utter a word, they both heard the arrival of two more Saiyans. Cielo didn't mind them as she closed her eyes again and decided to keep thanking and praying to the Emperor. Augusta looked with trepidation towards the corridor until the figure of Ramela made herself visible while an annoyed expression was all over her face. "That idiot of Aprit. Did you see him touching that woman's body? He is staying back because of her." Ramela fumed in anger as she let out her frustration. "And you too, big brother? If I didn't look for you would be doing the same." She stumped her feet to the ground as she turned around and stared at her brother. Rukul walked over with confidence on each step as he hastily scanned over the corner where the four hostages were currently as he answered Ramela. "He's just finishing the touches of the negotiations, and I'm of age to fancy women, little sis. Remember that." He then pointed with his chin towards Augusta, Gannicus, and the guardsman as he exclaimed, more importantly, there seems to be more guests brought by either Celery or Bann. Walking over them he saw Augusta looking fearful at him while she tried to cover with her body at the Inquisitor. Seeing her antics made a grin appear on Rukule's face as he eyed from head to toe the woman. The woman's hood was pulled low over her head, casting a shadow over her face. Despite this, her presence was captivating. She seemed to radiate a certain charm that drew people to her. Her features were delicate and feminine, with a small, perfectly proportioned nose and full, lush lips that seemed to beg to be kissed. Her skin was smooth and despite a scar on her cheek, she had a healthy glow. Even with her face obscured by the hood, there was no mistaking the fact that she was a vision to behold. As the fabric of her robe draped over her body and her armor encased her form, it struggled to wholly obscure the contours of her figure. The swell of her hips and the arch of her back were still visible, tempting the gaze of any onlooker. Despite the modesty of her attire, her voluptuous curves were strikingly apparent. It was a fine woman, one that Rukule seemed eager to know. Crouching, he tilted his head sideways as he asked who you might be, miss. Yet before he could get an answer from Augusta, a deep voice resonated through the base as Cielo, Augusta, and Ramela looked over the figure that walked in. She's a spoil of war, mine to be more precise, Bann spoke while he walked over to a seat in the middle of the room. Looking over the direction of the corner she was scurried into, Bann stared back at Augusta, who gulped down while eyeing him. Although she didn't understand a word he said, his fierce glare made her shiver. Her right hand moved to search for something to grasp, finding only the armor of the Inquisitor who lay still unconscious. Chapter 20. Control. After briefly speaking with Rukule and Ramela regarding their negotiations, Bann was pleased by their attitudes. His teammates' attitude, to be more precise. It seemed that most Syans weren't pieces of shit when they wanted. Aside from the cockiness that both Ramela and Rukule boasted, and how they flexed their strength against the nobles, they did a good job of not only gaining the temporary loyalty of the nobles but also skillfully elucidating the advantages of the regime change. Well, since we've already finished with the first step, tomorrow I'll be heading to Redentia to finish the details with them, and in the following days, I'll be doing the same with the other cities. Your job now would be gathering their scholars and bringing them here so they can start learning. Someone would have had to keep an eye on them though, Bann told them while he rested over the seat. Ramela perked up her head with interest as she asked him what's in for the person that stays looking over the weaklings. Her tail uncoiled from her waist as it swayed behind her. Bann grinned at her while answering with amusement, if it's anyone else, nothing. But if it's you then you will receive head pats. He made a thoughtful face as if saying something worthy. Yet Ramela was exactly expecting such a thing as her face lit up as she clasped her hands. Yes. Then I'll be looking over them. Seeing her puppy eyes, Bann smiled fondly at her while answering, then it's settled. You'll be getting daily head pats until they learn everything they need. As he said that, he opened both arms and Ramela launched herself while hugging him. She closed her eyes as she enjoyed the warmth that her other big brother often gave her. Eyeing his sister with a frown at her display, Rukule tried to change the conversation as he asked, so what's the reason to bring them? There's no need for hostages in our situation. In Rukule's opinion, with Faradras at their mercy, there wasn't any threat of letting the Inquisitor and his cotter be freed to hold them as spoils of war. Eyeing the corner where they sit and lay, Bann answered Rukule in low Gothic, the woman has useful abilities that I wish to know more about. The Inquisitor is someone with great standing in the Imperium and his death would be troublesome for us in the meantime. He then looked over the female guardsman and a fire stirred on his loins at the memory of her smell. Ramela, who was laying almost asleep in Bann's embrace, was suddenly aware of the hard and big thing poking her lower back. Opening her eyes wide, she eyed Bann's face from her position with a flushed expression. Yet none paid attention to her. And that woman would be one of my concubines. There's something with her that I found intriguing, Bann said with a hoarse tone. Ramela, who never bothered learning Low Gothic, remained ignorant of his words, while Rukule nodded his head at Bann's words, seemingly aware of what he was saying. Though Augusta looked deeply perturbed at the fate of the guardsman and couldn't help but feel pity for her, but also anger towards Bann. She has a fine smell. Nice pick, said Rukule as he crossed both arms on his chest. He then pointed to himself with his thumb as he boasted, I have already laid my eyes on 2 humans with a decent amount of ki. They would make fine mothers to bear strong children. Knowing your taste, they have to be fine women. I don't expect any less from you. Heh, Bann said with a half smile while he kept caressing Ramela's head. I'm curious to see whether it's true or not that hybrids are stronger than us. The files in the computers didn't explain too much in that regard. Rukule caressed his chin while seemed thoughtful. Watch your mouth, Bann warned him in their mother language as he eyed Augusta and the Inquisitor. Although he was confident in his strength and the knowledge he had from Dragon Ball, that didn't mean he wanted the Imperium or other forces to get their hands on sensitive information like this. After all, the various races in Warhammer possessed the technology to not only clone them, but mass-produce hybrids in industrial outputs. As such, Bann was extremely cautious in giving information to others that weren't from their circle. Rukule seemed to realize his mistake and excused himself, sorry, I forgot for a moment. Ramela opened her eyes and while trying not to look so flushed asked what happened. Yet she only received a caress on her cheek as Bann answered her, nothing important, just a mishap from your brother. Ramela closed her eyes as she pressed her head at Bann's hand while sighing in enjoyment. Meanwhile, Bann shouted, Celery, come out. He has already felt Celery's presence eavesdropping on them. They all heard a tch and saw the lavender-haired girl walking out from the corridor that led to their rooms. She eyed both Ramila and Ban with clear dissatisfaction. Seeing her attitude, Rukul couldn't help but exclaim, "What's making you so snappy? You look like a rabid dog," only to receive dagger eyes from the girl. "Is none of your business," she snarled at him while looking back again at Ban. "And what do you want?" The latter never stopped caressing Ramila, who was now humming in enjoyment as he said, "You haven't reported yet how it went, your negotiations." The girl stared at him for a couple of seconds. She then let out a deep sigh and closed her eyes while saying, "It went okay. I had to kill one woman who didn't want to comply. She made a good example, so I didn't need to showcase anything." They all had agreed but raised their concerns regarding the planet governor's retaliation. Hearing her words, Ban nodded his head while he decided to tell them his actions. "I have already taken care of that. I've killed the governor and now his throne is taken by us. This leads me to what I wanted to tell you all." He patted Ramila's cheek with carefulness as he motioned her to get up. He then raised to his feet and told them, "There are 3 ships up in the space station. I've killed some of the officers, but I'm torn in whether to destroy those ships or not." He gestured with his hands to let them finish him. "Those ships held enough firepower to lay waste this whole world. We don't know if the Imperial Guard would retreat without firing at this world. So I don't know, what should we do?" He raised his arms to cross his chest as he stared at his teammates. Celery looked unable to understand his reasoning and told him, "We'll destroy those ships and kill the Imperial Guard. Isn't that easy?" She eyed Rukul and Ramila and saw that both agreed with her assessment. Yet Ban shook his head as he eyed Cielo and told them, "I cannot do such a thing. I promised Cielo, the woman you brought, Celery, that I will not kill her battle sister and let them escape from this system. They would need a certain amount of troops and those ships for doing such a thing." Rukul showcased a tired look while he let out a sigh of frustration. Yet he understood the reasoning of Ban. However, Celery snorted at his response and told him, "Luckily I have already disposed of that trash. She's now dead, so you don't need to hold your words." There was a slight grin on the girl's face. Yet Ban looked at her dumbfounded and pointed at Cielo, "But she's praying right there. What are you talking about?" Making Celery snap around and look with open eyes at the sight. The pious image of the battle sister on her knees with her rosary in her hands, with both eyes closed while her blonde hair fell over her back. Flabbergasted Celery stuttered, "That's impossible. I killed her." Yet she tried to gather ki at her finger to kill the woman once again, only to see her hand being taken by Ban's tight grip. Turning her head to look at him, she saw a pissed look on Ban's face as he asked her, "What do you think you are doing?" She then felt Ban's ki entering her body and dispersing the energy on her finger. With her neck raised to look at him, she babbled for a moment until she said with resolution, "I'll kill her. She's going to be a nuance." Ban narrowed his eyes as he looked at her while he said slowly, "That woman will survive. She's going to be useful and I'm not one to break his words." With those words, he freed Celery's arms and walked forward towards Cielo. The battle sister, feeling someone approaching, only gave a side glance, until she realized it was Ban the one doing so, making her stop with her praying and getting on her feet. Standing tall at 6 feet and 1 inch in height, she raised her chin while she eyed with pious eyes at Ban, who stopped after getting at 1 arm's length from her. "I apologize on behalf of my team. You're a guest now and she shouldn't have attacked you. Are you okay?" Ban didn't bow but looked at Cielo with such sincere eyes that made the woman let out a subtle smile while she shook her head. "You don't need to apologize on behalf of others. I should, however, thank your teammate, as thanks to her I was bathed into the blazing fire of the Emperor and given a purpose." Ban, who was unable to understand her meaning, looked at her at loss and asked, "What do you mean by that?" As Cielo heard his question, a wide smile formed on her face while she brought both hands toward the place where she was shot and explained, "The Emperor's light retrieved me back from the hands of death and healed my wounds. It is his will to see me standing in front of you." Augusta, who was looking at the scene with caution, couldn't help but furrow her brows and narrow her eyes. Some things in her head started to click. Meanwhile, Ban was surprised by her words and couldn't help but approach Cielo out of reflex and ask her, "That's a big thing, right?" Seeing his lost expression made Cielo let out a smile while nodding. "Indeed, only those of exceptional faith and incredible feats are given the honor of being bathed in the baptizing fire of he who sits on Terra." Ban, who didn't know what to say, just nodded his head and said a simple congratulations, as he then looked over Augusta. As they both stared at each other, silence permeated the room until Ban opened his mouth. "Do you know where I can find a helmet or something that works in the space?" Augusta was taken aback by the sudden answer, clearly not expecting such a question. Shaking her head sideways, she answered negatively. Yet Ban, who wanted to bring the acolyte to the space station, was hoping the woman could pull out something. She was the key to explaining the warp fuckery to the Syans. Eyeing the Inquisitor, he pushed further. "The Inquisitor would be safe and sound whilst you cooperate with us. I need you somewhere, and to reach that place we need to fly through the space." Augusta instinctively tried to cover Gannicus from Ban's gaze, yet when she heard Ban blackmailing her, she eyed him with furious while gritting her teeth. Gulping down the bitter taste of her anger, she tried to remember something that could be useful, until a memory of their travel towards this planet came to her mind and made her exclaim, "The Imperial Navy officers should have 1 or 2 suits that can work in the void." Hearing her answer, Ban nodded his head as he turned around and said to his teammates, "Then that is, you'll be staying here looking after her while I return to get this suit or whatever." After getting nods of agreement, he looked over Cielo and said to her, "You can settle yourself and her." He pointed towards the guardsman in my room, "Since I'm not going to sleep here today." "As you wish." Cielo answered him while she approached the guardsman and carried her through the corridor. "It's the last one." Ban shouted at her. Receiving the cold glares from Celery and Ramila, he smiled and exclaimed, "Let's move then. There's work to do and things to talk about." And with those parting words, he flew away, leaving behind a gust of wind.